the city of Venice, and a fitting beginning for the 92nd edition of the Giro d'Italia and the 100th year of being for this great race. Hello everyone, I'm Phil Liggett. Welcome to this special extended video of the Giro d'Italia from World Cycling Productions. Alongside me, Paul Sherwin, the 22 teams here welcoming back into the fold Ivan Basso and none other than Lance Armstrong, tackling the Giro d'Italia for the very first time as he comes back into the sport. Paul, even the boys went for a row after this.
They certainly did. What a great place to start. It certainly is, I think, going to be a great battle over the next 3 weeks of bike racing. And of course, starting right here in the very heart of Venice with a team time trial, which I think everybody has got themselves very psyched up for.
Well, the race, as Paul has said, is over 21 stages, 3,500 the overall kilometrage of the event, 198 riders on the start line. Is Lance Armstrong. It's hard to imagine he's back in the sport, but he himself could never imagine a year ago he would be standing on the start line of the centenary edition of the Giro d'Italia. Now we're opening with a team time trial here. It's on the Lido di Venezia, which is an island just off Venice itself. Very flat, of course, as they race up and down what really is a grassed over sandbank. And the rides themselves will cover a total distance of 20.5 kilometres. And that the one team that has concentrated its whole Giro on this day is the Garmin Slipstream team.
Well, the team time trial, Phil, is all about preparation, knowing just exactly which riders you're going to put up onto the line and how you're going to ride in formation. Going out very early on, though, Team Columbia High Road looked to be performing very well.
Yes, this was the first team to go, an enviable position because they wanted to do a good time from the start, and they were certainly putting down the hammer here as they came up along the lead over the finish, stopping the clock 21 minutes and 47 seconds as they hit the line. First rider over the line, Mark Cavendish. Now, the winning team, of course, will crown the first rider of their team in the first wearer of the Maglia Rosa. This is Garmin out on course.
Well, they've got a lot of very big specialists. A new man on Garmin, Bradley Wiggins, 2 Olympic gold medals for him last year, and a man who was a specialist at the short, fast prologues. But here he's turning his hand to the team time trial, and he's become an integral part of this squad, of course, with the very experienced Christian van der Velde, who I think is looking a little bit further down, Phil, and thinking about the possibility of a high finish here at the Giro and, of course, at the Tour de France as well.
Well, the two American teams being engaged in a lot of friendly banter, or was it so friendly, as they've started sort of throwing one or two comments about each other and the way they're riding this team time trial. ISD here, Team Katusha plus 3 seconds, sitting in second place, ISD at the moment. It is a super course, but totally flat, and it really brings out the skills of the riders in the squad here. This is Slipstream coming home, still aiming at Columbia High Road's time. It's going to be very, very close here. 21:50 is the official time. Stop the clock for Team Columbia. And Garmin Slipstream, remember, have put all of their eggs into one basket for this race. It is going to be desperately close here, but it's gone by. And Garmin will not be the fastest team as they were a year ago when it was Christian van der Velde who took on the Maglia Rosa.
Well, they've slipped by 6 seconds slower than Team High Road there, Phil. I think that will be a big shock for them. You can see out on the course now, it's Team Astana. Hard to believe that this discipline that Lance Armstrong so loved, he's back now. There he is with the black helmet at the end of the line of Team Astana riders there in a Grand Tour after 3.5 years. It seems to have gone by in the blink of an eye.
And let's not forget that Lance is riding this event having coming back from a broken collarbone. That was his biggest fear of the season, and it happened in a race in Spain, and now he's having to make a comeback. So he really is battling the odds here, and maybe has opened the door there for a chance to ride not quite at the level we might expect. We'll see. LPR breaks here, which are also a top team on the race this year.
Well, this is ISD coming into the line. They're looking at the time here of Garmin Slipstream, who've slipped themselves into second place. Katusha are currently holding on to third. ISD, I have to say, for one of the smaller teams in the Giro d'Italia, Phil, this is a very fine performance.
Well, 5 riders. The clock stops with the 5th man here. They brought most of the riders up the start straight. It's going to be quicker than Team Katusha, so they're going to slot in to that 3rd slot at the moment with 22:17. So that's a very good start for them.
Still a lot of big teams, I think, would like to get themselves the victory here. Just looking at the back, Team High Road, this is Mark Cavendish here in the area just to the side of the finishing line here, Phil, wondering whether or not his team have done enough to have the fastest time. They were actually one of the teams who started very early on And a long wait for them.
They started number 1, and the fact is that they're being held in the start area because the leading team is not allowed to leave the area, because they'll be the ones up on the podium if it becomes best time. And at the moment, it is very definitely staying that way. This is LPR Brakes coming in now, Danilo De Luca's boys, and they're coming in at 22.12 plus 22 seconds. This is beginning to look rather good for Team Columbia High Road.
Yes, but look at the average speed of this team time trial, Phil, 55 kilometres an hour. Now, Team Astana, in the days of Lance Armstrong, they were formidable at this discipline. They're going around the corner there. They've got themselves about 15 seconds to get to the finish line. But I'll tell you one thing, Phil, this is a long straight.
It's a long straight. It won't be enough time to get down here to the line, so Astana won't be knocking Team Columbia High Road off the top, but they are going to come in with a very, very good time here and bringing home what looks like all of their team together. The Astana boys now with their familiar leader in Lance Armstrong, although I think Levi Leipheimer is likely the man. As they go up to the line, 22 minutes, just over 22 minutes, and they've gone into 3rd place. That's a good performance.
Yes, but did you see who crossed the line in 1st place at the line of these riders? It was the man in the black helmet, the Live Strong helmet there. Armstrong, just like in days gone by, Phil, trying to assert his authority as the leader of this squad.
He just loves cycle racing. It's as pure and simple as that. He loves to be in the thick of it. He's highly competitive. But the win has gone to Team Columbia High Road here at 21.50. Garmin Slipstream is 2nd, and they'll be pretty upset about that, I think. They were hoping to win that today. Astana will be very happy with a 13-second deficit in 3rd place. But what it means, Paul, is that Mark Cavendish becomes the very first British cyclist to wear the Maglia Rosa.
That is really phenomenal. This young man, I think he knows how to rise to the big occasions, and he'll be the very first, I would say, Phil, once he gets down from that podium to say thank you very much to Team Columbia High Road, because he's always the first man to praise his squad.
Well, Mark Cavendish, the dream continues for this young man. He's undeniably the fastest sprinter on the block right now. But more than that, I think, and he hasn't got to face up to Robbie McEwen in this year's Giro either, his arch rival in the sprints. He now pulls on the first leader's jersey. Of course, all 9 riders from Team Columbia High Road, because they were the fastest team, are at the top of the overall classification. Then follows all the men from the Garmin Slipstream team, and then follows all the men from Lance Armstrong's Astana team. Lance himself slotting in at 15th place overall. But there is the Maglia Rosa, and Mark Cavendish has added another notch to his bell.
Well, he certainly has. He's going to have a tough day out on the open road now, Phil, because with the Maglia Rosa on his shoulders, he's got to try and keep that Maglia Rosa within the squad. Maybe try to put it to one side, because, yes, that was probably an early goal, but now it's about winning stages.
Yes, and these early stages are allegedly for the sprinters. We move on to the 2nd day of the race. We go from Jesolo to Trieste, 156 kilometres. The Aqua Saponi team here, they get the first slot. Stefano Garzelli is the former winner of this race back in 2000. He heads up that team. Massive crowd, of course. This race immensely popular, and they're all seeming very happy with the return of Ivan Basso, himself a former winner. Franco Pelazzotti signing on. I wonder what he holds as we head out towards the hills in the 4th day of this race.
Well, this is the race route that the riders will face, and moving away from the Lido, leaving Venice behind them now. It's a very flat course on the first opening day. They pretty much circumnavigate the border around Venice and Trieste to finish right in the heart of Trieste, a very famous port town.
Well, these are the early days of the Giro, of course, now, and the sun is with us at the moment as we're mid down the country itself, which is shaped like a Wellington boot, as we know. The riders now getting to know one another. They're going to be alongside each other for the next 3 weeks. And Lance Armstrong, as I say, he's never ridden this race before. And who would have thought he would be coming back from his last victory in the Tour de France in 2005 to ride it now?
And I have to say that, Phil, over the early part of the season, I have to think that his form was absolutely formidable. He came back very competitive in the month of January. Looking down there, it really is, for us as Brits, very pleasant to see Mark Cavendish there wearing the Maglia Rosa. What a special occasion for him.
Well, the riders chasing sprint points out on course here. There was a breakaway very early on today, getting away after 9 kilometres. Leonardo Scarzelli of ISD. We haven't seen any pictures of him yet. But he's still out there as the riders are battling here and crossing swords for the small sprint bonus. This is Philippe Gilbert. Remember, Gilbert is the power to the arm of Cadel Evans, probably for the Tour de France. But here, he's free to race for himself.
And it's Pipo Pozzato coming across the line there. These riders, Phil, looking for their little time bonuses out on the open course. Philippe Gilbert really trying to open up the account of Team Silence Lotto this year. They have had a terrible season so far. This is the team from basically Belgium, but they have got the diversification of having riders like Cadel Evans on board. But this year they've had so much aggression from the Belgian press because they just don't seem to have performed.
Well, I just wonder if Mark Cavendish there, he's catching a little bit of a bump as he comes round that left-hand bend. He doesn't seem to be in trouble on these small climbs here. There's no major climbs today, just little ripples. Only one official climb out on the course, which came at 140 kilometres. There's the breakaway now, trying to get clear. Gilbert, Gasparotto, Pozzato. Pozzato, I think, will want to show himself, possibly early on today, as they run away to head round back towards that finish again. Scarzelli himself has been swept up. And we didn't get any pictures of him, I'm afraid, but he's back in the pack as far as we can work out. Just the peloton chasing.
Clever little move there by Pipo Pozzato. These riders realise that in the opening stages they've got a very good chance of getting themselves the lead in the Giro d'Italia. They're leading by 12 seconds over the front end of the main field. This, I have to say, Phil, is a very strong and dangerous move because Philippe Gilbert is regarded as a one-day classics rider, so too is Pipo Pozzato. And having Gasparotto up there as well is some serious firepower. If the main field wants to catch those men, they're really going to have to get organised.
Well, Cavendish is going to feel that this is one stage where he can gain a little bit more time and wear that pink jersey again tomorrow if he can win the sprint. Came to his first Giro d'Italia last year and certainly left his mark on this race. Pozzato just flickered the arm there to say come on through. Scarzelli, wearing his Champion of Italy flushes on his sleeves as well, as three riders go over the top and 3 kilometres to go to the finish.
Yes, big organisation now. It looks like Danilo De Luca's squad, LPR, who've come to the front to try and sort out the front end of the main field. They realise the dangerousness of those three men. There they are. It's not very much more, Phil, than around about 5 seconds. Gilbert in the red jersey of Silence Lotto swinging over to try and see what's going on behind. Well, there it is. I think the Italians will now utter the words Gruppo Compacto.
Well, this is a route which is not really for the sprinters this year. We have a lot of great climbs on this route as we unwind over the 3 weeks. So it's one really that the likes of Pataki and Mark Cavendish will not want to throw away as they now start to go through. And it looks as though Cavendish has got himself in a good position. 7th wheel at the moment. I didn't catch sight of Pataki there, Paul, but he's got to be there.
Well, he has to be there because his team is at the front making the organisation. Now it's the turn of Garmin Slipstream to get themselves organised, and this could very well be for their man Tyler Farrar.
Absolutely, and a chance here for them to make amends for yesterday. They were disappointed in that team time trial. I think they were wrong to advertise the fact that they were building so much for that team time trial, as if the race ended after one day. It didn't work out for them, but nonetheless they're very much at the head of the first now. Columbia High Road are weaving their way through. Cavendish has got third wheel to the right of our picture and beginning to look very strong now as they start to go through. A Garmin Slipstream also have got their man through in Tyler Farrar. I'm still looking for Pataki here at the moment.
Well, Pataki will be looking for the victory. There's a big move there on the left-hand side of the road. A bit of confusion. These riders now starting to get themselves lined up for the final kilometre, looking to take one final bend in. This is a great finish for the sprinters here this afternoon. Cavendish is very well positioned there, Phil, in third place in the line, just behind his teammates.
That looks like a Saxo Bank rider who's made the move at the front there as they go round a short right-hand bender. They've split the field with this move completely in two halves. They might get a separate time here because I don't think it's been caused by a crash, which would mean they get the same time. But Columbia High Road have got themselves well organised. Pataki is right up there now. It looks like Pataki and Farrar are fighting for the back wheel of Mark Cavendish. 3 sprinters here are going for gold at the moment. Well inside the last kilometre as they line up towards the finish now. Pataki is looking sharp again. Well, he certainly is, but you know he's marking his sprint this afternoon on the wheel of Mark Cavendish. It's still Columbia High Road at the front end of the main field, very much in control there. You can see Cavendish moving up into second position. I think he's much too far to the front there. No, he's actually in third. Pataki, Phil, is right on his wheel there in the white jersey. Well, this is a big challenge here for the Italian now because everybody thinks he's no longer as quick as the old days and certainly not as quick as Mark Cavendish. And here comes the perfect Columbia High Road lead out because they really have the man we now call the Manx missile. And when they launch him, there are very few people can match him. But Pataki has gone first. And in fact, Cavendish has taken his wheel here. He's going to have to come by him quickly. 25 metres to go. Well, that is a true sprint. And Pataki is going to be delighted with that, Paul, because Cav could not come off his wheel.
Well, I tell you one thing, Pataki did not have the lead-out train that he's had in the past here this afternoon. He had to do that sprint on his own, and he took the initiative when they came into that last bend, and he led the race as he likes to do from the front, and Cavendish had nothing to offer. Cavendish could not come off his wheel, and that's a great win by Alessandro Pataki, the man we used to call Ale Jet. Well, I think he's back too.
Well, that's also his 8th win of the year, so he's been slipping them in here. Now, depending on who you believed, did he have a clutch of stage wins in the Giro d'Italia a couple of years ago, or did he in fact have them disqualified for drug use elsewhere? He says he didn't, but the organisers tend to say he did, so it looks like he's now got a total of 21 stage wins. Well, he'll tell you it should be 26.
This is the move here, Phil. You see the big acceleration, a little slowing down there. Immediately you see Cavendish try to get across to the wheel of Alessandro Pataki. Pataki hugging the barriers there, making Cavendish have to come around on the left-hand side if he wants to, but you know, Pataki has got so much power. Once he gets the big turbo whistling, he really is a difficult man to beat. But to just put a cap on what you were saying there about the drug scandal surrounding Alessandro Pataki, it was in fact an asthma drug which was over the level of tolerance of the international governing bodies that had those victories stripped away from him. But I tell you one thing, this man has certainly still got the speed that he had many years ago.
Well, he's back for the first time since he was disqualified for stages 3, 7, 11, 18 and 21 in the Giro of 2007. A moment he doesn't like to talk about, and that's why I think right now he's totally delighted on 2 counts. 1, he is back in the Giro as a stage winner, and 2, he's just beaten Mark Cavendish in what to me looked like a very straight sprint. The big surprise, Paul, Ben Swift, the youngster. He's even younger than Mark Cavendish from Great Britain, who is now riding for Team Katusha, and that will please the boys.
And Tyler Farrar up there in 5th place as well. Looking a bit further down, you can see Sylvain Chavanel riding fairly well there in 14th place. But that was a great win by Alessandro Pataki, and I think we're going to see some great duels over the next couple of days. Although, as you said, Phil, this is not really a Giro d'Italia for the sprinters this year.
Well, if Cavendish follows the way of Robin McEwen of old, he won't see the finish this time around. He'll be pulled from the race, but we'll see. He's in the pink jersey by 14 seconds over Mark Renshaw. His lead-out man, by the way, Mark, in the sprints, Michael Rogers. He's a good long-term bet for Team Columbia High Road. He seems to be regaining his old form after injury and sickness. And the youngster there, Lofquist, well, he's right up there in 4th place as well. Time gap's nothing at the moment, just the bonus is causing the problems, I think.
Well, that will change very shortly because only a couple of days into the Giro d'Italia, Phil, this year we've got a mountaintop finish, and that will be the first serious sorting out. But for the moment, another day in the pink for Mark Cavendish, another day that he can enjoy out on the roads of the Giro.
So as he shows them how to spray the champagne, what he might do, we move on to stage 3 now as we move away from Grado to Val d'Obbiadena. 198 kilometres, so the mileage is slowly going up here. Day 4, by the way, that gives us our taste of the mountains for the very first time. It's coming very early on in this year's Giro, and it won't be a day tomorrow for Mark Cavendish, but with a bit of luck, he could keep his Maglia Rosa today.
That's what he'll be banking on. That's what Team Columbia High Road will be banking on as well, as we see once again a fairly flat stage as the riders leave Trieste and the Mediterranean away behind them. Again, everybody wanting to see this man, number 21, Lance Armstrong, signing in.
Yes, Armstrong, the man, he's still pulling the crowds. His team bus is attracting everybody every morning at the start line. It is amazing, but I think the majority of the riders are pleased to see him back because it brings a new profile to his sport. Stefano Garzelli, head shave for the day. In fact, for the next 3 weeks, because he won't have a lot of time to go and visit the barbers.
I think one thing you mentioned there about Armstrong and his return, Phil, it has really been a global return for the sport of professional cycling, because not only has it been talked about massively in Europe, it's been talked about around the whole of the globe, and even in Africa, where I live, we've been talking a lot about the return of Lance Armstrong to the top of the sport. Can he win the Giro d'Italia? Well, I don't think this year because of that injury you mentioned, but also I think he's going to be very competitive when we go to the month of July and the Tour de France.
That looks like Alessandro Pataki's signature, doesn't it?
Yes, that was Alessandro Pataki, and he's putting it onto the Ciclamina jersey because that's the one I think that he would seriously like to have at the end of 3 weeks.
So as we now slowly move away, the sprinters might be thinking there's only 1/3 category climb on this day. If they can get over the top of that, they can cross swords again. Cav will not be happy, having lost out to Alessandro Pataki. Pataki, in the papers this morning, is very happy with what he achieved yesterday. Italian Air Force, and there's the Italian flag.
I wonder if they're there for Ali Jet, Alessandro Petacchi here this afternoon, because he was certainly the fast man yesterday, proving to us why he's back at the top end of the sport. Now, how about that for a fancy bike for Mr. Armstrong?
Yes, they'll be sold out by this time tomorrow, I would think. There's Lance pedalling there, number 21. Having a nice little chat here with the new man on the block. I remember that when Lance announced his comeback, Mark Cavendish said, "I've got no heroes in the sport, but I'll consider it an honour if I ride in the same peloton as Lance," which I thought was pretty nice.
Oh, certainly, and I think Mark has got a lot of respect from Lance Armstrong, who says some very nice things about Mark Cavendish on his Twitter. There's a little crash there at the back. Just one of those, as the referees like to call Phil, shoot sans gravité, but that doesn't like sans gravité to me. That looks a little bit like Christian van der Velde on the ground.
And I don't like the way he sat there. In fact, that's Zabisky who's come up alongside him.
Well, that was a crazy crash. It was a simple crash just over to the right-hand side of the road, but it doesn't look to me as if Van der Velde is getting up from that one, Phil.
Well, this is, I have to say, a terribly sad sight, because surely Van der Velde's tour isn't ending right here now, but the riders have gone on, and he is holding himself extremely still. He is very tentative indeed. It looks to me, Paul, as though he could have fractured his pelvis here, the way he's sitting there, and I hope I'm totally wrong.
Well, it's hard to say, to make predictions from the air. Only the doctors can do that down on the ground, but he certainly, Phil, doesn't look to me like a man who's going to get up from an accident. And the worst crashes you can have as a professional athlete, Phil, are always the ones that are slow. I think there's a little problem a bit further up the road as well.
And this is a further shunt here. Lopez Garcia, I think that is. And it's Ben Swift who joined him here. It's actually the first time I've ever seen Ben Swift, the young English international, who's now pro this year. And it's David Lopez Garcia who's crashed with him. No panic from Swift. Now, what's happened now? We've stopped again here.
Well, I think the only reason for this must be that the road has got completely blocked by another accident out on the open road. You see, the Giro d'Italia is dangerous. I'm not sure what's going on here, but there's obviously been a serious pile-up there. There's a lot of riders got some big problems, and they're trying to get themselves going again.
Well, it looks to me as though the riders who are up and riding have sort of neutralised the race here to allow the peloton to regroup, because that is a tangled mess down there. But at least they're getting away. It doesn't look as though there's anybody hurt in this one. This isn't the crash which has involved Christian van der Velde, who we hear is not continuing, which is really, really sad. And what a difference a year makes. He was in the pink jersey, and now he's out of this race at such an early stage, the third day of the Giro d'Italia.
Well, I tell you what, that's going to put paid to his chances, I think, Phil, of the Tour de France, because he was looking at this race here to get himself fine-tuned for the Tour de France a little bit later on, to prove that he is a man who can finish on the top step of the podium. There's a little bit of a sortie going on here, and this is a group I think that probably formed because of that accident just a little bit further back.
I've just got that feeling they're not really hammering it home here, Paul. They're a little bit concerned about should they race or should they wait, is the attitude. There's Mark Cavendish, and I think he is behind just now. Got one teammate with him there trying to reorganise everything. There was a breakaway, by the way. It got away very early on, 5 riders after 5 kilometres. Again, no pictures. We've swept them up as we approach the last 5 kilometres of the day. Mauro Facci, who was in the breakaway, won the only climb at Combai, followed by Bjorn Schroeder of Milram and Yuri Krivtsov of AG2R. But they're all back in the fold now.
In the Ciclamina jersey there is Alessandro Petacchi, looking very comfortable now in that points leaders jersey. Competition that in the past he's been the winner of, and he's got his teammates on the front. This is Team LPR, the team of Danilo De Luca. Very difficult for them because they're looking at two things out of the Giro d'Italia here, to try and get themselves stage victories forward at Alessandro Petacchi, but also to try and get themselves the big victory if they can for their man Danilo De Luca, D'Aquila.
Well, one would presume that today the affections are running the way of Petacchi, and Danilo De Luca perhaps making a play tomorrow when the mountains come with a mountain top finish, but we'll see. Certainly they've got themselves back in here. The peloton is largely all back up. We are hearing that Christian van der Velde has been put into the ambulance and has gone to hospital, so that is quite a serious injury. 15 seconds the gap.
The gap back to the group of the Maglia Rosa, so
yeah.
You can see at the front end of the main field they're not even concerned about the position of Mark Cavendish. He was caught out in a little bit of an accident there. He's trying to get himself back into the event here this afternoon, Phil, because what he's thinking about is keeping the Maglia Rosa on his shoulders for one more day, but to do that he has to stay in contact with the pack.
Well, as time runs out, the sprinters are going to have a go. 3.9 kilometres to go. This is a rough one for poor old Mark Cavendish here, because in 3-4 kilometres, if he gets on, he's going to have legs to get to the front.
But what you will notice as well is the referees, Phil, have pulled out all of the cars. They're making what they call in French a barrage. They're making sure that the gap between the main field and the Maglia Rosa group has got no cars in it at all, so Cavendish can't use the cars to get himself back into the main field. And with this slightly uphill finish here, I think he's going to have a hard time getting back on. In fact, I think he's given up, because there, 25 seconds, the run into the finish is uphill, so I think for Cav, it's day over.
But the sad thing is, it's going to be the jersey over too, because if he loses that time, then the jersey's going to pass on. A small time bonus again for the winner today. Cavendish winning his yellow jersey, sorry, his Maglia Rosa jersey when he won the team time trial for his team. Pataki got yesterday, and Pataki's the next likely candidate now, especially if he takes out this stage and gets himself a small bonus. And that is why the team now are riding for Pataki. They are well aware that Cavendish is dangling at the back and beginning to crack.
Well, Pataki's in about 5th or 6th position, not far away from the front end of that group as well. In the lime green jersey of Liquigas is Ivan Basso, followed by Pellizotti. And this is Life at the back, and you can see this is a very difficult run into the finish line. Danilo De Luca is in 2nd place. He'll be waiting to see whether or not Pataki has stayed at the front end of the main field. Look at Pataki there. This is the man. He's got the bit between the teeth. He's probably trying to taste whether or not he can get himself enough time bonus seconds, Phil, to get himself the jersey back, because he's made a massive leap up the overall standings this afternoon. And there is a move at 3 kilometres to go.
That looks like an attack by Bushirine there. He's just shot off the front. That's an opportunist move. He's only won a couple of stages, always time trials in this race. But this is a cheeky little move now by Bushirine as he tries to get clear of the field. A very definite attempt. He might have a chance here.
Well, I tell you what, you think about how difficult it is to bring the Tour de France into some of the small cities and villages around the countryside, but here in Italy they don't seem to care at all. Have you seen how narrow some of these roads are?
Oh, it's a wonderful country to go cycling in, not necessarily to ride a bike race in, but unfortunately every village they finish off is on top of a hill, and this looks like as though it could be a counter move as well by Visconti. Oh, it's still Bushirine's gone again. Yeah,
this is at the back end of the race, so it looks as if Mark Cavendish has given up the ghost here this afternoon. He'll take a back seat for a couple of days and hope that in between the mountain passes, he'll get himself a little bit more glory on individual stage victories from the Giro d'Italia. Matteo Bushirine, good move by him, trying to catch out the sprinters. He's won stages in the Giro in the past, but mainly in the individual time trial.
He's never won a road race in any event. As he now, there's a counter-attack. That is Visconti there, the team leader of the ISD squad. And he's trying to get up to Bushirine now. But Bushirine never really got away, did he? And he was just being kissed there by Visconti, and Visconti has now gone himself.
Straight over the top, trying to rattle the cage of all of the sprinters, and it's up to LPR on the front end of the main field. Visconti a long way down in the overall classification, 76th at the start of the day. And in fact, LPR, Phil, looking over their shoulders, looking for a little bit more firepower, and this well could bode well for this man Visconti. Let's not forget, formerly Italian national champion.
Indeed, he's through 1,400 metres here, as now they're going to have to make a very quick decision to snap him up otherwise. Now this is sad sight at the back. Our cameras are going back to see where the leader of the Giro d'Italia is, and Cavendish is out of this one and certainly out of the pink jersey now. He's lost too much time. Visconti continuing his way up on these very narrow roads, but they're perfect to hide round the corner. Just coming up towards the kite now. Could be a win for this man.
Well, he's got to keep going. It's a very tricky, treacherous run into the finish. Ultimo kilometre, final kilometre for Visconti, but the main field is now starting to stretch out. If they want to pull him back into the fold before they get into the finishing straight, Phil, somebody has got to sacrifice themselves. Sitting at the front end in about 5th position there, you can see Pataki right on his wheel, Tyler Farrar. This could be the renaissance of the sprinting of Tyler Farrar this year, because I think this young man, he's got everything back together.
Well, Cavendish says he's not a pure sprinter, but Cavendish isn't here, so it doesn't really matter now. The Ciclamino jersey being worn by Pataki today, remember, because Mark Cavendish is wearing the Maglia Rosa. It looks ever so close. It's like a carrot attracting a donkey here, and as they start the run for the finish now, the man hitting the front wheel was Stefano Garzelli, but he's got on his back wheel Pataki, who refuses to open up. They feel they've got Visconti, but they're waiting for a reaction from the field, and it's beginning to come now, and Pataki was inviting him to go through himself. And it looks as though that we've got Gavazzi up there as well as Dario Cataldo of Quick Step. But now comes the big man, and this is an opportunity. He's not going to throw away, surely now. He got Cavendish yesterday. He's going 2 straight stages, but this time there will be a Maglia Rosa on the line.
Well, that was a dominant sprint, Phil, like the sprints of old. There was a bit of a crash just after the finish, and I think they were just trying to get themselves to the side of the road. I thought, in fact, Pataki had crashed into the barriers after the finish there, and I think he was actually just gulping for a little bit of air because that was a very difficult uphill finish.
He rode it very well. They tied it to perfection. How often do they do that? The sad sight is Cavendish is going to dangle his way in here and is going to lose time. And I think that the riders who come in now are going to be docked around about 45 seconds or something like that. There's a big group in split off here. Well, it hasn't really gone the way of Mark Cavendish so far. Beaten yesterday fair and square by Pataki. This time he couldn't even contest it with him. And this group coming in here very definitely has a separate time.
Well, I think you get a chance there. You can see the Maglia Rosa of Mark Cavendish. You get a chance to see just how difficult these slight inclines up into these beautiful little Italian villages are, and how much of an effect they can have on the main field.
Look at the clock, though. This is an amazing loss of time because he's lost all of this in a couple of kilometres, coming in about 1:25 behind today. So Cavendish will say goodbye to the Maglia Rosa for this year's Giro. There he is, philosophical look on his face, beaten by things outside of his control, I suppose. And so now he's going to have to think of stage wins. He got a couple of stage wins last year, and of course now the press are expecting a lot more of him than that.
Let's just have a look at that sprint one more time there. You see Visconti getting pulled back into the fold, then all of a sudden the acceleration, the explosion of Alessandro Pataki, again hugging the barriers over to the left-hand side, forcing anybody else to try and come by him, and then at the last minute straight into the middle of the road, going across, getting himself the shortest distance across, looking back under his arms there to see is there any shadow coming forward. And look at that comeback there of Tyler Farrar, because Farrar is just coming onto the wheel of Alessandro Pataki. A good second place for the American rider.
Yes,
and there was a crash.
Dear me, they were looking to miss everybody there.
Well, what it was strangely enough, immediately after the finishing line, Phil, not more than 40 or 50 metres past the finishing line, the road actually went to the right. And I think that's what caught these riders out. Bear in mind, they're at full flight here, getting the victory salute underway, and no time for braking and getting out the parachutes.
Well, that finish there is going to put Farrar in the best young riders jersey for tomorrow, because he's moved up the overall classification now. Pataki will obviously be wearing the Maglia Rosa, and he'll also lead this race on points as well. There's the confirmation that it was Gavazzi, the young sprinter, in third place there. Cataldo getting fourth. Happy days these. Alessandro Pataki has started his tour the way it means to go on. 2 stage wins in the opening 3 days, and the second one has given him the Maglia Rosa.
Well, I think everybody can now admit that Alessandro Pataki is back at the top end of the sport and back at the top end of the Giro d'Italia, because he now leads the Giro d'Italia overall by 8 seconds from Tyler Farrar, and looking very dangerous there, Phil, in third place, Mickey Rogers.
And what about Lance, up to 5th here at the moment? This man will not lie down, will he? And there is further down the list there too. Meanwhile, back on the podium, new bottle of champagne, new jersey for Alessandro Pataki. This couldn't have been a more perfect beginning for another man who seems to be on the comeback trail. Let's move on then to stage number 4. And the mountains are with us early as we go on to San Martino, and that's where we finish today. Virtually 100 miles flat, 162 kilometres. Did I say flat? Well, wait till you get to the end.
No, that's what it's all about pretty much on this stage this afternoon. It is flat to begin with, yes, for the riders to get themselves warmed up, but it is. I wouldn't call it a mountaintop finish, but I call it a fairly serious hilltop finish.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a big sorting out, climbing up to around about 1,300 metres in altitude. And again, Phil, we're looking back to what happened yesterday. Christian van der Velde, who went back with that very nasty accident. It was one of those mundane crashes that happens on almost every day of a Grand Tour somewhere in the world. And for Christian van der Velde, it was confirmed overnight that he had in fact fractured his pelvis, and that's going to put him out of the sport for quite a while.
Well, we wish him well and determination to overcome again as we look at where we're going today now. We're not quite to the top of these pieces of granite. As you can see, the snow is still around us here, as is so often the case in the Giro d'Italia, held in the month of May and June. And the snow is taking a little time to clear in the Dolomites. But right now, the riders thinking of a first challenge here now, and it's obviously not going to be a sprinter's day. The question is, will it give us a guidance as to what we can expect? Because this route, as we move down the leg and right over the Dolomites and the Italian Alps and back down again, is a very, very difficult last 10 days.
Well, you may well wonder what he's doing in an area like this on a bike when it seems probably the sport that anybody should be practicing at the moment is skiing. 10 kilometres to go now for these two leaders.
Yeah, this is Bellotti here at the back here, and I think it's Davide Vignano from the Fiji team. They're the remnants of what was a breakaway of 5 riders that got away right out at the beginning today. They got away, funnily enough, at 9 kilometres from the start, and here we are 9 kilometres from the finish. And they've been under control. They've never been allowed to slip away too much. It could have, I think it's Jens Voigt. Is it Jens Voigt there with him? He was in the early morning breakaway. LPR clearly have a plan. The killer is in 3rd place here, Danilo De Luca, and now interest is switching from Pataki to Danilo.
Yes, I was going to say this is the kind of finish for a man like Danilo De Luca here this afternoon, and that's why they've moved team tactics across from Pataki. Pataki left up to his own devices on a day like today to basically pretty much just try and survive. He's got what he wants already out of the Giro d'Italia, Phil, and that's 2-stage victories and, of course, the Maglia Rosa for a single day. But who will be in the Maglia Rosa this evening? Because I'm absolutely certain we're going to see a big sorting out in the overall classification. I would have to say that the big favourite to take the Maglia Rosa would have to be Mick Rogers, the Australian. He's riding at the front end of the main field there for Team Columbia High Road.
Well, it's a rest period now nursing Mark Cavendish because there's nothing for him on this day or the next few days really. So he'll just he'll slip away now. They will start to concentrate on their other top riders. And at the moment, Thomas Lufsquist and also Michael Rogers are the most likely. Look at the face there as we see the riders come out. And Garzelli, nobody quite knows what to expect from this former winner of the Giro because he's feeling a bit slighted by everybody just now.
But he's a good sprinter, and this kind of finish that he could find himself doing well on the run up towards the finish. That's 10 kilometres to go for, I have to say now, that the front end of the main field at the selection. They're looking for 1 minute and 41 seconds. Now, 1 minute and 41 seconds on the slope of a mountain like this after you've been in a breakaway for an awful long time, I have to say, I don't really think is quite enough.
Well, this is quite a nasty drag as we go up here, all the way up towards the summit. And these riders just holding tempo. They're chasing just 2 remnants of that breakaway, which was originally 6. As Sergio Martinez was in and out rather quickly this morning. It is Jens Voigt, who's the last survivor, along with Francesco Bellotti.
He's a beast. He really is a beast. When you look at the face of Jens Voigt there, Phil, that he always wants to battle. It's as if he's battling not only himself, the bike, the mountain, the whole of the race is on his shoulders. And he is such a fun bike rider to watch in a breakaway like this.
Well, Bellotti has got most points in the King of the Mountains so far today. He won the climb of the Croc Dawn at 8.5 kilometres out. That's where the break really formed. Voigt went over the top of that in 3rd place and quickly onto the tail of Bellotti and De Bonis of Sedimenti. And then the breakaway formed and went. But now this is the one that takes us up to a height of 1,466 metres in a climb of almost 14 kilometres. And the finishing line is right on the top.
Well, that was Massimo Cordol on the front there. That was for Acqua Sapone, and he'll be thinking about trying to set something up for his man. And that's the man he's trying to set it up for in the red jersey there. The man who previously, as you mentioned, Phil, has been a winner of this race, Stefano Garzelli. The 2 leaders are starting to now lose huge chunks of time, but Jens Voigt will not give up. He knows he's still at the lead of the race in Testa della Corsa.
Well, we always say no matter how good a professional you are, you have to enjoy your cycling to suffer the pain. And I think that's personified in Jens Voigt. He just loves his bike racing, and he's never happier than when he's making other people suffer. And right now, he's just got the Barlow World rider with him. They will leave the sport at the end of this season. So these riders looking to impress for a new contract next year. There's confirmation of that climb at 13.7 kilometres. And as I say, it goes up to 1,466 metres at the very top. And it looks now, if they're going to jump on them, they can't allow it to go on much longer.
Well, the average gradient is only 5.5% on this climb, but there are a couple of very nasty steep points, and it looks as if we're on one of those now where it kicks up to 10%.
It's quite a big peloton here, still holding out tempo. Danilo De Luca always looks like a sprinter the way he sits low on that bike. A lot of power in those legs though. The gap is still holding very nicely. It looks like an Astana rider shot off there, just below our camera.
One Astana. There was a lot
There's
of
a few
Astana
there.
riders there. They were all powering up to the front over on the left-hand side. Lance Armstrong, just for your information, is still in this group at the moment. And just casting my mind back, Phil, I'd have to think this is one of his first mountaintop finishes for an awful long time.
Well, in his days of the Tour de France, he did pop over into Italy and ride some of the climbs of the Giro d'Italia, and always said, gee, I'd love to ride that race. But of course, he reckoned that the American public did not understand the Giro. They only understand him when he wins the Tour de France. There he is, number 21. And so he always felt obliged to ride the Tour de France and forsake the Giro d'Italia. But now, he can do what he likes. He's back and he's chosen the Giro.
I don't know if you just noticed the difference in the speed as we're now looking at just inside of 8 kilometres to go for these two leaders. The main field were really starting to pick it up. These guys are really very much on the survival ratings here, just trying to stay off the front end of the main field. They had a massive advantage at the start of the climb, but it's slowly but surely being whittled away by the peloton, and mainly by the work of Team LPR, the team mates of Danilo De Luca. Bellotti on the front in the red and white jersey of Barlow World, and Jens Voigt, that inimitable style of his. 21, there is Mr. Armstrong, with all his old mates up alongside him. That's Janez Brakovic just over to his right, number 22, not far away, Levi Leipheimer, Jaroslav Popovic, another former winner of the Giro here as well, Gilberto Simoni, and a lot of people are very wary of the performances of Gilberto Simoni in these mountaintop finishes.
Well, he's the man, the only man in the race who could catch up with Felice Gimondi with the number of podium finishes more than anybody else. And that's an attack by Jens Voigt here as we continue. A quick move. Voigt wouldn't let it go on too long. Bellotti straight after him though. He's straight after him. He hasn't locked on him.
Well, not quite. You know, Jens is a beast of a man, and you know what? He will give everything. He's now realising they're coming to the critical part. This is how the attack happened. It happened right at the front. It wasn't a surprise attack. This was what they call on force, with power, and he's opened up the gap. Now he's going to hope that he can find a little bit of extra energy in there somewhere, Phil, to survive off the front end of the main field, because Jens is now starting to realise there's the possibility of a stage victory here, still with 1 minute and 20 seconds advantage. There you can see Bellotti. He hasn't got anything left in those legs of his.
Well, Jens Voigt has one stage win under his belt in the Giro d'Italia. He'd like plenty more. Let's see what he can do one this time. He's now got the gap. He's had to go very early on, I think. It's still a long way to go. And the Barlow World rider might well recover. But the string on the front here now is becoming a fast tempo. And soon, I think we'll see these riders start to crack up.
Well, Aqua Sapone have obviously got the bit between their teeth. They believe that their man Stefano Gazzelli can get himself the victory. I'm just looking down that line. There are an awful lot of Astana riders. A lot of people are starting to believe that Levi Leipheimer is in the right form here this afternoon, Phil, to get himself some foundations laid down for a victory in the Giro d'Italia. And if he's going to get it, he'll need the help of that man. It's easy to pick out Lance Armstrong, not because he's wearing number 21, but he has a slightly different coloured helmet to every other rider on the team, because although he's riding for Team Astana, he's not actually receiving any salary, and he's supported in his endeavour to represent the team by his Livestrong Foundation.
Well, he'll see this is the first test of the Giro for him, and it looks to me as though he's coming through it with flying colours right now. He doesn't look under any pressure at all in that pack. And remember, he started the day in 5th place overall. The green jersey there, by the way, being worn by Mauro Facci, who was in the breakaway 2 days ago. We didn't see him, but he was there, and he got the preems of the day. And so he is on top. The same for Bellotti, but that's nothing to do with it. That's the quick-step rider there. Green jersey, by the way, is the colour of the leader's jersey of the King of the Mountains in the Giro d'Italia.
Also, just alongside him, you may have noticed there Fabian Cancellara, who's having a very difficult time getting himself back into the sport this year, suffering not only from illness but also from injury after his participation in the Amgen Tour of California. Jens Voigt is at the lead of the bike race, and he is just trying to eat up these final kilometres and get himself a stage victory if he can. But there are so many big guys in that field behind Phil. He's going to have to do something very special to survive.
Just remind me, Paul, Lance Armstrong's birthday.
The 17th of September,
no,
1971.
It's the 18th, isn't it?
Well,
because Voigt is the 17th. I think he claims to be a day younger.
That's right. You're right. It's the 18th for Armstrong and the 17th for Jens Voigt. They're separated by
he's a day younger than Lance. He's sitting
24
on 37 and a half years of age right now.
Well, there's the devil.
And looking like a youngster in the making here. 1 minute 20. He's still got a chance.
He's still got a chance.
Definitely got a chance.
He's got to just keep ticking away there and keeping those pedals rolling over. It's not too difficult to climb, but you know, when you've been in a breakaway for a long time like this, you've really got to dig deep into the reserves to keep yourself off the front end of a bike race. He's been in the saddle for just coming up to 4 hours of racing so far. It probably corresponds to another 15 minutes if he wants to get himself the stage win. That's all he needs to do.
Which, considering the terrain today, just over 4 hours for 100 miles of racing is a very fast ride indeed. The last 7 miles of it, of course, all uphill to the summit. We're now 6 kilometres from the top, about just under 5 miles to go. And Voigt on a bit of a false flat here. He's got himself a nice rhythm and quickly stepping it up. 5.9 kilometres to go.
Bit of respite for Jens Voigt, just looking down there to see what's going on there. Still is Lance Armstrong. I think for the moment the revision has all been done correctly. Now he's sitting the examinations and he seems to be passing them with fairly flying colours.
Still no huge reaction here from the pack, and hardly committing suicide here to catch up with Voigt. If he comes back, it may not be because of a reaction from this field. It may just be by the fact he slows down. But I must say that well, you've got 2.5 weeks to race, don't forget, so you're not going to win the Tour today. So let's just play your cards and see what happens, is the attitude.
Well, this is at 10 kilometres to go, and this is the Gruppetto, and these are the riders who've been eliminated from the front end of the race. This is the group of the Maglia Rosa, and although I can't see the Maglia Rosa, it's on the shoulders of Alessandro Petacchi, and they're looking now for around about 10.5 minutes. This will be the group of all of the big sprinters, and all they're concerned about is getting to the end of the stage and coming out to fight again. There's Fabian Cancellara, using the Giro d'Italia if he can, Phil, try and find himself some form.
Yeah, he's had a very poor year so far. Ever since he had to abandon the Tour of California with sickness, it's not gone well for him at all. And the King of the Mountains leader there, Mauro Facci, he's losing that title today because the big point's on the finishing line and he's not there. Far right of our picture, Voigt is leading his way up the mountain, and the pack are in the middle and looking a little bit more angry right now as they start to lift the pace. They're probably sensing, if they don't react very quickly, this man Voigt will have his second ever stage win in the Giro.
Well, they're not eating rapidly into the advantage of Jens Voigt. It's come down from 1:30 to 1:25, now hovering at 1 minute and 15. But yes, you're right. I think if you look at the faces here, this is Massimo Codol on the front in the red jersey of Acqua Saponi. This is a much more serious tempo making. They're realising there is a chance of a stage victory either for Garzelli or for Danilo De Luca, so that's why they're putting the pressure on at the front end of the main field. But to give their leaders a chance of victory, they've got to do one thing: pull the man at the front, Jens Voigt, back into the fold.
The killer haunting everybody here now, and a very apt title that, I must say. And this is Garzelli, 2 former winners of the Giro. The killer won in 2007, let's not forget. 2000 for Garzelli, who's also been runner-up and had a 6th place finish as well in history. Nice steady tempo riding. Thomas Lokvich is riding well to the front for Team Colombia, and that looks like Maurizio Soler who's gone there. And this is the man that made his name in the Tour de France and has tried to repeat those performances ever since. Look at his arms here. I don't know where he fell off. I don't think it was in this race, but he's all bandaged up there, Paul.
Well, this man is a great climber, and he could put paid to the move here by Jens Voigt. Voigt is at 5 kilometres to go with still around about the 1 minute advantage. Acceleration now coming from Team Columbia High Road, because if we were to stop the race right now, Phil, I think at my calculations, Mickey Rogers would take over the overall lead, because he started the day in 3rd place overall with just Petacchi and Tyler Farrar ahead of him. And there's Mick.
Where is he?
Just over to the left-hand side.
Yes. And Solar here has come back into the pack here, but he's made a good move. He's already on form. He finished 2nd overall in the Lombardia week in April, which is about 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks ago right now. And so he's got good legs, and I know Bar the World are pinning a lot of hopes on him doing well in this race today. We presume that Bellotti has gone back to the pack. We haven't seen him since Jens got away from him. And they've got another 5k to go.
Voigt is still hoping to survive. Those accelerations and decelerations that may well be an advantage for Jens Voigt there, because every time the main field accelerates and slows down, they lose a little bit of their average speed, and now they're swelling across the main road there, Phil. I think it could well be advantage Jens Voigt. That's Mick Rogers over on the left-hand side having a little bit of a chat, wondering whether or not he's going to put the Maglia Rosa onto his shoulders at the end of the day. Jens Voigt here with Well, that's 38 seconds to Belotti, and still around about the 1 minute mark to the main field. So Jens Voigt could really create that little bit of a surprise here this afternoon.
And just beginning to tempt everybody to come out to play now. We've got Katusha on the move. They need these counter-attacks. It's the only way. And Ivan Basso and Pelazzotti are now whipping up their squad. Liquigas as well. This could make a very different bike race now, and we should see the time gap come down. We don't seem to get the time gaps quite as frequently as we do on the Tour de France and the Classics, but is that Soler come back?
Belotti.
That was Belotti. Absolutely,
back.
that's right. Yes. So he's now back in the fold.
So the race situation now is there's just one lone leader up at the front, and that is Jens Voigt, completely and utterly on his own. There's Francesco Belotti. He's almost got it into reverse gear, going backwards there as everybody comes by him. He's been in the breakaway for an awful long time here this afternoon. Liquigas now have got the organisation at the front. Second position for Pelazzotti. Third position for Ivan Basso. Phil, just 35 seconds to Jens Voigt.
You've got to pull him back. Don't forget, Belotti's been out front for 145 kilometres. His teammate, breakaway partner at least, is still out front and closing in on the finish. And so this has been an awful long way for the Saxo Bank boy, Jens Voigt. There's Pelazzotti. And the last man in the string there is Ivan Basso. Michael Rogers is up here too, and I know his team are hoping that they'll see a turnaround here. The best ever finish by an Australian in the Tour of Italy is Phil Anderson, who finished 7th back in the 80s, 85 I think. Either way, that was a great result for him. So this is now Jens Voigt clearly beginning to struggle as he continues on his way. And I think he's not going to make it, Paul, because this does kick up a little bit before the finish.
Well, he's just got to keep going, Jens. He's got to battle with his body, and he knows that there will be attacks on the run-in towards the finish, and he's probably got the information coming from his team management that there is an organised chase now coming from Ivan Basso's squad with the inside of 4 kilometres to go. But Jens will not give up. That group there, by the way, has actually shrunk massively over the last couple of kilometres. But there's still the presence of Mr. Lance Armstrong in that group. And I have to say, if he hadn't had the accident and broken his collarbone, I wouldn't have been surprised to see him in this group, Phil. But I have to say that having broken his collarbone, and just for your information, there's a 5-inch piece of metal in there with 12 screws. And I'll tell you what, they're probably hurting quite a bit here this afternoon.
Well, he just amazes me. He really does. Just to come back from his big layoff without the problems of the collarbone, it would have been exceptional to have ridden like this. But to come back from a collarbone as well, the top athletes can only have admiration for him, and certainly will gain respect for him today, because somewhere in this group has to be the winner of the Giro d'Italia in 2.5 weeks' time, because you can't afford to lose time on this climb. Big test for them all today. It looks as though Pelazzotti, Basso, Garzelli are all coming through it. Danilo De Luca tucked in there. Thomas Luckfist is here as well for Team Columbia. So too is Michael Rogers. And so too is number 21, Lance Armstrong. We're not sure yet who is leading this team because Leipheimer is the obvious choice. He is on top form.
Well, I would have to say that going down the road, it would have to be Leipheimer. Lance, I'm sure, could not have the backing to get himself a victory after 3 weeks, especially after that very nasty accident where he smashed his collarbone. But he will try and ride himself back into form. 3 kilometres to go, 25 seconds for Jens Voigt, but this chasing group, Phil, now is starting to take the chase very seriously. They're stretching themselves out into a long line, and they're there at the 3 kilometre point too.
They can't not catch up, I don't think. 25 seconds, 3 kilometres, all uphill. Might have had a chance on the flat road, but this peloton now have got a good tempo going here. But it's the same riders at the front. Garzelli is watching, but not actually assisting in the chase. You see the black jersey of Case Depart there. Well, they haven't got Alejandro Valverde here, their top boy. It's not the best team, in my opinion. It's just a team which is playing its part as a top Pro Tour team. 20 seconds now. And if you noticed, all of our little signage here is in the English language, Paul, this year.
Well, that's all. Oh, Jens, I think he's cracked. That is, there they are. The main bunch are just around the corner. Voigt, all of a sudden, has completely and utterly hit the wall. He was giving everything he had, but it's just, I think, 2.5 kilometres too far, and he's back in the fold. It's a shame.
They don't even look at him. He went away right at the start of the day. After 9 kilometres, he's caught just on 2 kilometres from the line. That puts him in the lead for 158 kilometres, something in that region. 53 kilometres. That's an awful long way to lead the race. But it's so typical of Voigt. and he's had a great day.
Well, Basso moving himself up into second place, which leads me to believe that the man they're working for is going to be Pelazzotti, but he is shadowed there by Stefano Garzelli and still the armada of Astana. There's Armstrong, number 22, over to the left-hand side, Janez Brakovic. A little bit further back there as well, it looked to me as if that was Andrei Zietz from Kazakhstan, who was riding up to the front end of the main field. This Astana squad, Phil, it really is one of the greatest Grand Tour teams in the world.
They've got at least 5 of the team in there, Paul, and obviously Leipheimer is there as well. So their main man, perhaps, we'll see. 1:11 the gap, 24th in the overall classification for Basso, but now he's at the head of the race here and a chance to gain time because the sprinters have slipped away from the action today and want no part of this. Pataki is gone. There'll be a new leader in the block awaited when we get to the top of the road. It's a question of who it will be. Barlow World have got Felix Cardenas down there as well as Maurizio Soler. And there is the face of the Aqua Saponi rider. He really is a workhorse, isn't he, Garzelli? Because even on the sprinters stages, the last 2 days, he's been right in the same position, trying to work and see what would work out for him. Really aggressive bike rider.
He's looking for the opportunity. Mick Rogers there in about 7th or 8th position. He's the highest placed rider in this overall classification. However, unfortunately for Mick, I have to remind him that there is a little problem at the end of the stage because we're looking at time bonuses here, and that could completely and utterly change it depending on who gets the time bonuses in the sprint to the line at the top of his climb.
Inside 2 kilometres now to the end of the climb and the end of the day, the first big test for the riders in the Giro. A chance to see just who is here for the long-term prospect, and it's quite apparent there isn't anybody really we would have expected who's missed this split, that's for sure.
Leipheimer was up at the front end over on the right-hand side there, looking fairly comfortable, and he's got the support, as you said, Phil, of a lot of teammates there from Team Astana. I think they're going to be very dangerous in the last week of this bike race. There's Rogers and his boys. Rogers is 178. He's surrounded by teammates. Lovquist just in front of him.
This is Silver again coming up on the left. Nobody's looking at him. Now they are, and no reaction from Liquigas. In fact, it looked as though they were relying on Basso to pick that one up, but Maurizio Soler has made a big dig here. Now he's gone a bit of a way out. He's got about 1.5 kilometres to survive, but he's certainly taken his chance well. Well done to Maurizio Soler. Remember him on the road to Besançon, Paul?
Well, definitely. He's Briançon. He's got to take lots of risks here, and he knows that if he goes a long way out from the finish, the riders in the group behind will start to look at each other, not wanting to make the effort too early. And they realise they've got to make an explosive effort if they want to win at the top of a climb like this. But for Maurizio Soler, the important thing is it's all or nothing. He doesn't care, I don't think, in this Giro d'Italia about riding high in the overall classification. What he wants to do is get individual glory, try and get individual mountain stages, and why not have a crack at the King of the Mountains too? For the moment, he's got about 5 seconds advantage, and he hasn't rattled the organisation of Liquigas.
No, he hasn't. In fact, Liquigas look totally unfazed by this attack. They've got just over 1 kilometre to bring him back if they can. I'm not sure, but they have a habit of gambling and just trying here, waiting. They're waiting for somebody else to come and take up the running because he stuck to his guns here. He's into that last kilometre. And Maurizio Soler, the Colombian rider, could be taking the flag for Barlow World here. Basically a South African setup, and they really need a boost right now.
They certainly do. That was a great move. He's caught them completely and utterly unawares, but that is a very big group behind Maurizio Soler. He's inside the final kilometre. He's looking for the little signs at the edge of the road that will say 500 metres to go, 400, 300. He's got to keep the pressure on. The gap is not very much. We're looking at 3 to 4 seconds. I couldn't quite see who was doing the tempo making at the front end of the main field, but it looks as it may well be Stefano Garzelli, and it is.
It's 2 Aqua Saponi riders have suddenly gone through. Garzelli deciding that this is a little bit too serious here. Liquigas have completely disappeared there for Basso, and I guess for Pelazzotti as well, but he's still away, and that is a well taken ride here by Maurizio Soler. Here's your right, Paul, coming up to 4.25 hours in the saddle as they come up to the top. There's still a chance here, but it is a slim one because he's now around that corner. Look at the back here as the riders start to crack up and all looking for help now, and nobody willing to make that final move. That's significant now. Lance Armstrong, has he sat up here and lost a couple of seconds? He might well have done. He's just into the red zone, Lance is, at the moment. And the rider we're going to see round the corner first will be Barlow World's favourite son, I think, because I know the people in South Africa who sponsor this team just love Maurizio, and they're going to be delighted. He's still got a real fighting chance as he starts to slip the gears up.
200 metres to go. He's round the final corner, but they're not very far behind him. It's Danilo De Luca who's accelerating to try and get onto his wheel.
Well, Danilo De Luca, the killer, has come up. Well, look at that. Poor old Maurizio Soler passed at 50 metres to go. Danilo De Luca has just won the 4th stage of the Giro. Significant perhaps when he went on to win the Giro a couple of years ago, he also started out by winning the 4th stage. 4¼ hours, he stopped the clock. Garzelli stuck to his guns, he's got second, and I think that was Pelazzotti rather than Basso who flew over the line in 3rd.
It certainly was. Maurizio Soler just hanging on there to his 4th place. A great move by him, I have to say. This is Lance Armstrong coming in, and I'm not surprised, Phil, to see that Armstrong has had a little bit of a tailing off over the run-up towards the finish.
Well, there's the situation at the moment, and it looks as though De Luca's going to move himself right up the overall classification now. But we'll have to wait to see just who will pull on the Maglia Rosa, as the riders will face up to another tough day in the saddle on the 5th stage as they head up the climb of the Alpe de Sucy in the Alps here in Italy.
Yeah, these are 1 or 2 riders here who are just trying to pull themselves back to Soler. There you can see Soler going around the corner. At that point it looked very much as if he was going to get himself the victory, but look at this comeback by Danilo De Luca, bit between the teeth there, and all he was doing was aiming at the back wheel of Maurizio Soler, and at this point he's gone by and he's got himself the stage victory, just grappling by as well there, Garzelli. I have to say, Danilo De Luca, Phil, is looking very, very invincible at the top of these mountain passes.
I have to say that's such a typical move by De Luca. When he really sees the finish line, he gets the bit between the teeth and he dives for it. And again, a prestigious win for him. He gets the stage, and as I say, he won the 4th stage when he won this race overall. So is that a little warning to the rest? Now we're waiting to see, because they're having to work on this one now, to see who is the next leader. One thing's for sure now, Cavendish and Pataki are out of the colours as the autobus comes in, which probably contains Pataki here, right on the front in that Ciclamino jersey as points leader, gently riding in. And look at the time gap, Paul. Those Maglia Rosas have gone for this tour for sure. Nearly 20 minutes there.
Not important for the sprinters, though, because now we get into the big mountain passes. As far as they're concerned, these are just stages of survival, getting themselves to the finish and thinking about the flat days.
And look at this. Now that is a huge result for Team Columbia High Road, because Thomas Lövkvist has got his first ever race lead in the Giro, and he's another young man on the team, just 25 years of age. De Luca right up behind him there in 2nd place. So the next card has been played, and we have now our 3rd different leader of the Giro.
Well, this young man, he will also be the leader in the Best Young Riders classification, and he's going to be a difficult man to dislodge, I think, over the next couple of days. A bit sad for Mickey Rogers. He actually lost a couple of seconds on the run in towards the finish, and that lost him the Maglia Rosa.
All right, well, on we go, and the hills stay with us now. Hills, these are mountains now as we go on a long stage. Well, no, comparatively short stage, but a lasty long climb. The finish climb to the Alpe de Sucy is 25 kilometres, and it takes us up to 1,850 metres. So it is a very hard climb now. And De Luca, who showed he could sprint on the shallow climbs, see what he can do today.
Well, this is a different kind of climb, this Alpe de Sucy, and just to put it into perspective, it's exactly the same altitude as the Alpe d'Huez.
Just one climb along the way, but we're rubbing shoulders with the snow today. This is such a typical scene in the Giro d'Italia at some stage along the way. The Dolomites off to the left, the riders going into the Italian Alps here. And this is the 2nd classical climb here, the Passarola. 8.5 kilometres, the climb, just over 5 miles. Riders over the top. Now, as they charge down this, there's only one way home, and it's on to the Alpe de Sucy itself. Breakaway again of 7 riders getting clear early on today.
There's Lövkvist at the front.
Sorry, Paul.
He's riding very comfortably at the front. They're not overly concerned about this early breakaway. It is a nasty profile, the route today, though, because it really is a short stage, as you said, a very explosive stage, and then it's all uphill to the finish.
Yeah, well, breakaway containing nobody of note, in fact. The highest place was Visconti, who's 2 minutes and 49 back, and at one stage has been the leader on the road, but I think that's all being shut down now. The riders know this is showdown on the last climb, and that's where the time gaps will surely open. The other boys are the rabbits of the day. They just try to get there and survive.
Yeah, the main field pretty much all together now, just thinking about what's in store at the end of the day, and I think we'll see another major sorting out at the front end of the peloton. Pippo Pozzato, I don't think he's too concerned now about these kind of stages. He was hoping to get himself the Maglia Rosa in the early days, but now I think as far as he's concerned, he's got to have a little bit of a look, Phil, at the flatter stages and the possibility of a stage victory. 25 kilometres to go, and that's an indication that the majority of the rest of today's stage is uphill.
Yes, and that breakaway should get to the hill first. I'll give you a quick rundown of the names that start in the break. I'm not sure how many's left in it. Eros Capacci of Fuji, Francesco Gavazzi, the sprinter from Lampre, Daniela Pietripoli, LPR, Jose Serpa, man most likely to succeed there for Serramenti, Mauro Facci again, maybe he wants his King of the Mountains jersey back, Visconti and Thomas Voigtler are the riders who got away and heading towards that final climb.
They're actually starting the final climb here, Phil, and it looks very much to me as if these guys are hoping they're going to survive. But I think we'll have a bit of a showdown. This is Pietripoli from LPR. I don't think he'll do too much in this breakaway, because one of the reasons he's gone into this move is to be present in case they get caught later on by Danilo De Luca and the rest of his squad.
Yeah, I'd watch out for Serpa. He's on good form again, a winner of the Tour de Langkawi at the start of the year, February. Got a chance as he's now a very good climber. I think he'll try to make a move if he can. He had a little crash in the classics. As we start the climb here, as I say, it takes us up to 1,844 metres to be absolutely precise. And we're in the Alps, remember now, as we've rubbed shoulders with the Dolomites. And this is a tough couple of days, because it's followed by a visit to Austria tomorrow. And then we're going to have the riders facing a long stage tomorrow, nearly 250 kilometres.
A lot of excitement at the front end of the main field. Team Liquigas, I think, thinking about trying to sort it up. They realise that there's going to be a massive sort out on the final 25-kilometre ascension of this big mountain pass. And just looking at the front end of the main field, Phil, there's a lot of riders extremely nervous about this. They want to get to the Alpi at the front end of the pack, and I think today we're going to see a showdown by Team Liquigas, because this is a big armada.
Well, look at this now. Maybe Basso has also said he fancies his chances here. It's a test number 2, if you like, for the big men in this year's Giro after yesterday. De Luca came out tops then. Remember, he's only looking for less than 3/4 of a minute to steal the jersey away now from Lundqvist. Team Columbia having a good start, to say the least, of the Giro. The race lead with Cavendish, and now the race lead again with Lundqvist. And still no stage win to Poff, of course, from the team time trial.
Well, these guys just getting themselves into their own rhythm now. They know with 2.5 minutes advantage, that's not really a whole packet of time ahead of the main field, because the main field realises this is one of the strategic days of the Giro d'Italia, and there will be a big battle, I think, for supremacy. Lundqvist is the man currently in the overall leader's jersey. He's a very young rider on Team Columbia High Road. I do feel that the top man on that squad has got to be Mick Rogers. A little bit tailed off towards the run-in yesterday, but with that acceleration, it's not a surprise. He lost himself 5 or 6 seconds in the final 200 metres.
Well, they've left themselves a little bit of a chance here, I think. It's a very different climb, the Alps, of course, to the Dolomites. They're long, a little bit more shallow, perhaps, and you could be watching a Tour de France stage, of course, in this section of the world. But it's interesting now, Paul, because this is Serpa here. This is the Fuji rider over the front. This is Capacci, who's now setting the pace. Serpa's just behind him. They've got themselves a nice little rhythm. There were 7 of them at the start. I'm not sure if all 7 are still there.
Ivan Basso looking very concentrated. A big test for him here this afternoon. Is he going to be the leader of Team Liquigas, or is it going to be Pelazzotti? Pelazzotti, I think, is the man who's got the form. That's the leading group of riders, holding on to around about still a 2.5 minute advantage. Looks like somebody's having a bit of a hard time at the back of that group, though, Phil. Yeah. Pulling back. We're going to get a chance here to see just what the spread of the race is here this afternoon.
Well, there were 7 there, but one has just unhitched as the hill begins to bite a little bit. Still quite a long way down the slopes before we pick up the peloton. They're saying it's 2:25. It's a nice little lead. I can't believe, just like yesterday, though, it's going to survive. They're going to come right back up onto them here. The man being dropped is Gavazzi. I would think that's to be expected. He's more of a sprinter.
He certainly is. He's a man who's got a very good turn of speed when it comes to the flat stages, but he will be having the sprinter's allergy to the mountains here this afternoon. And just looking at that group, disappearing up the road in front of him. All he can think about now, Phil, is a question of survival and staying off the front end of the main field for as long as possible, because this is, I tell you, this is a beast of a climb at 25 kilometres of ascension.
Yeah, a lot of work being done here. This is Capacci on the front for the Fuji team. Good tempo riding. Number 91 there is Visconti. He's been very active. It's hard to think, we're only on day 5 of the Giro, and by the end of this day we will only covered 670 kilometres, so this race has hardly begun. And we're seeing a lot of evidence that Basso is trying to establish a situation in this race. De Luca also. Haven't seen quite so much of Astana, but they haven't missed a trick either, so Leipheimer is still very much in with a chance. As is this stage, so too is Lance Armstrong, let's face it.
I have to say that I think a lot of riders, the men thinking about winning this bike race after 3 weeks, Phil, they've got to understand that the important thing is that the final week of racing, yes, you can lose the Giro d'Italia in the first week of the race, but it's in the final week of the race that you come up with a victory, and that's what you have to bear in mind. You can't use all of your ammunition in the first 10 days.
Now remember that De Luca is going to follow Lovekist everywhere here today, because an Italian loves to lead the Giro. The gap is a mere 2 seconds. If they don't score bonuses, that's real time, of course. That would make a big difference. So they're going to watch each other. There's De Luca wearing the King of the Mountains jersey. It's a lead which, in fact, is his. He got the lead yesterday. So he's the just leader of the King of the Mountains, not borrowed. Lovequist has also got the white jersey as top young rider, but he's not wearing it, of course. He's in the Maglia Rosa. And the points still being headed up by Pataki.
Armstrong down there as well, number 21 for Team Astana. Second mountain top finish in the last 3.5 years, and I think he's riding himself into form in the Giro d'Italia, although the number one man on the squad is obviously got to be Levi Leipheimer. Mark Cavendish, a former leader of the race. I don't like stages like this, although the Isle of Man, where he comes from, he's used to going uphill because there's not an awful lot of flat on the Isle of Man. You look at his place in the overall standings, 114th. But that's not important for a sprinter. What's important for a sprinter is trying to get victory on the individual flat stages. Time for them is not important.
He lost 19 minutes of that yesterday, and he'll probably lose a little more today. But nonetheless, he's developing. He's thinking long term. He wants to finish a major tour and not give up partly way through. I can't see him going to the finish in this one, but we'll see. But basically, I think he's got his eye on the Tour de France this year and making it to Paris. There's De Luca haunting everybody.
Looking over his shoulder to see where is Thomas Lovquist and thinking, that is my jersey, that's the jersey I want, and he's only 2 seconds away from it. And I think that will be in the back of his mind this afternoon. He doesn't have to do, as the French would say, a grand numero here this afternoon. All he has to think about are the time bonuses at the top of this stage. And to get the time bonuses, he has to sprint for the top 3 places. And to do that, he and his team need to pull back this breakaway.
Well, there's still Eros Kopecky on the front for the Fuji boys. They seem to be leaving him. He's a tall man. He reminds me of Eros Poli, actually, long since retired. Once went over the top on 112, and he's no climber. But just looking at this little group now, they're still just lacking Gavazzi, who has dropped out of the caravan now. They brought the cars forward, so he's heading back to this group. There's the little man who dashes around the mountain looking for his chance, thinking all the time. 2 seconds separates him from that pink jersey of Thomas Lovquist. Columbia have got a good few riders up here to look after their young charge as well, including, of course, Michael Rogers.
Yes, Mick Rogers, I think, is looking to ride himself back to the top end of the sport. He's had a very hard time over the last couple of years. He had to retire from the Tour de France after breaking his collarbone, and after that suffered mononucleosis or glandular fever, which really put paid to staying consistently in form. But I think now this year, Phil, he can finally put all of that behind him.
Same old suspects setting the pace here, and always Basso never far from the front, but never actually on it. Just using his team. Pelazzotti is also there. Could be a little bit of a dispute in that team. Pelazzotti himself is saying he's got good form, and therefore may not take the leadership passing too much to Basso. It's a story which might unfold in the next couple of weeks when the route really does take a turn for the worst if you're not a climber.
I think for a man like Ivan Basso coming back from a 2-year suspension, it's also a little bit of the unknown for him, Phil, because he's got to figure out how his body's going to react. It's fine riding a one-day race or even a stage race of 5 or 6 days, but your body reacts completely differently to the big Grand Tours. Alessandro Patacchi over on the right-hand side. I don't think he's too worried about the sprint at the end of today's stage.
No, I don't think he is. He just wants to get through these stages. They're not of any interest to him whatsoever. It's a chance for the climbers to pick a few points for that jersey as well at the top of the climb. This is the second mountain top finish in 2 days, but this is by far the harder of the two. Taking us for the last 25 kilometres uphill. Steady at first, as you can see. They're just tempo riding, waiting to see if there's anybody going to fail in that breakaway up front before they put the hammer down. Cancellara, I don't think he's enjoying this race. He's not showing any signs of finding his form yet. And just slipping away again on the top of this climb.
Well, for Cancellara, as you said, Phil, he's trying to find some form. This looks like Jose Serpa. And as you said, he's a man who's got great form and he's a very good climber. The lead of the race back to the main field is at 2 minutes and 18 seconds, and stuck in no man's land is Gavazzi, and he's rapidly going back to the main pack.
Just to remind you the names again: Kopecky of Fuji, Gavazzi is gone, Pietropoli of LPR, Serpa Seramenti, Falchi, Quickstep of Visconti ISD, and Thomas Voigtler, the little imp himself, from B-Box Bouygues Telecom.
Well, he's trying to get a name for himself in the Giro d'Italia. The man who made his name in the Tour de France, Thomas Voigtler, who got himself off the front end of the main field one day and then led the race for 10 successive days until the yellow jersey was ripped off his shoulders by a certain Lance Armstrong. But it really did endear him to the French crowd that season.
There's Thomas at the back. Familiar riding style, always with his zip fully undone on his jersey. And wouldn't surprise me in the least if he doesn't try a little attack shortly. There's the list of names for you of the 6 survivors at the front. It's been a long breakaway this as well. The only climb of the day was taken out before the break went. It was just about to go on the first climb. Carlos Jose Ochoa got the climb for Sedimenti. Voigtler went over in second, Kopecky in third, and then the break went. And the winner of the climb decided not to go with it.
Serpa looking very concentrated there. Voigtler just happy, I think, to be sitting on the back of this group, realising that there is going to be a showdown later up the mountain, because I think we'll see once again a big battle for dominance and Maglia Rosa. He's not really a factor in this race anymore this afternoon. I think the factor today, Phil, is going to be Team Liquigas, because they seem to be the team who are very happy to assume the control at the front end of the main field and to dominate.
It's a good point. Basso, with a point to prove, of course, served his suspension for blood doping. Remember when he won his Giro d'Italia, he was a street ahead of everybody else, but it wasn't. There was no accusations at that time, so he kept his victory in that event. But Pataki now just hanging on to anybody that comes up to him, I think, and just uses their back wheels to try and drag him up towards the summit.
Very difficult for Pataki, because a lot of the other riders on the squad now will have to be dedicated to Danilo De Luca, and that puts the onus on Alessandro Pataki as having to survive for himself. And that's exactly what he's doing. But that's what the sprinters do. They get themselves together in the big mountain passes, work as a solid group in the gruppetto, just to make sure that they stay within the elimination times. The elimination times on the flat stages can be as low as just 5% of the winners at finishing time. But on these big mountain stages, it creeps up to between 12 and 15%.
Well, the one rider that I've only just realised, Paul, we've hardly seen anything of, apart from his signing in one morning, is Damiano Cunego. The Lamprey boy, he hasn't lost any time yet as we go under 20k to go, but he's not clearly going that well, because he's not featuring in any of the attacking moves here at all. Former winner of the race in 2005 or 6, I can't remember now.
It was a number of years ago, and in fact the difficult thing
2004.
that he had was he in fact also had a glandular fever, which took his form away for a number of seasons, and he fought his way back up to the top end of the sport. I think, like a lot of riders, they're not going to be aggressive over the first few days of a race like this, because they realise this is a race that's really stacked up at the end. The final week of racing is absolutely atrocious if you're a non-climber, with a lot of big mountain passes and, of course, a very testing individual time trial run-in to the finish line in Rome.
Well, Team Milram also cracking big time here, and you saw the average speed there, which I think is very commendable today. Considering the terrain over the last 25 kilometres, 43 kilometres now, about 27 miles an hour. A very nice castle here, Chateau Castilla, looking down on the Alps itself as we head up towards the summit now.
A lot of these castles were built in the old days really to keep a very close eye on the valleys that lead into this part of Italy from the other countries surrounding it. They were there to dominate and control the passage of people in and out of the country.
Now, one car's gone by. I don't think this is the first sign of the kill, or is it? Well, it's down to 1:13, and that is on Gavazzi. So he hasn't been picked up by the field yet. So these boys are still holding tempo. Inside 20k to go, probably around 19 at the moment. It's a long way, and I can't see them holding off what is a lead of around 2 minutes.
Well, the main field I don't think have completely started to race in earnest. Yes, they've got a tempo set at the front end of the main field, and they'll just slowly but surely eat into that advantage. Lamprey team car has pulled off to one side there. They've gone inside of 2 minutes, so it is starting to go to the advantage of the front end of the main field. Wonder whether Ivan Bass has got the form that he had of a number of years ago, or if he's just trying to ride himself into some condition here as well. It is so very difficult, as I said earlier, Phil. Carlos Sastre. Now, he's a man also who we haven't actually talked about since the start of the Giro d'Italia.
Right.
And he has said that he hasn't come here to play. He actually is looking to try and get himself a victory.
But that guy is such a team technician. He knows exactly where to place himself all of the time. He's not. You don't see him as a final winner, yet he won the Tour de France. But at podium places, they come at him like confetti because he reads a bike race and he doesn't make many mistakes over a 3-week tour. And so, safe bet, you follow him, you're going to do something, that's for sure. But right now, just looking down there, we've mentioned one or two names we haven't seen at all in this opening few days. Incidentally, we've only lost 3 riders since the start, and sadly, one of those is Christian van der Velde from that crash. He's watching this from his hospital bed right now.
He certainly is. Carlos Sastre got his team up all around him to look after him. The team really is only here for one reason, Phil, I would have to say, and that would have to be just for Carlos Sastre. Well, Thomas Voeckler is not enjoying the climb here this afternoon either.
No, in fact, when we saw his face a little bit earlier, I thought, well, perhaps he isn't planning an attack because he doesn't look too good. But he's trying to sprint back onto the back of the group here. Maybe he's just been back to his car and rejoined the pictures. I don't know, but he's come back pretty easily there, Paul.
He's got himself back up, but he's a very strange climber as well, and that's how he survived when he had the yellow jersey in the Tour de France. He would get dropped on a number of occasions from the main field, then he would accelerate and sprint back into contact with the peloton, and then slow up again. But his weak point, I have to say, is his climbing. Team Liquigas still very happy to do all of the pacemaking at the front, and that's for 2 reasons. One is for Franco Pellizotti. Well, I think the answer is there, Phil. Looking at that face, that's not the face of a man who's having an easy time for Thomas Voeckler. Short stage, just 2.5 hours in the saddle so far, and we're inside of 20 kilometres to go.
Well, as you say, it's only 125 kilometre stage, so it's quite a late start for the riders. They almost got lunch in before they rocked away. But Voeckler there, it's hard to believe that come this July, it'll be 5 years since his great escapade in the Tour de France of 2004, where he fought all the way to the line before he finally conceded the yellow jersey to Lance Armstrong.
Armstrong was very complimentary about the performance of that young man from France, and ever since then he's been able to put that behind him and fight his way back to have a number of good professional victories. Still Liquigas in complete control. In 5th position there, though, is Danilo De Killer. De Luca, he's thinking about that Maglia Rosa at the end of the day, Phil. I'm absolutely certain. He knows that if he can get himself a top 3 finish on the stage, he'll get the pink jersey.
Well, still, it's the in-fight here. Oh dear, Garcia de Pena, who was the actual day 1 leader in the King of the Mountains, well, day 2 in effect, has now retired. So he's dropped away after winning that first climb on day 2. And now he's out of the Tour rather quickly. So I don't know what's happened there, but I would suspect he's not well. Just looking, though, at the way these riders are climbing, all the men in the overall are all together here, and they're split, don't forget, by a blanket. 2 seconds to De Luca, handful of seconds to the rest of the field. There could well be a change here if it was just a sprint finish to the top. Those few seconds could be reversed. All the bonuses will be gone if they don't bring back the leaders, but I'm not so sure. There's some good riding being done by what is a very strong Liquigas team this year.
Well, just at the back of the group, I'm not sure what's going on here, but I could just notice David Lopez going backwards. This is Kirienka. That was a mechanical problem, I think. Very often happens on a climb like this. What you see happen is a rider starts chasing his gears and the gears get jammed. So a bit of problem at the back there for Case Depart. Look at the face of Thomas Voeckler. He's not really, Phil, having a nice day out.
No, he's in trouble here, and he's seeing double right now, I would suspect. And he's got a long way still to go up the climb. 19 kilometres an hour for the chasing pack, so they're clearly coming at a lot quicker than the leaders, who are managing 18.
That's Gavazzi there, just getting caught by the front end of the main field. And you see a great team player there. The first thing he thought about was as he came to the front end of the main field was if he had an extra drink, he was going to pass it on to one of his team leaders, and that could very well have been Damiano Cunego.
Now, I'm not sure whether he's dropping back to his team car there, he's dropping off the breakaway and deciding he's just going to pedal up here and save his energy. Well, no, there he comes back again. Yeah, as he pedals back onto the group. I don't think there's any particular passengers here, but on the other hand, as they look straight ahead, that's where they're headed to today, and it's still a long way to go.
Having a hard time getting used to Giovanni Visconti in that new jersey of that new team of his, ISD. And so used to seeing him formerly ride in the Quick Step jersey. It almost resembles a Rock Racing jersey, this one of ISD.
It does,
colourful.
Actually. Yeah. And in fairness, Visconti has been the leader of this race on the road today. That would have been something to celebrate. He's led before, of course, in the past, but on this occasion it would have been nice in the Centennial Tour. It's 100 years since the first edition. It's not the 100th Giro, it's the 92nd Giro d'Italia. We've had the 100th Milan-San Remo this year, though. The forerunner of these great Italian races, both organised by the same organisation. And Liquigas continuing to set tempo, clearly riding to orders here as they keep the pressure on at the front. And they've got two leaders at the moment until somebody stands out, Pelazzotti and Ivan Basso. This is the race at the back.
So Andrei Grivko is the rider at the back, again a rider from ISD. Just to put it into perspective, this final climb of the day, the length of time that the riders will be going uphill is around about an hour and 10 minutes. Ouch.
Yeah, it's a good point. You mustn't think of it like that, Paul. You'll get upset. Just a little drink required here.
Gabriele Bossiso, one of the sprinters on Team LPR, but he today is working for the team leader, Danilo De Luca, and that's why he's gone back to the team car to pick up the final bottles before the real assault of the climb. It really does look a little bit like Switzerland here as we start to get up into the high Alps.
Well, that might make Beutler feel a little bit better, because it was in 2004 when he held the yellow jersey in the Tour de France for 10 days. He battled through the Alps as well before Lance finally swatted him and brushed him away and took over the race lead. There's the little official logo of the Giro this year, done very nicely in the field as the peloton goes by. Still a very big peloton, that, when you see it from the helicopter, which means that the pace hasn't quite gone on, or the hill hasn't quite got steep enough to crack them just yet. Good steady tempo riding being done by the boys from Liquigas. It'd be nice if we got a time check right now.
Well, we're waiting for a time check. This is the lead of the race. It has come inside of the 2 minutes. I think next time we get a time check, we'll be looking at around about 1 minute and 30 seconds. Onto the flatter part of this climb, the easier gradient of the climb, and all of a sudden you can see Thomas Voeckler has recovered and decided to come back to the front end of the main field to help everybody else. Jose Serpa on the far side. In fact, that's not Serpa, that's one of the teammates. In fact, that is Carlos Ochoa. You see that Serramenti have managed to put two riders into this leading group, and I think going to be a dangerous team when we come up to the big mountain passes. Ochoa is the front place rider, and Serpa just a little bit further back.
Well, in fairness, the Serramenti team, or the to give it its full name, the Di Giovanni Serramenti team, has become much more integrated as an all-round squad in all of the events this year. They've put on board David Rebellin and got Scarponi. They've rescued him out of the doldrums of the doping candidates of the years gone by, and he's on the team as well. He rode very strongly in the Milan-San Remo. There's a little chat going on here between Liquigas now, just asking any progress being made on these leaders, because Liquigas clearly riding to a plan, and it can only be to launch Pelazzotti and or Basso towards the finish and see if they can steal the day, and maybe a Maglia Rosa. 91 in the breakaway is Visconti from the ISD team. They're also quite like the Team Columbia High Road teams. It's just slightly stronger colouring.
A little bit confusing there is Franco Pelazzotti, for many years regarded as the future of Italian cycling. He's still yet to confirm that, although he has finished in the top 10 in the Giro d'Italia. I was actually hoping before, Phil, that when you mentioned the team at Serramenti, you were going to give them their full title.
No.
It's Serramenti, PVC, Di Giovanni, Androni Giacottoli. Now try saying that in full sprint.
Well, if we said that, the tour will be over. We've got no chance, have we? But Visconti, you may remember, he's up in the breakaway again. He's been the leader on the road. He had a magical tour last year when he did lead in his pink jersey. He got 8 pink jerseys in all. before he fell away from the action. And so probably because he's tasted it once, he thought he might be able to do it again. Today was a good day to go on the attack. He got the time, but at 15 kilometres to go, he's now out of the pink jersey again, and the battle returns to the peloton, split by seconds at the head of the field.
Again, a lot of riders here for Team Astana. The man with the black helmet and black overshoes, Lance Armstrong, wears number 21. Given the mantle of leader of the team numerically, but I do believe the leader of that team is going to be Levi Leipheimer a little bit later on. Leipheimer has already had great success out of the 2009 season, and I think is ideally prepared for the Giro d'Italia this year, and of course for the Tour de France.
I see two Rabobank riders down there, Paul, and that'll be Maurizio Ardila, who won the Tour of Britain a few years ago, and I'll have to say not done anything since. And also Denis Menchov, the Russian rider on Rabobank, another man we haven't mentioned, but so far he hasn't missed a move either. 59 seconds, so they're actually coming up quite quickly. There's Pelazzotti at the back of the line, indicating a protected rider, not doing any of the pacemaking. So he's one that might make a move towards the finish.
There's Gilberto Simoni just eating, drinking over to the right-hand side as well. He's a man who will be dangerous at the top of a climb like this. And he's actually had rather an interesting participation in different sides of the sport. He rode a lot of cyclocross during the winter season, but he's also this year participated in some mountain biking events as well. I think coming towards the end of his career, Phil, he still is very much enjoying his bike riding.
Well, as I said earlier, he's had 7 podium finishes in the top 3 in the Giro d'Italia. The only man ahead of him is Felice Gimondi, who's had 9. Time's running out for poor old Gilberto, but maybe. He's not the great time trialist, but he is an absolutely magical climber. He's small, he's light, and he can dash up these mountains like a scalded cat. But we'll see. He hasn't actually done that much yet. But you never know at this stage whether it's unfitness or age catching up, do you?
Or whether he just is biding his time to see how people are going to react to the last week of the race. Just looking over to the left-hand side, that's the front end of the race, and that's on the right-hand side, the race route here this afternoon. It's a zigzag little winding road of 25 kilometres to get up to the Alpe di Susi.
Fast tempo climbing at the moment. None of the lung-bursting nose to the front wheel climbs. They're still lying ahead on this course, and the last 10 days they'll have their first share of those. But right now it's keeping the revs high. There's a chance to look down the valley there from his rather nice De Rosa bicycle, and he probably won't see anything, but he might if they're tucked in under the ridges there.
Pietro Pioli, and he's keeping the tempo nice and high, but he will keep in the back of his mind, Phil, the thought that he is a member of Team LPR, and what he's going to have to do a little later on the climb is turn around from being an attacking rider in the breakaway to a defensive rider for Danilo De Luca. As we pull back like that, we're now inside of the 1 minute distance between the front end of the main field and the peloton. And that peloton is now slowly starting to reduce in numbers under the pressure of Team Liquigas. And this is what makes you realise it's very, very tough being a Team Domestique when you have to bang your head against the wall like this for kilometre after kilometre for your leader.
And the other Team Domestiques who are in the pack and they're under pressure, they simply drop off because they know they're safe for the day. They know they'll be called upon later on by the leaders. So why waste the energy to hold the position that they know at the end of the day isn't going to mean a lot to the team? I know that amateur cyclists will say, you know, when they ride a big tour like this, they count the position they finish. But for a professional, it really doesn't matter. They're in the race to do a job for their team leaders. And if this isn't the day to help out, there's no point in suffering by holding wheels. So drop off, ride home, live to fight another day.
I just noticed there, right in the middle of the pack, over to the left-hand side of the long line, you can see the black helmet of Lance Armstrong just moved to the front there by his mate, Chechu Rubiera, a rider who at the end of last season had actually decided to retire from the sport. Then all of a sudden he heard that Lance was going to make a comeback, so he said, all right then, well I think I'll do one more year, and he seems to be very much enjoying his season.
Well, I think a lot of people have been revitalised by the return of Armstrong because he got quite a welcome at the start in Venice. All the riders willing to shake his hand and say welcome back to the peloton. Just when we thought we'd seen the last of you, here you are again. Of course, they've never seen him in the Giro peloton before. Just over 13 kilometres to go. Visibly now that peloton has accelerated here, and you're right, it's going down in numbers. We're getting down into time trial mode here as Liquigas have clearly put their cards on the table. Face up, we're out to win the day.
They know how important this mountaintop finish is. It is a very long mountaintop finish up to the summit of Alpo de Siusi, 25 kilometers, but up to 1,850 meters in altitude. There's Thomas Lovquist. He is the leader of the Maglia Rosa competition, but also the best young rider from Team Columbia High Road. Ochoa on the front now in this leading group of riders, starting to pacemake his teammate there, Jose Serpa. Thomas Vogler, despite being in difficulty on a number of occasions, Phil, is still there and still present in this leading breakaway.
That's right, you mentioned Ochoa, Paul. I didn't think he'd made the split, actually, because he wasn't in my original list, but there he is. So obviously he did make the split over the top of that first climb and jump in with the group.
Mr. Armstrong has changed helmets there over on the right-hand side. In fact, he's come to the front to act as a team domestique, because you may well just have noticed locked behind him was Levi Leipheimer. This is a good stage for Levi Leipheimer to try and move up high in the overall classification as well, because he's still up in the top 10. Well, that's what happens when your job has been done for the day, Phil. You just lights out, no sound, and you have to get to the finish still.
I know, my heart's in my mouth when you see them coming towards Alpe d'Huez, the domestiques, working flat out to launch people like Armstrong at the mountain itself. They are riding at 100% effort, and they've still got to get up that mountain to finish within the time. And I never fail to be mesmerised by that. There's Simoni, still looking quite cool. He's only lost just over a minute at the moment. Remember, the gap officially is 2 seconds between first and second. Even Armstrong, with a good sprint up here today, could be the next man in the Maglia Rosa, and that would be something to write home.
It certainly would. That was Silvestro Smid, by the way, of Team Liquigas, who'd done his job for the day. And Thomas Vogler, you see, he's not very good when it comes to the steeper gradients of the climb. He's just dropped to the back of this group, but as soon as the gradient starts to ease off, he comes to the front and does his share of the pacemaking, just to maybe hold on that little bit longer. But I think at around about 45 seconds now, Phil, the writing is pretty much on the wall. These guys are eventually going to be back in the main field.
A little bit of a feed up the mountain. I'm not sure that's allowed, is it,
It's
at
a
this
bit
stage
tricky.
of the race? But might be a penalty for that, taking on drinks so near the end of the stage on the climb. But nonetheless, you mentioned Sylvester Schmidt there, Paul. He's never won a race, but he calls himself a super domestique, and I think he's always found his way around the big teams, the Polish man. He's been around about 5 or 6 years. Never won a race, but it's never been his job to win a race.
Well, many riders have paid an awful lot of money to be team helpers, team domestiques, and not have any of their own ambition, but just to ride on the front end of the main field. Take, for example, one of the team managers of Team Astana, Sean Yates. He really was a man that could ride on the front end of a main field for 40 or 50 or 60 kilometres at 50 kilometres an hour, and he was worth 2 or 3 teammates. That's why he made an awful lot of money out of the sport of professional cycling. The only time he really felt that he needed to have his own ambition was one day a year, and that was for Paris-Roubaix, a race which he absolutely loved.
Yeah, well, a tough race for a tough man, and certainly tough roads, there's no question about that. Still an empty road there, but I don't think it's as empty as we think. I think there could be in that gap already. As we're looking here at the ISD rider Visconti. He was with Quick Step, as Paul said.
I think that little wave of the hand there, Phil, is
He's
an
going.
indication
Oh, well.
That's why, because they knew Thomas Vogler knew the writing was on the wall a lot quicker than anybody else, and he quickly scarpered back to the main field. And so for this early morning breakaway, the glory is now completely and utterly over. Now, Phil, what happens is the race will start to try and figure out how we're going to get the stage victory. And the winner of the stage, as you said earlier, could very, very easily be the new leader of this bike race. So close are the top 6 or 7 riders in the overall standings.
Well, it's more the early afternoon breakaway today. I think we got lunch before the start, but even so, they're all together, and now the way is clear for the attacks. They brought them back quite early on the climb, really. And now, oh, well, here we go. This is Barlow World having a go straight away, and I think that was to be expected now, as it's a free-for-all, and they're all trying to hit out at Liquigas.
Well, everybody's seen the work that's been done by Liquigas, and this is a very annoying thing when you've been sitting on the front end of the main field. The attack happened from about 10th or 12th position.
It might be Schuler who's gone again here, the rider who's away a couple of days early. It's not Mauricio Soler, that's for sure.
He's a man who knows exactly how to ride well in the climbs, and he's going to rattle the cage of Team Liquigas. In fact, it's Gianpaolo Schuler, as you said. They may well not be too concerned about him because he's outside the top 100 in the overall classification, Phil, almost a quarter of an hour behind.
Well, at this moment in the Giro, Barlow World want wins of stages. Robbie Hunter hasn't done at all well in the sprints so far. and he won't be doing well today. This is not his style. Though, in fairness, Robbie can be a very strong rider in the mountains, evidence when he rode alongside Floyd Landis back in the year Floyd won the race and then was disqualified in the Tour de France. Dries Devrens, he's having a very good season. He's been in front of our cameras a lot this year, deciding maybe chance. Now that could be a good leg up there for Schüler if he gets up there.
That's the important thing, but you see they haven't even disorganised Team Liquigas at the front. They've got their own tactics and they just let all these guys ride off the front. It's almost like swatting flies or swatting mosquitoes. It's annoying to see these small little attacks come off the front end of the main field, but as a squad that's on a mission, you've got to remain concentrated on the job at hand, and I think that's what Liquigas will continue to do for the next 3 or 4 kilometres. Another rider from Liquigas there, you see, job done, slipping backwards out of the main field. When your job is done for the day, all you've got to still, Phil, try and drag your body up to the top of the mountain.
And it gets very, very steep. There is talk in the peloton today, Paul, that De Luca has fitted a 39.27 bottom gear. So this must be quite some finish.
It certainly is. De Luca, like a lot of the other riders, has been out to see this. This is what the climb is like here this afternoon. It's almost 25 kilometres in length. There's 1,500 metres of climbing. The average grade is 6%. The steepest part, though, is 11.
Yeah, which doesn't really demand the gear like De Luca is reported to have fitted for 39.27. But if you can pedal those gears a la Lance Armstrong, then you're saving energy as well. You might get a chance later when he comes up the top.
Schüler, the man who started that little move off the front, wasn't able to stay with the Belgian rider there. In fact, he's been dispatched and he's slipping back to the front end of the main field.
Well, there aren't many great Belgian climbers, not since the days of Lucien Van Imp, who set the record of King of the Mountains in the Tour de France. But here we have now Devrens just trying to pedal away, keep a nice tempo. The peloton themselves are now under extreme pressure.
This is a group going off the back end of the main field, and this is what's waiting for them at the top of the climb. The Tifosi, the Italian fans, have turned out in their numbers here because they're looking to see whether or not they're going to see an Italian take over the mantle of leadership at the top end of the main field. Nice to see there Chris Horner up at the front on the left-hand side. And I have to say this is an extremely strong and solid Astana squad, and I have a feeling this year that Levi Leipheimer has got the makings of winning this bike race overall.
Well, he's riding, if I may say so, a typical Leipheimer race at the moment. Not missing a move, not being seen, just watching everybody else. It's still a long way to go. Winner of the Tour of California, of course, and riding extremely well in Europe too. And who knows, this might be his target of the year as Astana go to the Tour de France with Alberto Contador. Of course, Lance Armstrong and probably Leipheimer. Goodness knows who's going to be the leader of that team. And I bet they'll start the Tour de France, Paul, saying it's open house. We'll let the road decide who the leader is.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how they discuss it in public, but I think what I'd prefer to hear is what they're saying in the locked-up rooms before the team meetings at the end of every day. Although Armstrong, he will find out, I think, Phil, in the last week of this bike race, whether or not he's going to be a serious contender for the Tour de France later in the year. Just 23 kilometres an hour. It gives you an idea of just how steep this climb is. And still, it's Liquigas on the front, but they're starting to pop off one by one. Just now down to 3 men, and De Luca looking very nervous, looking over his shoulders, waiting for the moment when he can launch what he likes to be known as his killer attacks.
There's the Astana boys. They're packing the ranks as a team. The man in black on the far side, Armstrong, still looking extremely good. Just when he feels the tempo dropping, he gets out of the saddle, accelerates a little bit. Doesn't look to be under pressure. He eased off on the climb yesterday when he was right there. Cost him a few seconds. I don't think he's worrying too much about that at this stage. But Lance just doesn't know how his body is going to react as we go in towards the second week of this year's Giro.
Moving up into second place, it's Ivan Basso. He knows that very shortly. I think today, Phil, Ivan Basso is going to have to sacrifice himself for Pellizotti. That was Horner just off the far side. There's the leader. There's Leipheimer. They're all moving to the front. I'm looking to see where Lance Armstrong is. Aqua Sapone will be thinking about their man Stefano Garzelli.
Yeah.
He could create the big surprise and take the victory away from everybody here this afternoon. That's Horner on the far side with his jersey open. He really, I think, was a great loss to Silence Lotto losing Chris Horner, because he was a real ally for Cadel Evans' quest to try and win the Tour de France.
And just taking a drink down there, I was just wondering where he was, is Damiano Cunego. So he's in the pack, observing as well, but not exactly projecting himself at all at the moment. This is still a big field. Menchoff, the little rider on Rabobank, just passed through our picture there. That's the small rider Maurizio Ardila. Astana got at least 4 riders, possibly 5 riders in this final move.
Well, there were 4 there, and sitting up at the front is Chris Horner, so that makes 5 quite comfortably. Horner, he's a strong character. He's been around for an awful long time. Tasted European racing very early on when he came across to ride for the Française des Jeux. Couldn't hack the European lifestyle, so went back to the United States and became an incredibly dominant feature in the US racing circuit. Then all of a sudden, towards the latter part of his career, he decided to come back to Europe, and he's absolutely and utterly flourished.
Horner is a marvellous character and one that's well respected. There was rumours at some stage he wasn't getting on with Lance Armstrong, yet here he is back on the same team as Lance, and seemingly one of the strong. He's very much a super domestique, because he's a top 10 finisher if he gets his own way, as he's proven with his rides in the Tour de France. 15th in the Tour in 2007. Sadly broke his, I think it was his arm or his collarbone in the Elk Grove race in August last year, and so he's always seemed to be fighting back from some problems. But I really think that the Silence Lotto team made something of a mistake, allowing him to pass from them back to Astana this year.
And there's Brakovic, a rider who I think is a man who could be a great 3-week Tour contender in a couple of years' time, never far away from Lance Armstrong. He wears number 22. Just to finish off on the relationship between Lance Armstrong and Chris Horner, Phil, if you are an adept of Twitter.com, you can go there and see all the funny remarks that Lance has got to make about his redneck man, Chris Horner.
Well, he'll rely on him today, because Horner's keeping an eye on life at the front, and he's got all of his team leaders just behind him in the pack. Quite a few guys being forced to dance on those old pedals now, aren't there, because the hill keeps kicking a little bit, then it shallows out. But there's no change of the pacemakers at the front, and De Luca is sitting in the slipstream watching and waiting. Haven't seen a lot of Lovequist, but he's there.
I also noticed the rider in the black jersey of Cervelo Test Team, Carlos Sastre, just sitting in the pack, waiting to make his move. If you cast your mind back almost 12 months to the Tour de France, we hardly ever saw Carlos Sastre go to the front end of the Tour de France until, of course, we hit a certain climb called the Alpe d'Huez, and then he dynamited the race and wrenched the overall lead away from Cadel Evans.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much game over all the way to the finish. And I wonder if that's the tactic that he's going to adopt here in the Giro d'Italia, if he's actually gone into his race book and put a cross on one of the big tough stages.
No, I'm sure. He's such a nice guy. He's not aggressive in his speech, he's not aggressive in his nature, and frankly he's not really aggressive in his stage racing either, but he doesn't miss moves, and he makes his play when he thinks he can make it count. Alpe d'Huez it was on the Tour de France. He made it count, he won the Tour. So he's watching to see how the Giro unfolds. It's a long way to go, and he knows there are big testing moments ahead. And in fairness, he's not really shown any great form, just steady and consistent. He had a good Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but he didn't do anything in the result, but he watched and he finished with the leaders.
Very impressive to note there that still in contact with this group was the rider from Garmin Slipstream, and that was Bradley Wiggins. And Wiggins, much better renowned as an individual time trialist or a track rider on the Pursuit, but he's still in contact here. Mr. Lance Armstrong, still 6th overall in the classification.
He's dropped to the back of the group here. He's got Chechu alongside him, Rubiera. He looks to me, Paul, as though he might be feeling a little bit of pressure here, Lance.
He's got a lot of testing to do on his body, Phil. You know, it's a long time to have away from this top end of the sport, and the one thing that Lance probably missed because of that accident he had where he broke his collarbone was the top end training, the kind of top end that you can only really get from top competition, where you have to push the engine up to its maximum number of revolutions, and revolutions in professional cycling is heartbeats per minute. And Lance Armstrong at the top of his career could get his heartbeat up to over 200 beats a minute in an individual time trial.
Well, just at the moment, I think Lance has found himself in a spot of bother here. He's got his teammates around him. He's got 2 more up front, so that makes 6 Astanas and a little bit of a gap forming here. This is not a good sign. Leipheimer will need to make sure he doesn't slip away with that group. This is a Garzelli again, never far from the front, trying a tentative. Maybe somebody's told them that in the little earpieces that Armstrong is in trouble.
I'm not sure that's a tentative, actually. I think that's a tentative in reverse gear by Stefano Garzelli, because he looked to me, Phil, as if he was going backwards there, and that's all because of this pacemaking by initially all of Team Liquigas, but it's now down to one man who's doing the pacemaking, and that's Ivan Basso. There is Ivan Leipheimer in about 6th position, looking very comfortably at the front end of the main field, and alongside him he's got his teammate to look after him, and that's Chris Horner.
Yep. You're right, in fact he is in trouble there, Garzelli, so the pressure's gone on. Lance here, determined. Look, this is the man who won the Tour de France 7 times, apparently with such ease from watching television pictures, but that's a very different face. This is the man who's coming back now, and he's going to take a little while to settle in.
That's David Navarro, the smaller rider, over on the right-hand side, and never far away from him, the old mate, Chechu Rubiera. But this is not a good day for Stefano Garzelli, former winner of this race. He was so aggressive over the first few days. Maybe he used too much ammunition, Phil, because as I remember Barry Hoban, the great British sprinter from the Tour de France, who won himself 8 stages in the Tour, said to me one time, in a big bike race, a 3-week bike race, you've got to be very careful how many times you dip into the energy levels, because if you use too much energy at the first part of a bike race like this, you won't see the finish. There's Brad Wiggins.
Well, Wiggins is still doing that. His ambition now is to move away from the track where he got a gold, silver and bronze in the Olympic Games last year in Beijing, to go with the ones he won 4 years prior to that. And he's been honoured by the Queen for his services to track cycling, but his real ambition now is to become a road racing cyclist, as is so often the case with the pursuiters on the track. And now he's trying to make sure he can turn in a performance here. I think like all of the Garmin, they were disappointed they didn't quite close that gap down in the team time trial, but it wasn't to be. Damiano Cunego, he's got his name on the screen.
Finally, but he's got his name off the back of that group as well. He's under a little bit of difficulty there. That's him, wears number 101 for Team Lamprey, trying to keep the tempo nice and high to try and stay in contact with what is becoming a very select group of bike riders, and we're still an awful long way from the top of this climb. Bear in mind, we've probably been climbing now, Phil, for around about 45 minutes.
And it is not steep, but it is a very fast tempo climbing it, and that's making the difference. Some of these riders, even climbers, climb at different speeds, and this is a really ripper as they're coming up here, and it's hurting a lot of riders. Cunego, don't forget, won this race in 2004. He was 4th in 2006 and 5th in 2007. He didn't ride last year, if I remember rightly, but just looking down at the group here now, these riders are just wanting this race to finish.
Chechu Rubiera is the man on the front. Alongside him, Lance Armstrong. He's pacing his leader back into the bike race, making sure that he doesn't lose too much time. Lance, of course, don't forget, coming back from a very nasty injury where he broke his collarbone, or should I say smashed his collarbone in the Castilla-Leon race. This is the heads of state. That's Felix Cardenas in the red jersey there from Team Bala World, and just behind him Juan Maurizio Soler, who this year seems to be making some kind of a comeback to the top end of the sport after being dogged for a number of years, Phil, by some serious injuries.
Well, Cardenas, King of the Mountains in the Tour of Spain a couple of years ago, so he won't be finding this too difficult, although they're all holding tempo and just hoping they survive. He's got this little group here. Levi is sitting perfectly just now, watching everybody. The pink jersey of Thomas Lundqvist, this young man from Scandinavia. There have been a few stars from Scandinavia over the years, particularly in the Giro d'Italia. Sven-Åke Nielsen comes to mind, and Costa Pettersson. But this young man is the next in line, and doesn't look to be under any pressure just now. But 2 seconds is nothing, and Danilo De Luca is haunting him.
Well, he certainly is haunting him. Again, a lot of riders under pressure at the back end of the race, just trying to stay in contact. This is a bit of a surprise because that was Marzio Brusegin going off the back. Now, that's an indication just how much of the pressure is on in this climb here. Brusegin, formerly a rider who's finished in the top 10. He's won the individual time trials. I think on one occasion he finished in 3rd place, and that was just 12 months ago.
That's absolutely right, and did it by virtue of his good time trials and his ability to hang on in the mountains. Well, he's not got that problem just now. There's the service car beginning to eat through, so they're starting to go around the riders who are being left now to get home as best they can. Life is not so hot at the back end of the race. That little group is probably 25, maybe 30 riders now in this group.
Yes, but still solidly sitting there in fourth place is Danilo De Luca, thinking about that time bonus at the end. He's got the acceleration to get himself the stage victory. I'm very impressed by Lovquist though, Phil, because this young man has got the mantle of the Maglia Rosa on his shoulders for the first time in his career, and he's handling it like a man with great experience. But I think that's the important thing to remember about Columbia Team High Road. It's a team of riders who support each other, and they feed off their own success.
Well, they've had a great opening week. 2 different riders in pink. Team time trial stage win. But in fairness, the wrong man is in pink, I think. I think it's Michael Rogers who is the long-term project. But right now, they're doing nothing particular. They're not taking a position of a team leader because they're not setting the pace here. They're allowing the Lovquist just to follow the work being done by Liquigas, and they're keeping the noses clean. It's life with Lance here, and I think that's about shows the size of the quality of this man and his reputation when they give him 3 teammates to escort on the upper slopes now of the Alpe de Suzy. Now it's being left here for just one rider before we get to Pelazzotti. Now, does this mean, Paul, that Pelazzotti's the team leader or Basso?
I have to say Pelazzotti is the team leader here. I think they had that discussion this morning. Ivan Basso, he's 11th overall. He's lost a little bit of time. He's 53 seconds down in the overall standings. Pelazzotti, I think, Phil, is the man who's got the form. He's not been away from the sport for 2 years like Ivan Basso, and he's a lot more solid when it comes to the Giro d'Italia. Damiano Cunego, on the other hand, is not having a great time. He started the day in the top 10 in the overall standings, and he really is suffering here to try and keep himself at the top end of the Giro.
I don't know if you saw his back sprocket there, Paul, but he's riding a 27 as well. That was a huge sprocket, and he's in it. So this, it's hard to know just how steep the climb is from a helicopter. It looks like a flat road just now.
Well,
but this is hard now.
It also looks as if Carlos Sastre is having a hard time there in the black jersey, and he's under a little bit of bother, and that's because of the acceleration that's coming here. It's a bit of a surprise for me to see that, well, that's another surprise too, because that looks to me as if that's
Pelazzotti. That was Pelazzotti.
And
well, where was he? Coming off the back?
Coming off the back of the group, but there's a lot of pressure there, and after all of the work that's been done by his team, that surprises me. This is amazing to see Armstrong coming back to the Giro d'Italia, coming back to the 3-week Grand Tours, is in a spot of bother.
Well, first
Simone.
week of any major tour, people worry. Form comes, form goes. It's what happens in the second and third week that counts. Simone, also a climber of absolute note, is having to hold that gap now. And the man doing all of the pain is this rider, Ivan Basso. Very, very popular man in Italy, even when he was found to have to serve a suspension for apparently blood doping.
Armstrong's lost himself around about 1 1/4 minutes, but let's bear in mind this is a man coming back to the sport, and not only now after 3.5 years out of the sport, but Phil also after a very nasty injury. All he's got to do on a day like this is survive and make sure he doesn't panic, don't get too far into the red zone, and ride himself into form later in this 3-week event, because he will be counted upon by Levi Leipheimer, I think, in his quest to try and win the Giro. But this is a brilliant performance by Ivan Basso, not even asking anybody to come to the front and help, and he's put riders like Gilberto Simoni, riders like Carlos Sastre, riders like his own teammate Franco Pelazzotti into serious difficulty.
Yes, Basso, who has always played second to Lance Armstrong in the Tour de France and could never beat him, is now causing a bit of pain to the American, who is just about holding at the groups in front in sight right now. But Basso, just behind him is the killer, Danilo De Luca. Lovquist is doing nothing. Menchov is there now on the shoulder of Lovquist.
Also David Arroyo, the rider from Case d'Epargne, he was the rider just at the back there. You can see he's managed to get onto the wheel of Carlos Sastre, who, although he was in difficulty, has seen the danger of this group and has ridden himself back up to the front.
See, that's the cleverness of Sastre. He just fills the gaps and just, you don't know he's there. He's haunting in the background. We've lost a lot of big names now from this group.
But we haven't lost Levi Leipheimer or Chris Horner. Horner was just sitting on the back of that group there, so Levi Leipheimer will be happy in the fact that he's got a teammate up alongside him a little bit later on. And Menchov, the man there in orange for Team Rabobank, is looking very solid.
7 riders are here in this group now as they come into the last 3 kilometres of the day. They have simply whittled it down, and it has all been done by Team Liquigas. We thought that Basso was helping Pelazzotti launch to victory, but the speed of Basso has got rid of Pelazzotti, his teammate. As you look here at the group, 101 is... I couldn't quite read what he said on that man's chest, but it's in English because that's an American. And Basso here wanted help there too. He looked over earlier and De Luca did not come through at all. Neither did Menchov, nor Sastre, nor Leipheimer. So they're just letting the Italian ride on the front here. This is the 3 kilometre gap again, and that's the gap to the next group on the road.
Alto de Susi, it says on the back of that man's
We're going
chest
the right
there,
way then.
and he's definitely going the right way, heading himself up towards the top. Lance Armstrong riding himself, and bear in mind, just to put that into perspective, Phil, Armstrong is probably riding in the top 15 riders on the road, and that's not a bad performance when you think about the names of the men who are riding this bike race behind him on the road today.
And didn't start recovering from a broken collarbone either. In fact, Cunego said he thought his form was excellent. And he's going to be a little bit confused by this because he himself was not expecting to follow up the groups. He was expecting to ride well. There he is on the right of our picture, coming through on the rails. Meanwhile, at the head of the race is Ivan Basso, followed by Danilo De Luca, Denny Menchov, Levi Leipheimer, Chris Horner. And right on the back, Paul, and dangling is the Maglia Rosa now.
Yes, I'm a bit surprised to see that one man who seems to be missing from that group, who I would have expected to be here, is Michael Rogers, because Michael Rogers, a couple of days ago, I was tipping to get himself the Maglia Rosa. And in fact, Lovquist is in difficulty. He's really hanging on there to try and stay at the back end of that group, but I think it may well be 1 kilometre too far. Oh, he's back. He's back.
He's holding. The old elastic is going in and out, but not snapping. And he's learning to suffer now because he's suddenly realised too that he'll know that Michael Rogers is not here either. All of a sudden the pressure of the team is on his shoulders here. And just looking at Horner there, look across and stare into the eyes. I think it was Horner, I think it was Leipheimer. Look into the eyes of Lovquist. I don't see Horner at the moment now. Where's he gone? Oh, he's right there, just behind Leipheimer.
Yep, the two riders from Astana looking comfortably. They know they've got this young rider under pressure now, but I'm not sure that any of them have got the legs to attack for the moment because of the pressure which was put on the front end of this race by Ivan Basso, who finally is getting some assistance from someone else, and this time it's Danilo De Luca di Chila.
Into the last 2 kilometres of an interminable climb here of the Alpe de Suzy. It was 25 kilometres from the bottom to the top. They've done 23, and we've got it down to 7 riders in front. The killer goes up now to accelerate just that little bit. Surely he's not going to hurt Basso now, who's done all of the work on this climb.
Further down, we're looking at around about 1.5 minutes. This is the group of Lance Armstrong. He's got teammates around him, Chechu Ribiera on the front. But this is the front end of the Giro d'Italia now, and I have to say Ivan Basso has got the bit between the teeth. He's got the power in those legs. He knows that this mountaintop finish is all about time. He probably is not concerned about the stage victory here this afternoon, but putting himself up at the top end of the border. Carlos Sastre is also sitting at the back end of that group. Watch out for him, Phil, when it comes down to the sprint towards the end, because he may well be thinking about a stage victory.
Well, although we're concentrating on the leaders here, Michael Rogers is riding approximately 25 seconds behind this group, and he's got a couple of riders with him. Lawrence Ten Dam of Rabobank is one of them. And whether he'll come back, though, I doubt it with the tempo being maintained at this speed. There's Cunego, who I would think on the road is behind Rogers, but I'm not too sure. But as we're watching the Giro d'Italia in Italy, I'll go with the fact he's behind Rogers.
Armstrong concentrating now, trying to get himself back into the psyche of a Grand Tour rider. I think he's really enjoyed his return to the sport this year. We've seen him much more approachable to the crowd, and much more approachable to the press at races like the Tour Down Under and of course the Amgen Tour of California. Denny Menchov on the far side using a massive gear compared to the gear being used by this man Danilo De Luca. He's put small gears on here this afternoon for this very long climb, turning over at a very high cadence.
I'm just wondering whether Cunego is trying to get back into the action here. He hasn't blown to the world. Lance is looking a bit tired right now. He's just sitting there behind Chechu, but he's losing a little bit of time. I think to be expected. Very often you lose time in these first climbs, and maybe in a week's time he'll be a different rider. But then, of course, if you've lost big time, you've also lost the Tour.
I'll tell you one thing, Phil, he looks to have recovered a fraction there. Just that little glimpse at Lance Armstrong, his pedalling action was that little bit more fluid. I think he's riding within himself on these mountains because he doesn't want to push himself right to the red zone at this level of the sport, especially not knowing how his body's going to react, having been away from this kind of punishment for 3.5 years.
Well, this stage was only 125 kilometres, but in all honesty, it feels as though we've been cycling the whole day today. It's been a hard slog as they come up towards the top of the Alpe d'Huez.
I just saw Mick Rogers just coming round the corner there. Mick Rogers was probably 5 or 6 seconds off the back end of that group, and he's obviously ridden well within himself, Phil, and he's riding himself back up to that lead group.
Well, he's pulled back about 18-20 seconds then, if that was Mick Rogers coming back. The pink jersey's also recovered, so clearly they have slowed a little bit at the front because they're thinking now, the finish. Small bonuses, remember, if the bonuses fall in the right order, there will be a change. Tries to get back on terms. That's Lawrence Ten Dam sitting on his back wheel, and a rider from, I think, Case Depon as well. Well, that would be a turn up for the book, wouldn't it, if they could just land that and snatch it from under the leaders' noses.
Well, that would be David Arroyo, who's coming back there as well for Case Depania, the rider in the black and red jersey. They're inside of 600 metres to go. Well, Mickey Rogers has saved himself today.
Well, that is a fine piece of riding. And now they're starting to think about a sprint finish. I know I'd like to win. I make no bones about it. I'd love to see Chris Horner win today.
Well, he would deserve to get the victory, and if he's got any chance at all, he will. Look at that Carlos Sastre moving over on the right-hand side.
He's such a crafty rider. Look at that. He's waited and waited and waited. He's watched the infighting, and now he rides for his new team, Cervelo Test Team. That is a huge acceleration. It's not quite Alpe d'Huez, but who's that? Menchoff's gone over the top of him, and Denny Menchoff is ripping away here now. He's caught the killer on one leg as well. Well, this will be a turn up from the buck. This is the first time Denny Menchoff has been to the front of the race since we left Venice, and he's going to take a stage win with it as he comes up towards the line. Unless De Luca can get on turns, but I think that gap is opening here. There will be a time finish, and the Russian rider on Rabobank, Denny Menchoff, has thrown a real spanner in the works here. But Danilo De Luca has got a bonus, and I think that will assure him now of the next Maglia Rosa. Second for De Luca, a win for Menchoff.
Well, I don't think he needed the time bonus there, Phil, because there's a gap between him and the Maglia Rosa as well as they came up to the finishing line. What an acceleration. In fact, Carlos Sastre, the man who made that big move to try and get himself the stage victory, has lost himself for 15 to 20 seconds because of that final acceleration in the last 500 metres. And so too did Mickey Rogers get slightly tailed off.
I say he's lost at least 20 seconds, Mick Rogers, as he comes up towards the line, Paul, because they were, it's not even him. They were unhitched there as they came in. He's just finished. But we'll wait to see what the time gaps are. But I think he's probably lost a good 20 seconds there.
Yeah, very easily. This is Maurizio Soler coming up with Gilberto Simoni. He's a man who is riding a lot better than he has over the last 12 months, I would have to say.
Well, that was a terrific turn-up for the book, as we've now seen Denny Menchoff let all the infighting of the Italian teams, let them get on with it and then finish it off. I thought that was the move that would have done it. Sastre trying to steal it for Cervelo. A stage win at this stage of the race would have been a great result for that team, but just look at the speed of Menchoff coming up on the left.
Yep. Very powerful Denny Menchoff. The size of the gear that he's using really is unbelievable. Look at Danilo De Luca just behind him there, though, Phil. He's using a much smaller gear, but he's trying to get himself into the slipstream of the Russian, but it's obviously not going to happen on this occasion.
Well, I reckon he rode this climb, De Luca, and he's racing here to Maglia Rosa now. It's no stranger to the Maglia Rosa, of course, but he's finally got it at the second attempt, and Lockvist has lost a little bit of time. It'll still only be seconds when we get down to the GC, but Menchoff will get a separate time all round there, because that is one big sprint for him, and he never slowed at all, did he?
No, he went all the way to the line there to get himself a stage victory. And that adds to his stage victory that he got himself in the Vuelta a España. 2 seconds back to Danilo De Luca, 5 seconds to Lovquist, 5 seconds to Basso, and Leipheimer right in there with Chris Horner.
But Lockvist has taken himself a small bonus, so the disaster won't be so big here. Menchoff, though, gets to him. Mike Rogers comes in 9th place. In the end, he lost 22 seconds. He was right there when the sprint started. So that shows you how they really opened up the gaps. But it was a long climb, this. The end of a tiring, even if it was a very short day of racing for these boys. Menchoff, twice a winner of the Vuelta a España, once of the disqualification of Roberto Heras.
Well, Lance Armstrong, Phil, has lost himself just a little bit of time as well. Look at that, over 2¼ minutes. I don't think that's a major disaster for Armstrong because, as I said, and I've said on a number of occasions, I think what Armstrong is trying to do here is ride himself back into form for the month of July and test himself in these big mountain passes. Damiano Cunego, however, came here to be competitive, and 2½ minutes is not that.
No, that's a bit of a disaster, I think, in this opening week for Cunego. I don't think he'll recover from that. He's not going to win the Giro now. Neither is Lance Armstrong, of course, but as you say, I don't think we really expected him to be a podium after the problems he's had, and he's got two teammates right up now in Leipheimer and Chris Horner. They rode well today. There's the gap, virtually 3 minutes behind for Lance Armstrong today. He's suffered. He knows now he's back in the big time, though. Denny Menchoff gets the champagne, all smiles. He's a character who doesn't really disclose how he thinks or what he does. He's the quiet man of world cycling. A bit like a silent assassin, but you see, when he unleashes his sprint, he goes. There's the gap. So a 2-second deficit converted into a 5-second advantage for De Luca. Mike Rogers, though, is into third. Leipheimer's fourth. Menchoff is up to fifth. Basso, Sastre, Horner completing the top 8 at 1 minute and 17 seconds. Now this really is shaping up to be quite a leaderboard.
It certainly is, but Phil, let's not forget, looming on the horizon is a very important, very long individual time trial.
Well, looming on the horizon tomorrow, it gets even worse. The second longest stage at 248 kilometres. De Luca is still the leader in the green jersey. Well, he gets 25 points here, so I think this is the situation. No, they're saying it's the overall, aren't they? Well, De Luca there, second place. He got 25 points total now. So he's still got the points. He's still got he's just got the Maglia Rosa. Are they going to show us any more? No, they're going to show us Danilo, though, on the podium here at the end of the 5th stage of the race. De Luca will also come up for the King of the Mountains because his second place today will have kept him in that. We won't show you that one, we'll save that for later on. Lockfitz keeps his Young Riders Award as we head now into Austria with this intercontinental Giro this year. We head to Meyerhofen at 248 kilometres, a couple of hills along the way.
A long, long day in the saddle for these riders as they make their way through some of these magnificent valleys. They will fortunately see most of the high mountains behind them on this stage, but it doesn't mean that the high mountains are finished in the Giro d'Italia for this year.
On the contrary, they were little hors d'oeuvres, but they certainly have shaped the classification into what would be a very respectable final result now when we get down to the finish. Not Milan this time, by the way. The race finishes in Rome. We do visit Milan, though, and we'll celebrate on the usual circuit there en route. Out into the action of the day. Michele Scarponi went out in the action right from the gun today with Vasily Kirienka and AG2R's Guillaume Bonifant, who was only just brought into the race at the last minute for AG2R. And now it looks as though we've got Scarponi still here. I'm not sure where the Bonifant is.
I think one of the reasons that Scarponi, Phil, has gone out on the attack on a day like this is the fact that he lost time yesterday. He was expecting to stay in contact with that leading group of riders. And this, I think, is a little bit of a revenge move as far as Scarponi is concerned, because he's blown his weight, he's blown any chances at all of a high finish in the overall classification with his counter performance yesterday. The 10 victories since he became a professional. And in 2009 he was the winner of Tirreno Adriatico.
Yes, and good luck to him. This is Kirienka here, who's also riding pretty well today. I'm not too sure who Case Depon are really riding for this year. They haven't got the top boys. Arroyo is wearing the 1 on his number, 51. Kirienka here. There's his palmarès for you there. Also second on the first climb. And we're into Austrian roads here just now.
Very nice smooth surface roads, high mountain passes, wearing the green jersey as King of the Mountains, or second place in the King of the Mountains composition there, Denny Menchoff. That's a mantle which is owned by Danilo De Luca at the moment, alongside his Maglia Rosa.
Yes, Acquasaponi again driving at the front. Very different tactics in Italy, I have to say, Paul, because there's no reason for Acquasaponi to be driving on the front, even though they have a strong man in Garzelli.
Well, Garzelli hoping to try and get himself a stage victory out of this year's Giro d'Italia if he can, but I think one of the other reasons is you have to understand in Italy that you have to try and get as much television time as possible. There's Danilo De Luca.
Yeah.
Ivan Basso.
He looks a bit calmer today.
He certainly does. I was very impressed by his performance of yesterday, and not too far away from him, just behind there, Chris Horner and Levi Leipheimer.
It's a nice little group, this. Plenty of them here. And John Lee Augustin is also up here. Remember, he was the rider on Baller World who spectacularly left the road as he approached down into the finish, down the bottom of the Col de Bonnet del Restafond, and he didn't make the top bend. Fortunately, he wasn't injured. He made a big name for himself, though, I will say that for him.
Well, he did make image of the sport around the world, I think, Phil, because of that scrambling back up the Col de la Bonnette. Very dramatic as it was, and I don't know the story as to whether or not he actually recovered. His bicycle was slipped a lot further down the slope.
Yes, he said the mechanic went down for it. Well, that's the mechanic's job, really, isn't it? He must have been a mountaineer, though, I must say. Back here in the Giro, celebrating 100 years of being, and we've got five leaders of the... four different leaders in the first 5 days of racing. Cavendish has held the lead for 2, Pataki took it for 1, Lockvitz for 1, and now Danilo De Luca. And De Luca has said at his press conference he's got great form and he's not planning on losing this jersey. Well, we'll see.
Now, I have a feeling Danilo De Luca is going to be challenged, though, when we go to the individual time trial, because breathing down his neck, he's got Mick Rogers, he's got Levi Leipheimer, and a lot of those riders realise a 60-kilometre time trial can completely and utterly turn the overall standings upside down.
Well, this is the drag of the Hochrimmel climb, which is the second and the last climb of the day, and these two boys have got clear on this because the rest of the break we haven't seen hardly anything of. So Bonifond, Oscar Gate from ISD, and Cloistergaard of Saxo Bank, we haven't seen them, but they've dropped away from these two.
Well, the gaps are starting to look rather serious. It's a little bit further back to that second group that was fractured off this one, but it's almost 4.5 minutes back to the main field, or the group of the Maglia Rosa. These two riders, Phil, are not really of concern to the overall race, and they may well be given the chance for the breakaway to succeed on a day like this.
Well, Scarponi started the day 6 minutes and 19 seconds off the Maglia Rosa, and that's not his intention today. A win would go down very nice for him, though.
It certainly would. Scarponi, I think, would like to try and get himself that revenge from not performing as he would have expected to yesterday. Stefano Garzelli, he is always at the front end of this race, and he's, I think, a man who should certainly go out of this race with a stage victory if he can. He's lost a bit of time in the mountains, 40th overall now at 6 minutes and 41 seconds. The time gaps, even though we haven't got to the end of the first week of the Giro d'Italia, are starting to widen.
There's been a lot of cut and thrust racing. There's been good racing, but this is a difficult part of the Tour just now, because this race today, second longest at 248. We've had 2 mountain days before, and tomorrow, I must remind the riders, it's a massive 244 kilometres. So in 2 days, they'll have covered just under 300 kilometres, and this coming after those 2 mountaintop finishes. And tomorrow, having started in Austria, we pop through Switzerland and get back into Italy.
Massimo Codol, the big rider on the front there for Acqua Saponi. There is Ivan Basso and Danilo De Luca. A little bit further back, Chris Horner looking very solid. On the far side, the Astana rider with the dark glasses is Jaroslav Popovic. He too seems to have been somewhat rejuvenated over the last season. Another loss, Phil, I have to say as well, for Team Silence Lotto, because he was a man who used to ride alongside Cadel Evans. And Team Astana really have managed to pull away a lot of the hierarchy of Cadel Evans's Tour de France squad.
And rumours rife today, by the way, Paul, that Astana are saying they haven't been paid. That's the riders for quite some time, and so it's beginning to sound a little bit ugly at the moment. The sponsors from Kazakhstan have not been sending the checks over, and the UCI are getting involved. So that could develop during this next couple of weeks, I think. But somebody just shot off the front there.
Garzelli, obviously looking to try and get himself some glory out of the Giro d'Italia. Just to explain the rules and regulations concerning professional bike races and bike racing teams. In fact, a team has to lodge at least 3 months' salary guarantee with the UCI. And that's what hasn't happened over the last couple of months, and that has not been lodged by Astana. Scarponi, he's the leader of the race here at the moment with Kirienka. They've got themselves around about a 4.5 minute advantage over the front end of the main field, but with that reaction starting to come, I think that gap will start to turn in the opposite direction.
Well, Menchov is now the shadow, along with Lockvitz and Michael Rogers, of De Luca. De Luca's been in the pink jersey on numerous other occasions, so he's not going to worry over much. Scarponi here, ever thankful to the team for giving him it's a Colombian team, ever thankful for them giving him a place after his doping scandals, which he's always denied, but they all do. 48 seconds is the difference in the gap here.
To the chasing group, that's the remnants of that early morning breakaway, and it's a lot further back to the front end of the main field, because the last time check I heard was 4.5 minutes.
Well, I take my hat off to Garzelli. He certainly rides a difficult tour, I must say that. He's always giving himself full commitment here. One day it'll work. He's won stages in the past, apart from winning the race itself back in 2000. So he gets his results with consistency and persistency, I think.
Certainly persistency. He will always look for a move. He's not scared of a long breakaway at all like this, and this is certainly lining up to be a fairly long move if he wants to ride across a gap of about 4.5 minutes. But he feels that he can do it, and he feels he's got the confidence to do it. And the reason he's making the move there, I think, is because he's hoping that there will be no response coming from the main field.
Well, I make the count of pink jerseys for De Luca, including the one he's got today, around about 18 leaders' jerseys in the Giro d'Italia over the past. Now, what's this, a discussion here? And Scarponi gets a drink. He's doing a lot of work here with Kirienka.
Well, I think Kirienka, coming from a time trialling background, Phil, is not very comfortable on the slopes, but he's certainly a good man to have with you once we get over the top of this mountain, and he's probably got the firepower to help Scarponi on the flatter part of this course a little bit later on.
Well, Kirienka, best remembered, in fact largely remembered, he won the 19th stage of the Giro last year, so he's on the move again now. See if he can add to his collection. It's the only big race he's ever won apart from the internal championships. He's, as you say, Paul, he's a great time trialist, but we mustn't forget he also rode well in the World Championships. He's a world points champion on the track, which says a lot for the varied ability of the rider.
A lot of riders who've come from the longer distance track races, once they've got to a certain point in their career, feel very comfortable moving across to road racing, and normally to great success as well, especially from the individual or team pursuit, and of course races like the points race. Confirmation of the two leaders' names there. Scarponi we're looking at on the front here. He's looking to try and give a little bit of glory to his team, Team Seramente PVC Dici Giovanni. Quite a name, that.
It is, and as I say, he's grateful for the team. He was suspended for being connected with Operation Puerto by the Italians, and wasn't a general suspension, but it became a general suspension. He only got off the suspension in August last year, and then nobody wanted him, and so he was rather grateful to find his place here. He was with Liberty Seguros and all the shadiness that was attached to that team towards the end of its period.
Here's the confirmation of those time gaps. It's 50 seconds back to the chasing group, and it is 4 minutes and 40 seconds back to the main field of the Maglia Rosa, with Stefano Garzelli locked in there at around about 3.5.
Well, here comes Stefano. He's free to fly, and he's got himself a nice little rhythm now. Just a little check to see how life is. He carries number one because they've listed the teams on the start list in alphabetical order, and if you ride for Aqua, then you get an A. So he gets number one. I'm not sure I'd want number one, but it's fitting because he's a past winner of the Tour.
Certainly an aggressive rider too, as he now here tries to ride himself across a 4.5 minute gap. I think that's rather a big ask. That is the front end of the main field. Not really firing in earnest yet, Phil. I think they're holding on to what they know is going to be a very difficult Giro over the next few stages, and you cannot race every individual kilometre.
There's the peloton, thinned out a little bit, but by and large plenty of people on hand here. Again, holding riders nicely. There's nobody dropping out of the Tour this year. As of yesterday, we had 194 men on the start. No messages today to say anybody's retired, and that means we've only lost 4 riders in this opening week, which I think is pretty good.
Pretty phenomenal. There's the main field locked together in friendship on a day like today. Not concerned too much about the men up the road, because most of these riders up the road have already lost themselves some pretty big chunks of time. Danilo De Luca enjoying his first day in the Maglia Rosa, and wondering whether or not he'll be able to defend it in the individual time trial. David Navarro, sorry, from Team Astana, riding in front of Chris Horner. It's 4 minutes and 14 seconds. and Kirienka looks like he's having a little bit of difficulty there staying with Scarponi.
Garzelli's he's not really pulled away. He's less than a minute in front of the group, and it looks like Kirienka, this is hurting. Scarponi, is he going to push on? No, he's still there. But Scarponi looking very strong. You remember him in Milan-San Remo, Paul, the work he did towards the end of Milan-San Remo. He was very, very strong over the little climbs.
It's certainly a big, strong bike rider. Garzelli trying to ride himself across that gap, and of course get himself and Team Aqua Saponi a fair chunk of TV time, and that's what's extremely important. You may well call this an economical breakaway, but it's important when you're a sponsor. I was reading just recently the amount of sponsorship that people get from a breakaway like this. If you're in a breakaway for 4 or 5 hours on live TV, you can pay that back into financial terms of around about $500,000.
Yes, and I've always said it, but cycling is a very cheap investment for major sponsors for what they will put into other sports such as tennis or golf, where the name frankly just gets lost in the mix many times. And here in cycling, no, it doesn't. It gets a lot of publicity. 1 kilometre to the summit here of the Hochrimmel climb. And has he gone? He's nearly gone. He's hanging on. This will be a long 1,000 metres for him. But he's still there at the moment, and if he can just keep Scarponi in sight over the top, then he might get together on the descent.
He could very easily afford to lose around about 30 seconds over the final kilometre and still make a comeback on the descent. Starting to pick it up in the main field as they get that little bit closer to the summit, but this is not really a chase. I think Kirienka here, Phil, is going to say thank you very much once this climb is over, because he certainly hasn't enjoyed this last couple of kilometres.
Yeah, well, look at this now. He's eased off the pressure a little bit here and taking a drink. He needs the Case de Pan rider. He doesn't want to rush away. There's still a way to go down to the finish. And what a beautiful scene that is too. Remember, we are in Switzerland now, looking back towards Italy. Tomorrow we'll go Austria, Switzerland, Italy. And these roads are beautiful. This is a lovely country, Austria, and Scarponi's enjoying every bit of it.
Well, I'm not sure that he's enjoying every bit of it. It's pretty painful on the slopes of this mountain. He will enjoy it a lot more when we go over the top. He's riding sensibly, and as you said, Phil, he realises as a seasoned professional bike rider, he needs to have Kirienka with him, and that's why I don't think he's putting the hammer down too much. He will wait for this rider once they go over the summit of the climb, because the power of Kirienka on the flatlands could well give these guys a chance of surviving. 500 metres to go to the top of the climb. I think once he gets himself the maximum points over this summit, he will wait for the other rider.
Certainly. The other rider might even come back if he keeps it. He's Garzelli, but remember, he's not third on the climb here at the moment. We've still got the other riders in between. I'm not sure whether they're all together because they're not telling us, but there is definitely a group in between.
Concentration on Scarponi's face, just waiting and willing this climb to end. And after that, once he's gone over the summit, he knows that there's still a fair way to go to the finish.
You can tell from looking down here, we're going through at the top here. We've got 45 kilometres to go to the finish once we're over the top of the climb. The peloton is still very big there. They're not pushing it on the climb. They're saving their energy because it's not just today, it's tomorrow as well. Equally long and quite hilly, but not mountainous by the standards of what we expect. Scarponi continued. What was that on his leg there, Paul? Has he got a bit of tendonitis?
Yes, that's one of those warming plasters, a strap, because obviously he had a pretty hard day yesterday. He wouldn't have been expected to lose too much time on a mountain stage like that, and I think that is obviously because of a fraction of tendonitis starting to come in. It's amazing how many of these soigneurs can come up with some quite clever ways of trying to prevent the tendonitis really becoming even more aggravated.
1 kilometre for Garzelli, but as I say, there is a group in between. We've run out of cameras. We'll see the riders, I'm sure, go over the summit. I'm not saying what he is, but that's his overall 6:41, and that's a long gap.
It's been a good ride, I would say.
Yeah.
In fact, he's probably maybe only looking at around about 2.5 minutes to Scarponi. A big crowd at the top of the climb. Scarponi just keeps looking over his shoulder to see the position of Kirienka, and knowing that it's about 45 kilometres still to go to the finish over the summit of this climb, Phil, I do feel he will be a sensible, serious professional bike rider and wait for the Belarusian.
Absolutely. It's not all downhill to the finish at all, although it is a little bit flat, and we've had so far today. So Scarponi is the first over the first category Hockremel climb. And Kirienka right behind him really, so he's done well to keep him that close. And there'll be no attempt to leave him behind. They'll get back together now as they start the way down. Will we see who goes over in third place? Maybe not. We've gone back up to the leader.
Well, that would give us a chance to see just exactly what the official time gaps are and just exactly how much of the 4.5 minute gap this man has eaten into. Stefano Garzelli, he's inside the final kilometre, so I would put him, Phil, probably at around about the 2 to 2.5 minute mark, and he'll be looking around those corners to see whether or not he's going to pull up the remnants of the early morning breakaway.
Well, he's coming up here now to 500 metres, and as we swinge up, this is actually Guillaume Bonifond who is coming over the top, AG2R. A late call-up to the race. It's funny how the boys who get late call-ups often excel. He's been in other breaks so far this week as well. Gone over the top in third place. And is that the ISD rider coming through? Yes, I think it is. So that'll be Oscar Gate, who's gone over in fourth. Now, the one man we're missing then is Kasper Klostergaard of Saxo Bank. And he, I think, must be just ahead of Garzelli.
Looking very comfortable, Stefano Garzelli. It's a tall ask, as I said, Phil, on a race like this to ride across a 4.5 minute gap, but he's obviously not too concerned and feels that he's got the form in his legs here this afternoon, and he's looking so far at 1.5 minutes since Scarponi rode over the top of that climb, and just around the corner he should very shortly be seeing the banner over the top, and if it stops at 2 to 2:15, I'd have to say this man has done a pretty impressive ride.
Well, if there's an easy way and a hard way, Garzelli takes the hard way. That's the way it is. He is a real workhorse here, and he's getting on with the job in hand. He did look over his shoulder there. As far as I can see, there's nobody behind him as he moves up. We don't know if Kasper Klostergaard is in front of him or not, because our camera hasn't gone back up to the summit. He could do with picking up with one or two of those riders now, although I think they're probably too weak to be of much use, quite honestly, because remember, we've now done 203 kilometres of the day. There he is, just in front. He's going to pick him up.
Yep, and as I guessed, it's looking at around about the 2.5 minute mark for this man. So he's lopped 2 minutes off the advantage of Scarponi.
So Klostergaard just hangs on there. I've lost track of how many riders we've had over the top. 5, I think, and this will be the 6th place finisher now, Garzelli. And next will be the peloton. 2:39, Paul, was the gap on the leader.
Well, that's an impressive ride, but he's now got to try and eat away at that 2.5 minute disadvantage that he's got and pull that back before the finish. Looking at the main field there, Phil, I would say there is no chase in earnest here this afternoon, and it may be one of those days where the peloton has decided we'll have a day off.
Actually, that looked like the customs post just over the finishing line, so in fact we just entered Austrian roads. If that was, it looked like it could have been. Very often they put the post there, but we're already on the foreign soil, but we'll see. Anyway, it doesn't matter, it's all Europe these days. This is Mario Sardia on the front now.
Easy to recognise the star because of the size of that man, a Colombian rider who was extremely good at going uphill.
And I think it's 10 down, the rider on the right, the tall, lanky Dutchman there.
And the green jersey on the shoulders of Denny Menshoff.
He hasn't exactly got a huge team around him, has he?
No, he hasn't.
That's the other problem with Rabobank. They too have been wanting some good results because they have had a little bit of a lacklustre situation. Having said that, they're one of the great sponsors of the world of professional cycling. Out of Holland, of course, but looking after all levels of the family tree, from the youngsters through to the Rabobank Continental, and the real talented boys get through to ride in this team, which is what they all want.
And not to forget, they have a very good women's squad, and of course they seriously support mountain biking and the track side of the sport. Just noticing Jaroslav Popovic riding at the front end of the main field. It's amazing to see the Longhorn of Texas, and I wonder who he's supporting.
Well, I don't know, but his name on the jersey might be a clue. And he's in here as far as we know. Oh, it is the customs posters. All breathe in, boys. Passports? No, right.
It's Europe. You don't have to worry too much anymore.
No. So we're on Austrian roads now, heading to Meerhofen, and we've got the last 40 kilometres or so in Austria for the finish.
Phil, I was just looking at Jaroslav Popovic at the front end of that group, looking after Levi Leipheimer. He had a hard time when he was riding for Silence Lotto, never really seemed to be comfortable or happy with the squad, even though he moved across to that squad for financial reasons. he seems a lot better and a lot more consistent now that he's come back. I would have to say come back home, because he's come back into the same formation that he was with Team Discovery Channel, where, let's not forget, he was the winner of the best young rider at the Tour de France.
Yes, absolutely right. There's the latest gaps for you. So Garzelli's got about a minute and a half over the Maglia Rosa, so it's not very much. And the hills basically are behind now, are down the valleys, past these lovely areas of seas or dams in Austria, as we make our way down to Meerhofen. On this, the second longest day, and you see the dams are low, Paul. There's not a lot of rain around.
No, it's been a major problem, I think, in Europe over the last couple of seasons because there hasn't been really quite as much snow, and these dams and these water reservoirs are actually stocked by the melting snows that normally happen in the early part of spring, and that could be a problem for the future.
Well, it looks to me as though life is closing in here on Garzelli. Calling it a pack now. We're back with the two leaders. This is Kirienka now settling back in again. He'd be much more a help on the flat roads, that's for sure, but he's not a great climber. And here's the chase being whipped up behind now, and it looks to me as though it's time to go out and get Stefano.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I said it was important for the man at the front there, Scarponi, Phil, to wait for Kirienka, because it's on this flat part that he can be a big advantage.
So we've just got Klostergaard, I presume, and Garzelli in front, plus the two leaders. So 4 riders in front, we presume. Don't forget, we're always in the hands of where our Italian hosts take us with the pictures, and very often it can be a little bit of a working out job. But just looking there now, I think that's a situation.
I think we've got a situation, Phil, where there are only 2 survivors here, because that is Scarponi, right. That is Kirienka. Kirienka, it looks to me as if he's actually finally popped. In fact, he has. His lights have gone out.
I'm feeling pain with him here, Paul. Oh, back. You're the man with the bad back, not me.
That would be me.
Looks as though he's in big trouble here now.
Kirienka's got the big problem that all professional bike riders end up having over the years, and that's a big problem with the lower part of the back.
And the legs.
I think he's got a cramp as well here.
Stretch it all out. Come on. It's been a great ride today, Vasily. Don't lose it now. The peloton looks a bit thinner down there right now.
And it looks a very angry peloton as well. They're looking at the length of that line there, Phil. I say we're still looking at around about a 50-second gap from the lone leader now, because it is Michele Scarponi just on his own and the front end of the main field, who are riding in a very angry mood.
Isn't it amazing? You cross the borders from one country to the next, and there you have a totally different country in appearance as well. The roads here in Austria are beautiful, narrow, twist and turn. The houses look neat and clean. Not the Italian houses aren't neat and clean, but the layouts are different.
Different culture, different buildings, a completely different lifestyle decided by the line on a map. Scarponi now has got himself 8.8 kilometres to go. Alan Davis has got himself over the big mountain climbs, Phil, and that is probably why we've got Team Quickstep and Katusha coming to the front, because there are some fast finishers in this group.
Ben Swift is still here, as far as I know, for Katusha, and this wasn't a day, I think, that they would likely have thought would be a race for the sprinters, but if they've got the chance, why not go for it? Scarponi, who went away right from the outset today, has had an awful long day in front. He's lost all of his friends now. They're all heading back or in the peloton, and so the sprinters might be getting their tails up.
Well, they're starting to see this as the possibility of a chance. Alan Davis, I think, will be team sprinter on Team Quickstep. He's had a great start to the season. The overall winner of the Tour Down Under very early on in the month of January, and I think very happily supported by his team. In other races, he would have to turn around and be the lead-out man for Tom Boonen, but here he can ride for his own account. And if this group comes back together, Phil, I don't think Alan Davis will be too far away from the win.
Well, knowing Alan, who was connected when he was part of Liberty Seguros with the Operation Puerto, nobody felt it was a case. It was a rumour, innuendo. He became persona non grata. Even the Australian Cycling Federation took his side. And I can tell you, they are so anti-drugs in the Australian Cycling Federation. They obviously believe that Alan had no involvement in Puerto. So I'm very happy that Quickstep took him on board midway through last season, and he's back in the big time.
Scarponi, the last official time check we had was hovering around the 1 minute mark for this man. He's got rid of Kirienka. He's all on his own. He's still got the team cars behind him, the yellow neutral service vehicle and his own team car, the team of Case d'Epargne. Looking back down that gap, Phil, I would say it could possibly beat 45 seconds advantage he's holding on to. He's inside of the last 10 kilometres to go. The distance between Scarponi and Kirienka is 11 seconds, but what's more important is the distance back to the group of the Maglia Rosa, and I estimate that to be a 45-second gap.
So is that to Scarponi?
To Scarponi.
Well, it's going to be tough for him to hold them off then. Kirienka's got no chance. He's going to get swept up. And there's a lot of sprinters now believe they've all got chances here. Bergstall is where we're just coming out of. And it's 1 minute 13 across the board.
It's doable.
It's tight.
It is doable, I think, at 1 minute and 13. Just looking from the helicopter, I'd estimated it to be around about the 45-second mark. Now, that was going to be tight. The extra 30 seconds may well be a big advantage. The Astana rider over on the left-hand side with the dark glasses, that's Jaroslav Popovic. He's riding at the front, not for himself this afternoon, not for any personal ambition, but to make sure he keeps his mate out of danger, and that would be Levi Leipheimer. And Phil, did you get the number of that train?
I'd love to, because isn't that cute? That's really superb. That'll go down well in my model railway layout now. It's in steam as well.
Well, Kirienka, Phil, seems to have recovered. He went through a moment where he had an extremely bad back. He was starting to get himself a little bit of cramp, but he seems to have got his rhythm back now because he's pegged in there at that 12-second deficit.
Well, you're right about one thing. The Quick-Step boys have got faith in Alan Davis today. If they can pull him back 6 kilometres to go. He just caught a glimpse through his right eye there. As he continues to race now on this beautiful valley road. The hills are all around here, but the sound of music is far away because he's now racing flat roads to the finish. 5.8 kilometres to go. Scarponi surely could not have believed he will be in with the remotest chance of victory, breaking away so far down the course. Kirienka's still there.
Well, I tell you one thing, Phil, so many people ask me the question, why do guys go in a breakaway? Well, the reason is that they always hope in the back of their mind that they are going to survive. And it looked to me as if Kirienka was just about going to get back there. The big sprinters have made it over the mountains this afternoon because there is the man himself, Alessandro Petacchi.
Living in dreams. Kirienka was puffing more than the steam engine just there, so I'm not sure he's going to make it now. I tell you what, also up there is Edward Boysen-Hagen too, the other young Scandinavian rider on Team Columbia. Oh, that's a fast line now.
It certainly is, and Robbie Hunter was positioning himself up in the top 10. They're not too far away from Meerhofen, and that big long line would indicate to me that the sprinters now are starting to feel they've got a very good chance. There's actually a split in the main field as well, Phil, because there you might have just noticed that the yellow service vehicle came in behind the peloton, so there have been one or two riders dropped out of the back. 3 kilometres to go. This man has only now got to survive for around about 4 minutes, and he's going to wonder whether or not the speed of the main field at 60 kilometres an hour is going to wipe him away.
I'll tell you what, that's a little bit narrow to come through there, because I don't know whether they're planning for a bunch of about 70 or 80 riders here. Now, I did say earlier 194 started the day. Ooh,
tight.
A tight one there, but he straightened up nicely. Kirienka is in the gun sights now at 24 seconds. It's possible. But I'm not sure whether they're going to see Scarponi before the finish at a minute 8.
Well, he's still locked in at that 1:08 margin, and they're not really eating into his advantage very rapidly at all. And as they get closer to the finish, they'll start to lose the morale when they see that they're not eating into his lead, and that's when they may well start to slow down and offer the pacemaking to one of the other teams. Katusha still feel that they've got a chance. They've got men at the front, so too of Team Quick-Step. Poor old Alan Davis must be wondering to himself whether or not he's going to get the opportunity to have a crack at victory this afternoon.
Well, they're really working now for the Quick-Step boys, for Alan Davis, who I can't see, but I'm sure he's tucked in nicely there. They've gone under 5 kilometres to go, 68 seconds to the leader. They need more help. Nobody's actually helping Rabobank. Jens Voigt's creeping up on the left. He'll be going to attack by himself, though. So they need more help.
If all of the teams of the sprinters, Phil, get themselves to the front, that's actually a very small group there. There's obviously been a serious split somewhere, and I wonder who's been caught out behind. If all of the teams of the sprinters get together and work extremely well in one solid block, they can still pull this man back. But the closer he gets to the finish with that minute advantage, the more chances he has of survival.
He's still looking good. Another kilometre ticked off. 4 kilometres to go. That's less than 2.5 miles to the finish, and he's got a minute's lead. Surely that is enough now. It's kicked up a little bit, this road. It's starting to drag up towards the line now. for Michele Scarponi. He hasn't won a race, by the way, for 26 months. He won a stage of the Coppi Bartoli in 2007, which he also went to win overall. And that's the last time he was winning before the axe fell on his head.
Right. Still at the front, it's Quick-Step doing the majority, the bulk of the pacemaking. This is the group of the Maglia Rosa. The men who are in the top 10 positions in the overall standings are not too concerned now, because they know that this is a chance for the sprinters teams to get a little bit of glory out of the Giro d'Italia. Now, this is a very tight little town, and squeeze yourself around that one, my son.
Well, I'm convinced now that they weren't expecting a big group sprint, but they're going to get one, because the race for second place, I don't think Kirienka can possibly survive. 36 seconds between the two leaders on the road. Well, wouldn't it be nice if Kirienka did manage to survive at the way he's ridden today? Good tempo pacemaking again now, but once more they're trying to bring Pataki into the fray. Points in the bag for that pink jersey, or Ciclamino jersey as they call it here. Basso has forced his way through to the front as well. This has got an interesting combination.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of a problem here, because that group was being led by a lot of riders from Astana, so I wonder who's missed out on that split.
Well, the word is that Armstrong is off the back, Paul. He's in the second half of the split, but I can't believe Leipheimer is, but we haven't seen him.
Well, I doubt it, because Popovic and Horner were at the front of that group of the Maglia Rosa, and they wouldn't be there if Levi Leipheimer wasn't in there, keeping himself up in the top 10 in the overall standings. That is Kirienka, hoping to survive now. You can hear the whistles. That's a warning of this little corner.
Yeah, well, our motorbike's in the way here. He needs to accelerate out of this now, otherwise he's going to take this group across to Kirienka. He's started to move clear now, as the people in this beautiful town of Meerhofen here in Austria are welcoming the Giro d'Italia, I think for the first time actually, as they come through the streets. The American flag is flying. Better wait another minute or so, because that's what they're saying Armstrong is losing today in the second group. There is a split on, and nobody's going to come back at these sort of speeds.
No, big pressure on the front now. You see the indication there from the rider who is setting the pacemaking, just showing them that there's a little turn coming up to the left-hand side. Scarponi has 43 seconds advantage over Kirienka, but his big concern, Phil, is his advantage over the Gruppo Maglia Rosa, and it still seems to be pretty much locked in at that 1 minute mark. I don't think Kirienka is going to survive, but here, at 2 kilometres to go, I don't think they're going to see Scarponi again.
No, that's virtually a kilometre's lead there. I take my hat off to Kirienka. He's not given up, and this is a good run into the finish to dangle off the front and still be out of sight of the peloton, so you've got a chance if you can do it. There's the gap, 43, and then we're looking at about 19 seconds, that's all, up to these riders in the LPR here, trying to drag Pataki in to take the bridegroom's spot today. Good points if he does. Levi
Leipheimer was there. I just caught a glimpse of Jaroslav Popovic there. You can see on the right-hand side of the pack, you can see the two Astana jerseys, and the second one is Levi Leipheimer, again being shepherded to the front end of the field by Jaroslav Popovic. Pataki is in the middle there in the Ciclamino jersey. He's not going to get the stage victory here this afternoon, but if you want to win the points classification, you have to keep pegging away every day. That's the first rider they're going to pull up, Kirienka. He's only got about 10 seconds in front of the main field now.
No, this is one of those days when they're bonus points, I think, if you're a sprinter, because the way the race has come together, he now has a chance of sweeping up for second place. Big points on offer, 20 points for second place. Liquigas have come forward again with their man Ivan Basso. The green jersey is there, being worn by Denny Menchov, the rider who is challenging for the Maglia Rosa. The Maglia Rosa itself, Danilo De Luca, is there. The gap has opened to almost a minute over Kirienka. So in fact, Paul, that peloton is not even approaching catching this man.
Now they're locked in. They've been locked in all of that time. This should be the Flamme Rouge, the red kite. 1 kilometre to go. In Italian, the ultimo chilometro for Michele Scarponi. Had a terrible day in the mountains yesterday, lost any chance of a high finish in the overall classification, and he's bounced back today with a stage victory for him and his team.
Well, during the Tour of Spain this year, Scarponi will turn 30. All his troubles are behind him, and he's now racing to a victory in the Giro d'Italia.
Just a quick glimpse there, Phil, of the Armstrong group there, as Kirienka has just been pulled back into the main field. So his day off the front end of the Giro d'Italia coming to a close, while this man is about to celebrate in victory.
And when you're Italian and you're about to get your first ever victory, then the page really has turned in the book and life is good again. The epilogue to a shadow of dope as he's had, and he's now back racing, and he's paid his penalty, and here comes the result. It is a win here for him, a first ever stage victory. He's never remotely looked like winning a stage in the past, but he's got one now. Wise man, just making sure nobody's creeping through the motorbikes, but they would have known. And it's going to be a roaring sprint for second place down a finishing straight like this, Paul. Did I say straight? As we line up for the finish. So a great win, Scarponi, his first win for 26 months. And yet another win for the Serra Pedimenti, Scott.
Just looking at the finishing line there, what you mentioned before, as Scarponi gets the victory that he was looking for. A long day in the saddle too. 5 hours and 50 minutes almost.
Yeah.
I don't think the race organisers were expecting a big bunch sprint.
Now, where is this?
This is the Armstrong group.
Oh, this is the Armstrong. Okay, well, that's losing. Well, the clock's still counting, but our cameras are all over the place. They've found the leaders, and that's Boysenhagen, who's just shot out the front here. And that is the man who, and I think they split the field here in the sprint finish for the line, but Boysenhagen is getting some result here. He's a rider of the future for sure. He crosses the line in second place. It was Alan Davies he got the better of. Because it wasn't really a pure sprinter's finish, was it? Man that took it. And Pozzato, I think he went across there in fourth place. Well, we just about found those pictures for you before they crossed the line.
Just a little bit tricky. This is the group of Lance Armstrong in the outskirts of town. That split must have happened on the run in towards the finish. I don't think he'd be too concerned about that. I think what he's concerned about is finding his legs and knowing the fact that his teammate Levi Leipheimer was comfortably ensconced in the leading group of riders.
Yeah, these have been 2 tough days, 3 tough days, I think, for Lance Armstrong. He's cracked on all 3 and lost time, so he'll reshape his ambitions. And one of those, of course, will be to help Leipheimer climb onto the podium now, as he did in the Tour of Gila, where Leipheimer won that. There's a raw face from Lance Armstrong. Doesn't look too distressed, does he? That's a professional for you. Happy to say, job done. Around about 1:20 he conceded. This man caused all the pain of the day, and hats off to him. It's a hard way to win a stage of any bike race, but when you do it, then the rewards are massive.
Well, this is why you go in the breakaway, and on this occasion it has paid, and probably because of the 2 difficult days that went before, the breakaway survived on this occasion. Hats off to this man though, because he held off the main field and conserved nearly all of the minutes advantage he had over them, even though there were a number of riders from sprinters teams chasing to try and pull him back into the fold. On this occasion, the escapees had the survival.
I'll tell you what, it's not the time to remind Scarponi that tomorrow it's 244 kilometres. There's the result. Boysenhagen it was, second. Davis third. Pozzato fourth. Matthew Goss coming in well. Another Australian there, rides for Team Saxo Bank with a great fifth. Philippe Gilbert, his sort of finish, not a real sprinter's finish. He got sixth. Enrico Gasparotto got seventh. There is the quick look further down. Danilo Duke lost 36 seconds, but I don't think to anybody of importance. Chris Horner the same time, so they did split the field on the running.
Yes, but the victory here going to one of the smaller teams, one of the wildcard teams in the Giro d'Italia, Serramente Dicky Giovanni. And I think for the man who was expecting to ride high in the overall classification, it's a nice little bit of sweet revenge. Not much change in the overall classification.
I think they all finished around to Luca. Lukfish still got looking for 5 seconds. Rogers hold third. Luke Leipheimer's fourth. Menchoff fifth. Basso is sixth. Sastre seventh. What a top 10. A little bit further down, Pelazzotti at 1:27 at the moment. Popovic at 2:30. And Kevin Sealdryers, he's probably second in the Young Riders competition, sitting in 15th place at 2:49. Felix Cardenas of Barlow World in 16th place. Rohriger, he's one of the Austrian riders in the race, also there. We never saw much of him today. In the pink in Austria, Danilo De Luca, and he looks very, very confident just now. I don't think he was in any bother at all today.
No, I don't think he was troubled at all. What he's thinking forward to now, Phil, is the longer individual time trial test, because his lead then I think will start to come under pressure. But in the mountains, he is riding superbly.
So we move on to stage 7 now in the Giro d'Italia, and the riders facing up to another long day, 244 kilometres. We say goodbye to Innsbruck, which is probably one of the most famous cities in Austria, pass through Switzerland and head to Chiavenna.
Well, the riders are happily moving and leaving different countries of Europe behind them and getting back to the Italian pasta probably for this afternoon's dinner.
Yes, 7 days of racing have gone by, in which the riders have now completed just on 1,000 kilometres of racing. Remember, the total distance is just short of 3,500. Now, this is Austria, Paul.
Definitely, and the brass band are just letting the riders know what they're leaving behind. A little bit of culture at the Firma di Partenza, the signing on at the start.
This happens every day, by the way. The race leader lets go of the pink balloons, and the race leader is none other than Danilo De Luca at the moment.
Thomas Love was signing in there, or signing somebody's jersey. Lance Armstrong looking very comfortable despite having lost a little bit of time. But despite having lost time for over the last couple of days, Armstrong is still pretty high up in the overall classification for a man on a comeback.
And since leaving the beautiful city of Venice, we've only lost those 4 riders. As I say, sadly, one of them, Christian van der Velde. There's a soft landing for somebody. And now the situation here as we catch up with the action. Breakaway again, getting clear. And is that the funicular? No, it's just a normal, very narrow gauge railway here in Austria. But we have got a breakaway trying to get clear of the field. 2-1-4 there, Vladimir Isajev from the Jacobo team, which is the first time we've mentioned that team. It's a wildcard team in the race. Sergei Klimov is here for Katusha. Quickstep have got Mauro Facci again on the attack. And ISD have got Bartosz Hugartsky, another new rider on the block, as far as I'm concerned, at least.
Well, the weather changing very dramatically all of a sudden, and I'm not surprised, Phil, because as we go through the customs post here, we are heading through into Switzerland before going back into Italy. And unfortunately, in the mountains, the weather can change in the drop of a hat, and it is extremely cold over the mountain peaks.
Well, at this time of the year, in the Giro d'Italia, you expect to get bad weather as well as nice weather. Remember when Andy Hampson won this race in '88? I think he was more like a snowman on occasions there. It was a very bitterly cold tour in places in the Dolomites, but today the weather really has turned against the riders because, in all honesty, it's taken a week to find anything but sunshine.
Well, a tricky descent in conditions like this, and you certainly don't want to take too many risks, and that's why there's that little bit of picture breakup. We're very lucky, I have to say, on a day like this in actually getting any pictures at all, because the pictures on today, for example, are not actually being brought by helicopter. They're being brought by fixed-wing aeroplane, which is flying above the cloud banks.
And hopefully above the mountains as well, which he's probably sitting at around 10,000 feet just now. I've got one rider clear here, but I think it's the Katusha rider. I'm not sure. Klimov, if it is.
This is the leading breakaway here, and the man chasing, I think, a little bit further back was Andrei Grivko, and he's trying to reintegrate this leading group of 5 riders, and it's only 40 seconds back to the group of the Maglia Rosa.
Garmin Slipstream had a good start to the day. The only small climb of the day was won by the sprinter, Tyler Ferrar. Kinziato was second, and Pelazzotti was over there in 3rd place, keeping an eye on life, but they all went back into the pack. Ooh, that was a nasty kick there.
It certainly was very tricky coming into town here this afternoon. This is the front end of the race. Grivko is chasing at around about 30 seconds, trying to get himself back into this group. There you can see the big rider in the group there from Team Columbia High Road, and that's the front end of the main field. I think a little bit happier now that the weather is starting to improve. Grivko looking for 30 seconds and 35 seconds back to the main field. We're in the streets of the finishing town.
Yes, and that's time to remind you, the breakaway in fact had a lead at one stage, a maximum lead of 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Then the rain came down and the peloton came back, or that's what it appears just now. Half a minute to Grivko, and then the peloton just behind him. So this is all going to come together here.
Well, it may well not do so at 3.8 kilometres to go. These guys have got to keep working if they want to survive. Looking over the shoulders, Phil, they can almost see Grivko and almost see the black shadow of the main field. Pulling back from the helicopter here, they're going to put the yellow neutral service vehicle back inside there, so that would indicate to me that the race referees actually think the gap, having come down, is going to start to stretch out again.
Yes, a chance here at the end of a long day. 492 kilometres covered in 2 days of racing. We visited Austria and Switzerland, in between going in and out of Italy, of course. We're coming back home now for the race. He's just nosed a little bit ahead there, but the Maglia Rosa group of 43 seconds, hinting now there'll be no change overall here, but will the sprinters get back on terms to use the day? That's the 3 kilometre banner.
3 kilometres to go. These riders are still, there's no passengers in this group, Phil. They realise this is a critical moment of the race, because if you start to play those cat and mouse moves at a time like this, you realise the main field can very quickly shut you down.
This little breakaway, still working together. Desperate moments. They've still got the yellow car in of neutral service, so they've got a chance.
That's an indication that the race referees believe that they have a chance. This is Grivko in 6th position on the road. He's still looking for half a minute to try and pull himself back to these riders.
This is a little group here, Paul, of Vigano, of Fuji, Pavel Brut of Team Katusha. I've seen Hunter in there, and I'm pretty sure that is Boyson Hagen, who got second yesterday, who's driving through at the front. And they must have got away from the front of the bunch here, because this is all there are.
Well, I tell you what, Robbie Hunter in the red and white jersey there must be fancying his chances here, because he's probably the fastest man in this group. And with 43 seconds over the front end of the main field, that's Hunter just tightening his shoes there, realising at 2 kilometres to go, this is the possibility for him for a stage victory.
Well, I think Grivko is a misleader there, because this is a group which could reshape the day at just inside 2 kilometres to go. Now, is this the one for Robbie Hunter? Remember, he became the first South African to win a stage of the Tour de France. Now, is he going to get himself a stage of the Giro d'Italia? He speaks fluent Italian. He lives here. He also has a small holding, I think, in Switzerland as well, because he has a Swiss wife. But basically, he has a home here in Italy.
Well, that would make him one of the very rare riders, Phil, to win a stage in each of the Grand Tours. He's already got a stage victory in the Tour of Spain as well, and he just needs one here to make it a job lot. 1.6 kilometres to go.
Nobody making the move. They're lining themselves up for the sprint here now. This is the head of the race, as far as I am aware. So as we're lining up for the finish, Hunter inviting them to chase here. Pavel Brut, is he going to have a go? He is the rider on Team Katusha.
He's a man who comes from a track background as well. He doesn't let moves like that sneak off the front. Now he's over on the right-hand side. He's decided he's going to make the move, but not. It was a dummy attack, because right on his wheel was Bosenhazen.
Yes, and he's now taken the second wheel. As we come into, we're looking for the kilometre. It must be just down the corner here. And watch out for the Fuji riders sitting there at the back of the race, because that is David Vigano.
Last kilometre, ultimo kilometro. They'll go under the Flamme Rouge now. They're not going to get caught. The winner of today's stage is going to come from this group here this afternoon. Sitting on the back there, the Katusha rider.
This is going to be a slow motion. They can't afford to do much of this. The peloton is about half a minute behind. Those lead motorbikes are coming through. They could well be in their sights here if they just wait any longer than this, as now Boyson Hagen has found himself in the hot seat, not where he wants to be, because if you're going to start the sprint, and somebody has gone up the inside, and Hunter here trying to marshal everybody, I think may have left himself at the back of the race, because that's the Fuji rider, Vigano, who's now trying to taste down, who I think is Pavel Brut, who's made the move.
Brut is the one who's made the move in second position on the road. Grivko about to get caught there by the front end of the main field, but that's 30 seconds behind this group. Still survival at the front end, and now we're starting to see whether or not it's going to come all back together. The Fuji rider, Phil, I think is about to get pulled back into the fold.
Well, as they line up for the finish now, they're more or less all together. Hunter is having to work overtime before he starts his sprint, tagged on to the back end of this tail. A little chance of a breather, and Boyson Hagen, who got second yesterday, remember, best of the rest, is now going for gold here. He's 2 days away from his 22nd birthday, so it's coming early, because they're not going to catch him. And that is the first stage win for Columbia High Road, and it's well taken. And Hunter has just pulled something out of the hat. He's got second place. He'll be fuming with that.
He'll be fuming, but he was a long way behind the rider from Team Columbia High Road, Phil. This is the front end of the main field. They've pulled Grivko back into the fold. Remnants of a breakaway just coming across the front end of the main field. But I tell you what, this has been a long, hard day in the saddle.
Well, in fact, that's Grivko just snuck it, just held them off there, Paul. And it's that Matthew Goss of Saxo Bank who started to sprint well this last couple of days and get some good results.
I just noticed in the middle of that pack, Mark Cavendish sitting up and celebrating, because he knows that his teammate, winner of Wevelgem this year as well, has got himself the victory. Look at this power of this young man. Yeah. Remember this name, Bosenhagen, because you will be hearing that name, I reckon, for the next 10 years in the sport of professional cycling. He was a star in the under-23 level of the sport, and he's already making a big name for himself in the professional rankings.
Well, we saw him win a stage of the Tour of Ireland a couple of years ago, beating the big-name professionals there, and he's steadily but surely making tremendous progress here. A real talent, and Columbia High Road have got the tag on him for the moment. As he gets the victory there, as I say, in 2 days' time, he'll be 22. Poor old man, as he crosses the line.
Hard to believe. Easy victory for him, massive acceleration. and he's obviously not too concerned about the weather conditions. But Phil, as we look at the standings on the stage, Bosenhagen getting himself the victory ahead of Hunter and Pavel Brut. 40 seconds back to the front end of the main field. This really hasn't done anything at all to change the overall classification.
No, Ben Swift continues to sprint well for Katusha as well. In 10th place, Robert Forster of Germany for Milram in 9th position. I haven't seen too much of him yet. Meanwhile, the autobus arrives and everybody anxious for the showers now. They've been washed out down there on the course. Not too far away either, a minute 19 as they hit the line. Nobody in any hurry, but this man is. 2 days now, a win and a second place. He's beginning to enjoy the Giro d'Italia, is Edward Boysenhagen. He won't be in pink tonight. That will stay with Danilo De Luca. And this is the first time that none of the leaders' jerseys in any of the competitions have changed shoulders since this race began. Everybody keeps their situation. 5 seconds to Lockvist. De Luca continues to lead this race on points. The king of the mountains, while Lockvist holds on to young rider.
De Luca looking very comfortable getting onto the podium at the end of every day. The Maglia Rosa suits him quite well, and to boot, he's got his Maglia Rosa glasses.
It doesn't get any easier as we now head to Bergamo. 209 kilometres today, couple of hills along the way, which might cause a bit of a problem, and 193 riders still in the Giro d'Italia.
Well, they go through some very pretty parts of the world before they finish in what I have to say really is pretty much a hotbed of Italian cycling, the town of Bergamo. A lot of bike riders come from that part of the world.
Well, Columbia High Road have no complaints about the way the first week has gone. In the Giro d'Italia, we've now done 1,160 kilometres of the planned 3,466, if you want to be absolutely right. As we skirt round the lake here, we've got 2 climbs. Early on, the Colla del Gallo is a 6.3 kilometre, 7% climb, and 1 or 2 tricky roads out there today as well. Down into Bergamo. This will be a big test of the organisation to bring the riders into this city.
It certainly will, because it's actually a very tricky run into the finish. The last 4 or 5 kilometres, there really are an awful lot of twists and turns.
Well, as we join the action here, it looks as though we've got, is that Lance Armstrong there?
Armstrong here actually riding in the role of a domestique or helper for his team, and he's come to the front end to test himself out, but also to work for the squad. I have to say, the way he was riding there, Phil, it was an extremely aggressive stance.
Well, it's good to see Astana have a lead in the team race here, so there's plenty in it for them. And there's been a crash there, and I can't see any team colours from this position at the moment, but thank heavens that safety netting was there.
Well, the whole race organisers, Phil, they must have had a feeling that was going to be a very dangerous crash there. And they'd, oh, well, that's probably why.
Well, I'm hoping we're not panning down to find somebody down there, Paul. I think we might be. Because these are the emergency vehicles and the riders themselves. Somebody is down there.
Well, there's a Rabobank team car there. These are riders who've been dropped on the climb just a little bit earlier on.
My goodness me, we've now got the rescue team going down here with block and tackle and to lower themselves down. So somebody has gone over that barrier, and I think you're right, it must be a Rabobank rider. Well, we have seen this in the past in the Tours, of course. Johan Brunel himself finished up down there once and climbed back out and got on his bike, but whoever's down there at the moment, I just will have to wait and see.
Well, I tell you what, I'm pretty amazed at the level of the rescue operation they've been managed to mount so quickly there. That's where the race went round. You can see the corner there. Whoever it is, Phil, you've got to cross your fingers, I think.
Well, we're not getting any feedback at all from Radio Tour. We can hear voices, but we can't hear what they're saying. Meanwhile, the race has gone on. We'll update you on that as fast as we can. But these are the riders now at the head of the race here.
Phil, this is a small breakaway group, and a very dangerous breakaway group, because number 24 there is Levi Leipheimer. This is a group of 4-5 riders. Now, this is something that I don't think anybody would have expected on the road into Bergamo. There is the leader of the race, Danilo De Luca, and the attack off the front has come from Leipheimer.
And the white jersey alongside De Luca is being worn by the best young rider at the moment, which is Thomas Lockvitz. There's massive crowds out here. And this race, well, it's taking a bit of working out, I'll be honest, right now, as we're seeing them go over this climb, which is the second climb of the day.
Well, that looked like Danilo De Luca trying to get himself, Damiano Cunego trying to get himself across the gap at around about 25 seconds. But I think there will be some serious alarm bells ringing here, because Levi Leipheimer was hovering around in the top 10 in the overall classification, and many people probably thought just thinking about the upcoming individual time trial. But I tell you one thing, Lance Armstrong, when he was a young professional cyclist, used to live not too far away from here. Bergamo to Como is not too far as the crow flies, and Armstrong may well have known this route quite intimately, which is why all of a sudden, on a day when I didn't expect anything to happen, we've seen this very interesting move by Leipheimer.
Well, Paul, as you're speaking now, I'm hearing that in fact the rider who crashed is Pedro Horillo, who rides for Rabobank, and he's fallen over 50 metres, which is the best part of 180 feet down there. No update at the moment.
Well, I have to say, I know that one great thing about the organisation here is they know how to look after people, and they will get him out of that ravine as quickly as possible and off to hospital, probably by helicopter, so fingers crossed for Pedro Horillo.
Absolutely, a great bike rider, one of the world's best domestiques, and let's face it too, he's going to be sadly missed as far as the competition goes and as far as Denny Menchoff goes, because Menchoff is right up overall. Anyway, back with the action at the moment as we keep an eye on what is happening further back along the roads. This race is under all sorts of pressure right now.
Well, this is Mick Rogers over on the left-hand side of the road, and Mick Rogers is no stranger to living in Italy either, so there's a serious amount of racing going on here this afternoon. The lead of the race is 38 seconds ahead of the Maglia Rosa. Now, this all happened, Phil, on this little small climb on the run down towards the finish. Mick Rogers today is trying to turn the Giro d'Italia upside down.
Well, Team Columbia, dare I say it, are on a high, because they don't seem to be able to do anything wrong at the moment, and it's a good chance for Mick now to try and upset the apple cart of Danilo De Luca. LPR are under pressure now. All the helpers have got to the front in pursuit of Mick Rogers. Comes from Canberra in Australia, in the ACT, Australia Capital Territory. They've even thrown in a few cobblestones here, and thank heavens there's not a big bunch going through that archway.
Well, Mick Rogers taking a chance here, an advantage, and this I think is going to be the nature of the Giro over the next couple of days, because nobody wants to wait for the strategic points, and I have to say that Mick Rogers really has made a very clever, brave move there. This will put a lot of pressure onto the shoulders of LPR and, of course, onto the shoulders of Danilo De Luca, and that's why you can see Team Liquigas sitting back and not doing the pacemaking now. They want to weaken the team of De Luca and allow his team to do all of the pacemaking.
Absolutely right too. That's the way it is if you're leading the Tour, of course. Rogers has taken the initiative here, and the Tifosi, they just love their sport, are cheering on anybody who comes through in the lead as best they can. Rogers is through the archway. It's not a big gap, is it? Because these boys are also through now. Garzelli is again at the front, and it looks as though one of Astana riders trying to push off the front there.
It looks like Popovic. I think that group that we saw a little earlier that contained Levi Leipheimer has been pulled back into the fold, but straight over the top of that.
Apart from what we're seeing now.
Yep, this is Popovic now.
Yep.
They're throwing everything today at Danilo De Luca. This is a very tricky run into the finish in Bergamo, and that's why we're seeing all of these riders just throwing caution to the wind here this afternoon. As I said earlier, Phil, a lot of riders in Italian cycling hail from the streets of Bergamo.
Well, don't forget, it's our third successive day over 200 kilometres, and they've not been easy roads. They've been well raced by the race. It's been a very good race so far, I have to say. And so this is when you've got to try and hit the man and weaken him before the obvious climbs and the obvious places to attack, because sometimes they're neutralised there.
Mick Rogers is back in the main field. It looks as if there's another rider starting to go clear, and that was Sivtsov. And now Danilo De Luca has decided the only way to defend now, Phil, on these very narrow streets is to go on the attack.
Well, the killer instinct, should we call it now, because this boy's dancing in front of his home people, and he's wearing the Maglia Rosa, and he tells everybody every day he's feeling great. So now we're going to find out.
They can't let a rider like Popovic get too far off the front end. In fact, there's been a replacement here, because Mick Rogers looks as if he's been pulled back into the main field, and that is Sivtsov. Alongside Danilo De Luca, it's Jaroslav Popovic, and Popovic goes again!
Right. Another grit of the teeth, and another kick there by Popo. He is a different rider. Now he's come back from Silence Lotto to his home base of the American team. Well, it really is an American team with the way it's set up, Astana. And I take my hat off to Danilo now, because he's having to do it for himself, and he is chasing Sivtsov now.
Well, this has been a great day for Team High Road. They've been on the attack all of the time, trying to see what they can do on a day like this. And it's put a lot of pressure on the front end of the main field, because on a day when the sprinters may well have thought that they had a little bit of a chance of success, they've been completely and utterly ripped to pieces, because that, Phil, is not the full main peloton.
Well, I hardly would imagine it would be after the way they've been attacking and counter-attacking, but Sifsov is now looking to give Team Columbia High Road their second win in as many days, and I don't think they're going to nail him back.
Well, it would be their third victory as well, because let's not forget, it seems like an awful long time ago they were the winners of the opening stage, the team time trial in Venice. Seems an awful long way from Bergamo right now.
It does indeed. And still, we've got the two Liquigas boys there, Pelazzotti and Basso at the head. That's a very small group that's gone through there. It's been a tough day. We're hearing that Pedro Oria has been airlifted to hospital. In a way, I suppose that's good news after what we saw there, but we wish him well, that's for sure. And 2 kilometres to go at the moment.
Well, I wonder if any of the big names have missed out, because there has been a serious split at the front end of the main field. I think everybody pretty much knew how the race was going to be around the heart of Bergamo, an old medieval city. 2 kilometres to go now for the group of the Maglia Rosa. Danilo De Luca is definitely in there, but he didn't seem to have an awful lot of teammates, and certainly not too many friends in the group as he charges away around Bergamo here. 22 seconds from the lead of the race to the Maglia Rosa, but I have a feeling, as you said, Phil, they're not going to see Sifsov again, because that young man, I think, is a kid with a great future.
Well, I must say, this is stunning, this route at the moment, but it's far too difficult for a working group to pull back a single man as he gets on with the race by himself here. Sifsov, he came to fame last year when he won the Tour of Georgia in the USA. He was the secret weapon then, as we referred to him, of Team Columbia High Road, and that's the way as he goes under 1 kilometre to go. Again, Paul, another area where you didn't really want a bunch sprint, eh?
Yes, I'm a little bit concerned about how narrow some of these run-ins have been towards the finish in the Giro d'Italia. I know the Giro regards itself as being a little smaller than the Tour de France, but some of these roads, to me, are actually bordering on dangerous, especially at the moment weather's good. But if it was raining today, and if you were looking at a bunch sprint coming into town like this, it would be mayhem.
As it was, of course, the other day. But now it looks as though the field is lining up for the sprint here. This might clip the wings of the likes of Pataki here. But here he comes up towards the line, and this is going to be 2 days out of 2. There's the bunch up the high street. They're massive for second place now. We're almost going through a shopping precinct here as he swings round to the right. And now he lines up in what is a perfect sprinter's finishing row, but it's all too late, because Sifsov is going to give Team Columbia High Road another brilliant day out as we go into the second week of the Giro d'Italia. It'll be an interesting sprint for second place, but that's what it will be now as he salutes the crowd. Win number 2 in a row for Team Columbia High Road.
Well, you mentioned Pataki. I'm not sure Pataki's going to be there, Phil, because I think a lot of the sprinters have been caught out by the aggressive nature of the run into town. Team Columbia High Road are all over the front end of the main field leading this out.
Well, the man about to lead out, he's had a second and a first. He's going for another second now, and that's Boyson Hagen almost toying with them here. Is his tail up or what? He took that at a canter. And so Boyson Hagen gets the second place. De Luca was in there. He gets a small bonus. So all is not lost. And I think the other rider, Paul, was Michael Rogers. So they've had 3 in the first 4 today.
Well, I think Team Columbia High Road, as well as Team Astana, had a little bit of a plan on their minds this afternoon. They knew how tricky this race route was, and they knew it was a chance to create the surprise. They didn't surprise Danilo De Luca, but I'll tell you one thing, they seriously put him under pressure.
Well, there's a view of Bergamo from the helicopter, and the massive people down there watching the 100th Giro d'Italia, and they've just been treated to 3 riders from the same team snatching a place in the top 4 on the day, with Boyson Hagen in second and Rogers in third. There's another look at Konstantin Sifsov.
It's hard to remember what his name is, because if you look at any of the books,
misspelt,
it's completely misspelt in every book that you might pick up, whether it's French, whether it's Flemish, or even in English. It's so many different names because of the translation of the Cyrillics.
Yes, absolutely right. He's from Belarus, or Belarusia. And that was a great result for him. Just checking on his heart there, Paul. Make sure it's still going.
I think it is. It's probably going quite fast.
And you see, they spell it with a U. All the books spell it with a V. Sifsov or Susu. Boyson Hagen second. 21 seconds later. So he's pulling away all the time. De Luca, Rogers, Pelazzotti, interestingly enough, to Cunigo getting on the board. And Joaquin Rodriguez for Serra getting into 8th place. Royiger of Milram, the Austrian. He's finishing in 10th there. Popovic 13th. Scarponi completing there the top 15. There were time gaps, but important bonus today for Danilo De Luca. Basso at 21 seconds, always up near the front too. Best young rider Lofkis keeps that leader's white jersey. We'll check on the overall, but I think we'll see that De Luca has moved ahead a little bit with that third place today.
But I think what you'll notice there, Phil, reading through those top 20 places, there weren't too many sprinters up on the stage today, on a stage which looked theoretically on the face of it a flat day. And yes, De Luca has extended his lead in the overall classification.
Gone out to 13 seconds. Nothing in it, is it, after a full week of racing? Look at this, a minute covering the first 5 riders. Leipheimer holding on to 4th. Menchov is in 5th. Pelazzotti is 9th. Popovic is riding a terrific tour in 12th. Simoni we hardly see, yet he sits there just 2 minutes 9 seconds off the pace. Kevin Sealdryers holds on to 2nd place in the white jersey competition. As we continue to look at the top 22, Cunego just squeezing in there. They'd have probably only shown the top 20 if it hadn't been an Italian in 22nd, who knows. There's the killer. Things are good. He's even showing us now he can take risks and snatch win bonuses in the sprints.
Well, he is an aggressive rider. He's a rider for not necessarily all seasons, but definitely all terrains.
Onward we go, stage 19. We're heading into Milan now, and we're using the circuit the riders normally use on the final day of the Giro d'Italia. It's a ride scheduled to be 165 kilometres. 190 riders still survive, and Pedro Herrera is seriously injured in hospital. He's been put into an induced coma, but hopefully the news will get better as this race goes on. But there's the pictures for you to see, and I agree with you 100%, Paul. Terrific that they had this sort of equipment here on the race so fast.
Mounting a rescue operation like that is not an easy thing to do, and these guys obviously had it in the back of their minds that they needed to be ready for all kinds of circumstances.
Yeah.
And hats off to the organisation of the Giro, Phil, for pulling this off this quickly. And as you said, we hope that everything goes well with Pedro Herrera. I think the only reason they've put him into an induced coma is to allow him to recover slowly over a period of time.
Well, let's hope so here. Lance Armstrong there on the front row. Now, rumour is circulating the riders are refusing to race here. We're going to find out now, aren't we? Because they're saying the circuit, and in fact De Luca is telling the public what's going on.
He was talking to the public and trying to explain to them that they wanted to come out and ride the course, but they were a little bit concerned about the safety of the course here this afternoon. They're saying that there's a lot of parked cars, there's a lot of very dangerous corners. And I think what the riders have decided to do here, Phil, is have a neutralised race, but then to sprint it out at the end.
Well, we'll find out. I mean, we're scheduled to do 15 11.4 kilometre laps here, and the riders have not raced thus far because they're saying the course is dangerous. Now, I'm not sure the riders are right, because as you can see, the course isn't dangerous at all, and it's the same circuit which has been used all the time to finish the Giro in the past in Milan. And the organisers are not very happy. They're saying the riders has formed ringleaders who have persuaded the other riders not to race, but it looks as though they've started to race now, which is good. But you see, it's coming on the back of that crash yesterday of Pedro Herrera, and the riders are going to feel a little bit twitchy. There's the neutralised area on the other side. See, I don't quite know what's going on here, Paul.
Well, we're inside
half the race is race, half hasn't by the look of it.
Yeah, we're inside of a couple of kilometres to go. It's been decided by the race organisation that there won't be any times here, but this is the front split. This is the split now of the sprinters, and these men are going to sprint out the glory of the stage victory here this afternoon. I noticed Mick Rogers wasn't too far away from the front. Tyler Farrar was there, also Alessandro Petacchi. So this is the sprint for the stage victory, but this will not count in the overall classification of the Giro d'Italia this afternoon. There's Petacchi riding right up at the front in the Ciclamina jersey, making himself very solid in that points classification.
Well, the start was in the famous Piazza Duomo. We're now 1 kilometre to go to finish in the Corso Venezia. That's rather fitting, really. Road to Venice, as they now, and in this group, dare I tell you, Petacchi is here, and so too is Cavendish, and you can see Cavendish, little bit of a bump there. Oh dear me, there's a second one, just in case the first one didn't work. And now it looks as though we're lining up for the finish here. Petacchi is going to find himself in the hot seat here. Well, as Paul has said, there's no time gains here. The overall will stay the same. But there would be a prestigious victory if it were to come for Petacchi or even for Tyler Farrar, who is right in the thick of things.
Well, I can't believe that Pataki thinks he's going to ride away from the front of this group. In fact, he swung off, and he obviously realises today that he's not going to get himself the victory. But it is Team Columbia High Road, and there is the Manchman.
It must be a foregone conclusion now. The missile is launched, and this will be his first win of this year in the Giro. He got 2 last year. And dare I remind you, Columbia have just won the last 3 stages of the Giro d'Italia. They just can't go wrong. So that's victory then for Mark Cavendish, his first win in this year's Giro d'Italia. And he'll be happy even if it was a sort of neutralised race day.
Well, you know, Phil, a professional bike rider, and I just watched the acceleration of Mark Cavendish here. As a professional, a win is a win. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. It's making sure you get your wheel across the line in first place. He's got such incredible acceleration, Mark Cavendish, that even if you're in his slipstream, there's no way you can catapult out. Still right up there. I think getting 3rd place there was Tyler Farrar. So the American is starting to develop into a pretty serious sprinter too.
He is, and it was a sort of day off today. Well, it is a day off tomorrow because it's the first rest day of the Tour as the riders take a break, and then they will reopen with a massive stage, the longest stage of the Giro at 262 kilometres, and it's not entirely flat by any manner of means. So this is a very tough Giro at the moment, and I'm wondering if that's what really prompted this race today, and not just the safety of the course. Although there was a rumour too that many riders in the race wanted a Rabobank rider to win today in memory of the crash yesterday to Pedro Orillo. And, well, it wasn't to be. Cav's the sprinter. Cav got the win.
And that's the rest of the peloton of the Giro d'Italia. It says 2 minutes and 15 seconds, Phil, but that's not important on a day like today because it will not be counting. There you can see Cavendish getting himself the win ahead of Davis and Tyler Farrar and Matty Goss. With Alessandro Patecchi, they're saying he was 5th, but I don't think he was. I think that may well be a mistake.
I can't understand why he rode like he did. Maybe he didn't want to win because he thought the race was not a proper race today. But Cav didn't think that way. He won. And as we look down the whole list here, Mark Renshaw usually leads out Mark Cavendish, and he faded away to 18th on the line. Ian Stannard, another British rider in the race. Incidentally, this has got a record number of British riders in the race, which is a good sign for British cycling, I have to say. Steady on, Cav. I know it's a day off tomorrow.
Especially mentioning that's the Castillo, by the way, down there, the big castle in the middle of Milano. De Luca, with 13 seconds and 44 seconds over Mick Rogers, is starting to enjoy his Maglia Rosa at the top of the leaderboard. I have to say, though, looking pretty dangerous there. Chris Horner in 8th, Popovic in 12th. I think Team Astana have still got a lot of cards they can play in this race.
We've now done 1,500 kilometres, and the riders, I think we can say, have earned their day off before we resume on the road from Cuneo. Well, we all know Cuneo, Paul. It was a rest day in the Tour de France, and it nestles in the mountains right at the bottom. And then we raced to Pinerolo, a massive distance as we go back into the heart of Italy, really, at 262 kilometres.
A long, hard day in the saddle. It's very difficult to get here from France, and in fact, when the Tour de France came into Cuneo, they had to come over some pretty high mountain peaks to get there.
It's the high spot of the day today as well, as we search the climb of the Col de Sestriere, which is a ski station in Italy. We top out at 2,035 metres. It's the Cimo copy because it's the high spot of this year's Giro d'Italia.
It's going to be a little bit of a sort out once again, and the riders now starting to get really thick into the action of the Giro d'Italia. There you can just see the border of France there as the riders almost get to France and then take a left turn to go into Sestriere and over the top of that very famous ski resort.
I must say, on the original schedule they were scheduled to go into France and go over the Col d'Izoard amongst other climbs, but they seem to have changed their minds and they're staying here as we head to Pinerolo for the big finish today. This is going to be a tough day because of the distance, as we now see that the number 1 here, Stefano Garzelli, in the lead now. He's wearing the green jersey as leader of the King of the Mountains, but in fact he's not the leader at the moment. But I tell you what, if he keeps this up, he will be by the end of the day.
It's like Maurizio Soler in 2nd position as well. I'm looking for a long breakaway on a day like this.
Well, the riders here now are going to just watch each other and try and control things, because these seconds at the drop of a hat could become minutes today on roads like this. And Sestriere is a hard, tough climb, the Cimo copy. Then it's not the last climb of the day, because The real climb of the day, maybe not quite as hard, the Pra Martino, but it comes at strategically the place to attack, 15 kilometres from the finish. In the old days, well, not in the old days, in races gone by, we finished here, of course, at Sestriere.
Well, there have been great winners at Sestriere, only to mention a couple of names. Bjarne Riis won a stage of the Tour de France here on his way to taking the overall victory, and so did a certain Lance Armstrong. This is the man who's looking to build a lead in the King of the Mountains classification. He's now got the green jersey on his shoulders at Stefano Garzelli, and he realises on a big long day like this, it's a very strange competition, the King of the Mountains competition in Italy, because the points are very heavily loaded to some of the smaller climbs, and I've never quite understood why they don't have a similar type classification to the one they have at the Tour de France. But if you know the rules and you can play by them, well, you've got a very good chance of getting yourself the lead.
Well, the thick end of 7 hours today. Garzelli's got away on his own here, and I think personally he's gone to consolidate a proper lead in the King of the Mountains and pull that green jersey on for himself. At the moment it's owned by Danilo De Luca, but of course he's in the Maglia Rosa. Lockfist is still best young jersey in white, and Pataki, as we've seen, holds on to the Ciclamino.
Well, this is Giovanni Visconti there, joined there by his teammate with him as well, and that looked very much to me like Andrei Grivko, and there's a man that we would normally see in the Tour of California.
He's training. He's getting ready for the Tour de France.
It looks like a 12-point rack he's got on there.
Well, you've got to be careful. You could get shot up here because the Italians are great hunters.
And so look at that for a gap at 6 minutes and 23 seconds for Stefano Garzelli. He's looking this afternoon, I think, Phil, to try and get himself that stage victory that his supporter wants him to get.
But he's been away for an awful long time, Paul. Over the Mon Sensisio, we saw him go over the top there. It was Sola in second place. I don't think we saw it, but Armstrong went over that climb in third place today. Now we're heading towards Sestriere. We'll see what happens. There's the height for you, as I said, 2,035 metres. And then it's 11 kilometres in length, which is the best part of 7 miles, with similar gradients to the climb we had up the Alp the other day, on day 5 of the race.
2,035 metres, the maximum altitude. You can see the pacemaking being done at the front, and it's LPR, and that's the team of the overall leader, Danilo De Luca. I wonder what De Luca's thinking about with the big, long individual time trial starting to loom up on the horizon, because it's certainly not to his strength. And a 60-kilometre individual time trial can create massive time checks.
Very, very hilly indeed. A lot of riders are frightened of that time trial. That's 2 days away. Astana still leading in the team. Visconti, Andrei Grivko. Looks as though he's in a different world, this guy. I'm not sure he knows where he's riding at the moment, just getting on with it.
Yep. And strangely enough, that flag there, which you may not have recognised, was the Basque flag. And I'm not sure what they're doing up here.
I didn't recognise it, actually. I thought it was a pirate flag. 67 kilometres to go now, up to the finish. It's still, unfortunately, a long, tough ride to the top. We hit the snow line on Sestriere, dive off the top, and head to Pra Martino, which will take us over towards the finish. Once we're over the top of that, it's 15 kilometres down to the finishing line. I think these are the police in ski instruction team watching the race go by before they get on with the job in hand. Well, that's a nice picture. And there's still the pink jersey sitting there. Third wheel. He's riding a typical De Luca race. It's up to the others to attack him. They're not worried about Garzelli on the top left of our picture, simply because he's too far behind overall. He's hunting points for the King of the Mountains.
Well, the race situation in front of you there, top left-hand corner, Garzelli, the two chasers, Visconti and Grivko. Another group of riders down to the bottom left starting to form off the front. And of course the main field of the Maglia Rosa down the bottom right-hand corner. And that main field, Phil, is starting to take this climb a little bit more seriously, because they are stretched out into a big long line there with still De Luca very comfortably sitting in third position behind his men.
You know, Paul, this has been a wonderfully aggressive Giro this year, but there's no one man standing out, is there? I mean, De Luca's not a demonstrative leader. He's just making sure and keeping an eye on things. This man has been without doubt the most aggressive rider of the Tour. But really, he's got nothing to show for it yet.
Not yet, but what he's hoping today is to get himself a massive lead in the King of the Mountains classification and hopefully walk away with that. A little bit of art at the side of the road.
A little bit. There's a lot of it.
And, be nice
there's
to
Lance
get
Armstrong, look, in his yellow jersey. American flag in the middle there. I wonder what he's saying. Why is he wearing a crash helmet?
Well, why are they wearing crash helmets? Well, you've got to love the Tifosi.
I don't think if I was Garzelli, I'd want that.
Well, you've got to have some fun, I think, when you come out to watch a bike race. And these guys, despite the fact that they're having a good time out on the open road, they do appreciate the effort that these athletes do go through. This is a great performance, Phil, by Stefano Garzelli. I can only hope that on this occasion he comes up with a victory, because he has tried so hard.
Well, this is the action just behind here. Grifko, Visconti, in duo, in tandem if you like. And they're riding around 4 minutes back, I think. Oh, well, there's just to prove me wrong. They're riding 2:38 back of Garzelli.
It's 4.5 minutes back to the front end of the main field, but I think that may
thanks,
change.
Paul, you just saved me. Well done.
I think that may change next time we get an official time check.
Well, this is the Garzelli of old in many ways. Tribute there to Marco Pantani, who would have made short work of this climb. He'd have raced up it. 2 kilometres still to the top of the high spot. There's a big prize for this, because it is the Cima Coppi. It's the special prize for the high spot of the Tour. And Garzelli, fittingly enough, a former winner of this race, albeit 10 years ago. And now coming up here on what is the climb to the finish. You remember, Paul, Claudio Chiappucci, when we were in the Tour de France, winning alone up here in Sestria a few years ago now.
It was a long breakaway. I think it was a breakaway of
It
around
was a
about
very
240 kilometres. A phenomenal performance by Claudio Chiappucci. And in fact, the chase behind him almost put the end to Miguel Indurain's chances of winning the Tour de France that year. In fact, Miguel, if I remember correctly, actually cracked on the final ascent up to Sestria on that occasion. But he did keep the overall lead.
Yes, it was a Fausto Coppi performance, that, in the memory of the great Campionissimo. Charlie Wegelius in this group, and the long thing legs of Charlie right in camera now. New team for Charlie this year. He's going to ride alongside Cadel Evans in the Tour de France, hopefully.
Yes, a little bit of consternation amongst the Team Silence Lotto. They haven't had a very successful season so far this year, but in fact the team have been trying to force Cadel to ride events that he didn't want to, and they actually wanted him to ride at the Giro d'Italia. He was forced into riding the Tour of Romandy, and then he put his foot down and said, look, I am here to win the Tour de France, and I need to prepare in the same way as I've prepared over the last 12 months and the last 24 months. So please give me the confidence to prepare the Tour de France in the way that I want to. But it doesn't bode well for team morale, does it?
No. And we haven't heard too much of Cadel Evans either this year, but of course, if that's what he's doing, we'll hear more of him when this race is over. I'm sure of that. There's Lance Armstrong, looking a little bit better today. He's had a few rough days, but he's riding through them. And just behind him is the white jersey of Thomas Luckfist, the young man on Columbia High Road. They've got all of their top men up here. They've had a rest day now, don't forget, so they won 3 stages before the rest day came along. It would be a big turner for the book if they provided the winner today, but of course Michael Rogers could be the next candidate.
Well, I think Rogers will be thinking about the individual time trial as being the possibility of him pulling himself high up in the overall standings. De Luca, though, when you've got the form that Danilo De Luca's got, even when you're not a great individual time trialist and you've got the Maglia Rosa on your shoulders, there's always the possibility, Phil, of putting in a strong performance in the time trial. And a time trial halfway through a Grand Tour is not like a one-off time trial. And De Luca will be hyper-motivated to make sure he doesn't lose too much time.
Cutting your way through the crowd, it's always a sure sign you're not far from the summit of the Col de Sestriere this time around. There's the village name. It's a ski station, of course, and a very active one too in the winter months. The snow is still around. You can still ski up on the hills there. And Stefano Garzelli, fittingly enough, wearing the green jersey of leader of the King of the Mountains, which he isn't, but he will be when he goes over the top of this mountain.
I think that's why the long escapade is in store for this man this afternoon, because this is obviously something he wants to take away from the Giro d'Italia, the lead in one of these competitions. He certainly deserves something, because this man has been aggressive. He's been at the front of the pack on all occasions, and not at all afraid of a long raid like this.
And he's still riding away from the chasers and the main pack here. He's gaining all of the time, so it's not a question of slowing down. He's planning a long escape. I wonder if he can hold out to the whole day. I can't see him holding out the whole day, but we'll see. Once over the top, he's got a nice long descent. He's head to Pra Martino. And then once over that, it'll be a pursuit to the finishing line. These are the 2 chasers, Grifko and Visconti. Just tapping out the rhythm. They probably did this in training together as well.
Well, Visconti a former Italian national champion, moved across from Team Quick-Step. 6 minutes and 20 seconds back to the group of the Maglia Rosa. They're obviously not too concerned about anybody up the road in front of them, realizing that they can allow those riders a certain amount of freedom. And I know it's a long way to go, but 6 minutes and 20 seconds is starting to look rather good for Stefano Garzelli.
It is, and of course, because he's lost much more than that on the roads, he knows they're not going to mark him, so he's making full advantage of that. He's got clearly good form. We're into the ski chalets now, as Garzelli looks to me as though he's accelerating here rather than slowing down. He's doing extremely well as he continues on the way. And the Cimo Coppi, you see, that's the high spot of the Tour, which means he'll take a hefty prize in euros home. And 200 kilometres done, which means he's still got a fair way to go, but he's got just on 60 kilometres to go, about 39 miles to race. Long way.
The altitude once he goes over the finish line at the Cimo Coppi is 2,035 metres in altitude, and he will get maximum points here, and there are more points for the Cimo Coppi than any of the other climbs in the Giro d'Italia. This could lay down the foundations for him for an overall victory in this classification. But I think more than anything else, Phil, he would like to be able to hold on and try and get himself the stage victory. But that climb at 15 kilometres to go after a long breakaway like this could really become his undoing.
Well, he may start to decide whether he should. A difficult decision at the moment because he's still pulling away from the chase. But if things start to change, he may try to let the tandem up behind him and get 3 of them in the lead and then go for gold. Because I just feel a stage win is overdue for Stefano Garzelli right now. And this is a good result for his team, which of course won't be in the Tour de France. But he's certainly got his place here in the Giro d'Italia, and he's told us all about that. There's the top. And the Cimo Coppi, the highest point in this year's 100th year of the Giro, is passed. And Stefano Garzelli can add that to his palmarès as well. Here's the rides behind as they continue to climb. Seems a lot of work being done by Visconti here.
Yes, I think they're going to have to wait for the flatter part of the course to work together. Visconti is an extremely good bike rider. You don't win the Italian national champion by accident. But the main fielder are now starting to pull themselves apart. There's 1 or 2 riders will be fairly happy once they get up into Sestria, and just sitting there in 3rd place all of the time at De Luca, 4th place at Ivan Basso. Armstrong there, Phil, is riding right at the front end of the main field in 5th place and starting to look a lot more comfortable.
There's more salutations to the pirate, Marco Pantani. I just caught a glimpse of there. Incidentally, when Sivsov won the other day, we've since found out that he was actually only 15 miles from where he lives in Italy. So that was a home win if ever there was one.
Yes, a lot of riders based themselves around the town of Bergamo. Caught in no man's land. These riders have got as close as 2.5 minutes, and they've yet to get to the top of the Colle de Sestria. And I wonder what their time advantage is. It's an awful situation to be in like this, Phil. You're caught in no man's land. You're not going any further forward, and yet you're not going anywhere backwards.
Well, I think they are going backwards from Garzelli himself. Whether they're going closer to the peloton, I don't know. But the Garzelli has gone over the top some time ago now, 1.5 minutes plus, and they're still a long way from the summit, so they could be 4 minutes behind here.
Very easily. This is the next group on the road, Charlie Wagela. It's nice to see Charlie having a free ride. He's suffered to find his form in the first 10 days of the Giro d'Italia. He doesn't really have any responsibilities in this year's Giro. And the past, he's been a rider on Team Liquigas, where he's been looking after guys like Franco Pellizotti. But here I think he's just enjoying his Giro d'Italia as preparation for the Tour de France. And if he makes the selection for the Tour de France, which I expect him to do, he will be really heavily counted on by Cadel Evans to support him in the big mountain passes.
Well, Charlie Wagela is hardly known in Britain. He lives all his career over in Italy. He is a good climber. He packs the big tours in. He very, very rarely abandons them. And the teams like him along because he is a superb domestique in the mountains. And I'm sure he'll be down for the Tour de France alongside Cadel. But he loves Italy. This is where he comes from these days.
Well, I think Cadel, in fact, is going to have a very difficult time picking his squad for the Tour de France this year, because a lot of the men in his team are starting to fall by the wayside with illness and injury. And unfortunately for him, once again, despite having tried to strengthen his team through the winter months, it may well be difficult to pick 9 strong men.
Visconti powers on. The clock passes 3 minutes since Gartelli started the plunge to the valley below. Grivko sits behind him, and we've no idea how far it is back, but it's around 3 minutes plus to the peloton down there, which is climbing this quite sensibly, really. They're not putting on any extreme pressure because all the stars, well, no, not the stars, all the favourites are still in this group.
Counting
the
the
stars
efforts.
probably up front right now.
Yeah, counting the efforts that they make, because that's the most important thing. If you make an effort, it's got to be an effort that pays. Into the heart of the ski station now, and it's Visconti now sitting at the back, number 91, allowing his teammate to do all of the pacemaking. A long raid by these guys, getting their team a little bit of extra television coverage, but they're not getting themselves anywhere close to Stefano Garzelli. In fact, on the climb of the Col de Sestriere, they've lost themselves 1.5 minutes to the lone Italian.
So, timed over the top, Grivko and Visconti at 3 minutes 57 seconds. Time to take on the liquids as they now begin the journey down the mountain. This is the next group along. Dario Cioni is in this group as well. I don't think we've mentioned him before, but he's here. Number 35 there is Felix Cardenas of Barlow World. It's going to fall to him to try and win a stage now, if they can.
That's Cioni in third position there. Formerly a rider on Team Silence Lotto, and he's jumped ship as well, further weakening the squad of Cadel Evans going through to the Tour de France. These guys are now looking to pick up 4.5 minutes, and really everybody's, apart from Garzelli, who's riding a strong race at the front, Phil, everybody else seems to be falling away.
Well, that's Dario Cioni there wearing number 93, and he's not going to do any chasing of anybody just now. Cardenas dancing at the back here. Charlie Wegelius not showing any worry at all. There's an indicator there, 5 fingers up, meaning 5 minutes to the leaders, and it's probably about right. The clock says 5:04. It'd be 5:30 maybe, a bit nearer, as they go up towards the top of the climb. Points, of course, for the King of the Mountains, but nobody really challenging in that competition. And Garzelli today is building. If he can hang on to La Pra Martino, he's won both the big climbs so far today. He's going to be a big leader in the King of the Mountains. Looks like Cioni's gone over the top there, just ahead of the rest. Lovely blue skies now as they start the journey downhill here, and it'll be interesting to see how far back that peloton is, but they certainly give Garzelli a day out today.
Well, it's a good move by Stefano Garzelli on a day when I think a lot of people feel we're just pretty happy to stay comfortably back in the main field. A long day in the saddle, a hard day in the saddle, but there's still so many more difficult days ahead in store in the Giro this year.
Well, one thing about cycle racing is the route gives you a lovely view of the country, and I know a lot of people do take note of the route so they can go on holiday there when the race isn't involved. But today it looks absolutely picture postcard. The snow's going away on the right shoulder here for Wegelius and Cioni and Cardenas. Shortly it'll start to plunge. Here comes the peloton. Oh, what a shame, they've taken the clock off the screen, so we haven't a clue.
I would say we're looking at still around about the 6 minute margin for those riders.
All of 6 minutes, yeah.
And these guys, I think, are just happy to be staying together over these mountain passes. We will start to see an acceleration a little later on, but I'm not sure who's going to do it, because the situation, Phil, is that none of these riders are really dangerous. That's Cardenas in the red. The Seramente Dici Giovanni rider in here is Jose Serpa. He's actually, although he hasn't had much success out of the Giro so far this year, he's proved himself to be very aggressive and in good form, and always fairly close to the moves.
Well, just looking there at this little group now, that's a fairly small peloton. Oh, is it? It's getting a bit bigger now, isn't it? As the camera pulls back, it's quite a large peloton actually. And so that it just shows that they're not really too worried about the situation. They're of the opinion, and there's the gap, 6:23, of the opinion that they will start to pick these people off. The Pro Martino is reported being quite a difficult climb. It doesn't go anything up to like the height of Sestriere, but it's coming at a very good place to try and win the race at 15 kilometres to go. Cardenas in the entering group. Here we go back to the tandem of Grivko and Visconti.
Well, these two riders now, having gone over the top of the Col de Sestriere, have got to get themselves organised. Garzelli there, Phil, pulling himself up a nice 20 points for the Cima Coppi. Grivko 15 and Visconti 10. And as you said, he will now be pulling on in his own right the lead in that classification. It's very difficult to win classifications like this in the Giro d'Italia or the Tour de France, because you have to be aggressive every day. You've got to go out every day in your mindset to say, I must get points. Whether you're a sprinter or whether you're a climber, you've got to battle at every one of these points on every individual stage.
Well, this is not the Queen stage, as they call it, the most difficult stage, but it's a toughie today for sure. Garzelli is on his own, picking up the points. There's one more scoring points on the way if he can stay away. We'll see if they pick him back. It's still a little way to go, and they've started to descend quite quickly now, which I suppose might shake them up a little bit. But it's a lonely old life for Stefano Garzelli out front. 6:23 ahead. What's that, about 2 kilometres probably on the road at the moment?
A ski jump.
Yes, there's the 90 metre on the right and the 120 metre on the left. Did you know I knew about ski jumping?
Yes, I did know that you still enjoy getting yourself cold in the winter months, especially in the years of the Olympiad.
I tell you, I stood on the top of the ski jumps at Winter Olympics, and it's an horrendous sight to look down that ramp. Although, in effect, once they come off the bottom ramp, they're rarely higher than about 9 feet above the ground. It looks like they're flying through the sky, but
well, they are at 150 kilometres an hour.
Yes, but they're not that far above the ground. But how on earth they ever get the courage to go down there, I do not know.
What always amazes me is how they get the courage to do the first jump. And
well, they reckon that at 4 or 5 years of age, you jump off a chair onto a cardboard box, and then you build up from there. Well,
you have to get a big cardboard box then.
A big cardboard box. Well, as you build up, you get a bigger box, of course, yeah, and a higher chair. And the one in Austria, you jump out over a graveyard, and so the last thing you see before you hit the ground are all the tombstones. I'm not sure I want to do that either. There's a little information on Garzelli. As we said, he won this race back in 2000. He's had some good places since. Fully deserves what he's getting today, because if we had a most aggressive prize of the race award, as such, they do score points for such a prize, then he would be the man to get it.
They also have a classification here at the Giro d'Italia for the number of kilometres in the breakaway, and I'd have to say this man is probably not far from leading that competition. But in Italy, there's always a little section of cobblestones somewhere in the mountains, and as he goes around this corner here, you can hear the bike rattling.
Well, thank heavens they're dry. Let me remind you, this is the longest stage of the race, as well as one of the hardest stages with the mountains. Fenestrelle is where he's just racing through at 262 kilometres today. It really is a long way. And there's the beautiful fortified walls here of Fenestrelle, as we're off hunting for the race. Now, we've lost the peloton at 6.5 minutes, 2 kilometres back of Garzelli, and those little groups of riders in between.
This almost looks like the Great Wall of China.
I was thinking the exact same thing, but believe me, it's not a patch on the Great Wall of China, which is unbelievable.
But this has also been built in this part of the world to protect the invasion coming from France and Italy into this part of the world. And there were very, very many of these fortified areas throughout the Alps to protect the passageways, which initially were trade, but also after that it was to prevent the passage of aggressive armies.
Well, it's working at the moment because an Italian's in the lead and they're not catching him. But it might change because there's still a fair way to go to the finish. We went over the top of the Cimo Coppi, yes, Sestriere, leaving about 60 kilometres to race to the finish. But it's still a little bit of some undulations to come. That's the fort of Fenestrelle, which is pretty obvious, really, if there's Fenestrelle down below.
But
it really is a magnificent example, I have to say.
It must have been pretty difficult bringing the concrete up.
Oh, yes. Leave that to somebody else, I guess. Here we are now, back with the green jersey. He's settled into this rhythm of his, and he's getting on with it. He's just hoping there's the eyes of the... What is it on his head, Paul? Panther? Cat?
The cat. It's a leopard.
Oh, without his spots. These are the two teammates here, and they're at 2:28, so they are actually catching him. They've closed down from 3:57 at the top of Sestriere, and it might be, you know, that he's not going to try to hold those two off, but the three of them together could go well towards the finish.
Well, if he wants to survive on a stage like this, he probably his body is just about ready to ask for some assistance to come from behind. And he's not going to lose too much if he cruises on the descent for a while and waits for those two riders to catch up with him, because on the long valley road, Phil, before the final climb of the day, which summits out at 15 kilometres to go, he might be happy with some assistance.
Well, Garzelli, a year younger than Lance Armstrong, by the way. He would have been 36 years of age. Well, he will be 36 years of age during the Tour de France, but he won't be riding the Tour de France. And again, he's won plenty of races. 33 wins in a career which began 1997. So this is, his 11th, 12th, 13th professional season at the top. And as a past winner of the Giro d'Italia, he's making sure the Italians haven't forgotten him yet. As we go back to what is the next group behind the leader, Cardenas, Cioni, Seppa and Charlie Wegelius.
It's Wegelius just sitting on the back of the group in the Silence Lotto jersey. Riding himself into form he hopes for a little bit later on in the season. It really is. It's incredible what people built in the 17 and 1800s when you think they didn't have the technology around to assist them in their civil engineering feats. But certainly that fortified castle there is a very commanding view in the whole of this area.
It's so typical of Italian countryside, and it really is a slice of history as well. The Maglia Rosa group are also closing in. 4 minutes 50 now. He's slowing down.
Yep, he's lost a couple of minutes. And don't forget, Phil, Garzelli is a very serious and intelligent tactician. And just having a look at this corner here, I wonder if somebody had a hard time getting around there.
Charlie's in trouble. Charlie's got his back wheel.
He had a bad line. He had a bad line around that corner.
Do you know what? I think the problem was Cardenas was also in trouble, and he was putting Charlie off. He couldn't work his line out.
Yes,
anyway, they didn't fall.
He didn't fall, and that was the important thing. Cardenas has come to the back, and in fact I just heard a little bit of a squeal of the brakes there. One thing to be wary of on a longer downhill section like this is using your brakes too much, because one thing that does tend to happen is you can start to heat up the rims, and if you heat up the rims then you start to warm up the cement that sticks the tyres on, and very often you'll see that these tyres start to roll on a big mountain stage. The neutral service vehicle has come out, and I have a feeling when we look back we may well see the two chasers coming up there to join this man.
Well, we didn't, but I think you're right. They're there somewhere. Here they come through the field, the ISD boys. And they're continuing. That's now Visconti in the front. Grifko has taken his wheel just for the moment.
These two riders have been a long way in this bike race and not really looking at getting very much out of it for the moment, because they really have been stuck in between the front and the back of the race. The main field now, Phil, now that they've got the Col de Sestriere behind them, I think are now starting to take this a little bit more seriously and starting to pull the race back together. The fact that they've pulled almost 2 minutes off the time of Stefano Garzelli in the space of not much more than 10 kilometres indicates now that they're starting to think about the stage victory.
Absolutely. They're heading for the Pro Martino climb, and rumour has it it's not very pleasant. Well, sitting in the back there, you've got Visconti, former champion of Italy, but the current time trial champion of the Ukraine is this rider here, Grifko. He's won that title 3 times since he turned professional in 2005, so he can turn a handy pedal when he's all alone. That's the pursuit at the moment, and just keeping up the chase there is Andrei Grifko. And I think, you know, the way it's looking here just now, these two riders know that the pursuit has now started behind, and you can tell by that long line of riders as they start to come through the S's, the gap I think is going to come down pretty quickly. It's not looking good now for Garzelli, I have to say. This is the group just ahead, which includes the Cardenas is there, and also Dario Cioni, Charlie Wegelius, Serpa. Those are those 4 riders. If our camera just pulls back and swings left, we might see the chase coming.